The story begins with someone saying they never imagined it would take 17 years to return to Korea. In 2 containers, names were displayed: Yu and Jin. Looking at the vases, a man says it's been a long time since he last saw his father and mother. In his thoughts, he admits there was a time he wondered how much a human life was worth. 17 years ago, 10:32 p.m., in the Gulf of Aden, a cruise ship begins to sink. The boy was extremely desperate as he looked around for his parents. The storm was growing more intense by the second. The child kept screaming, searching for his relatives. He tried to swim against the strong sea currents. At that moment, the boy notices 2 bodies floating. Getting closer, Dongwoo realizes it's his mother. Looking closer at the body, the boy notices there are various wounds scattered across it. Frozen, he's left paralyzed, unsure of what to do in that situation. Even so, the child keeps trying to wake her. However, a large wave comes toward them, causing the protagonist to start drowning. Desperate, the boy realizes he needs to get to the surface before he runs out of air. Opening his eyes, he sees several bodies scattered beneath the ship, growing more and more shocked by the entire scene. Realizing even his secretary had been shot to death, along with the head chef, the captain, and the ship's bodyguard. Suddenly, he sees a body nearby and realizes something horrifying. After all, sinking further and further before him were both his father and mother. But suddenly, someone pulls him up. An old man asks if Taha is okay. Seeing the boy is still alive, the man asks if he can move. Crying, he's overwhelmed with joy to see his grandfather is still there. Suko says it seems the heavens haven't completely abandoned them. The protagonist tells him that his parents are below them, but his grandfather says he knows, yet there's nothing they can do. He asks his grandson never to forget the words he's about to say, declaring that no matter what, the boy must inherit the Chianhu Group. With that, the old man hands Taha a pen and tells him that by bringing it to lawyer Kim, the man will automatically know how to help him. He also must remember not to trust anyone and return to Korea as quickly as possible to meet the lawyer. Even so, the protagonist begs his grandfather to at least save his father and mother. The man begins removing his life vest. The boy doesn't understand what he intends to do with it. Surprisingly, the old man puts the vest on the child, explaining that they had already been shot before the ship even sank. Inflating the vest, Suko tells Taha to go and survive at all costs. And so the man pushes his grandson away, just as another giant wave approaches them. The storm caused lightning to tear through the clouds non-stop. After some time, all the chaos turned into an agonizingly peaceful silence. The boy was still floating on the water, opening his eyes, clearly exhausted. The boy is left speechless when he notices something casting a shadow amidst the sunny sky. The source was a large cargo ship passing through the area. Someone smiles as their face is obscured by the light. Taha was very scared and confused after being rescued. 2 guards armed with rifles were shocked to see the child still alive. One of them starts yelling for his boss, saying the boy is okay. Hearing a language different from his own, the protagonist realizes they're Italian. The man kept trying to communicate with his superior. Someone seems to give a call. While one of them complains about their boss being there again, the chubby one asks if the child can understand him. However, Taha notices a tattoo standing out on the man's neck. With that, the protagonist realizes that given the tattoo and the weapons, these people aren't ordinary. Suddenly, the group's leader jumps down from where she was. Startling him, the woman lands in front of the boy, asking how he ended up on her ship. Her subordinate warns that the child might not speak their language. Annoyed, she orders someone to bring a translator to help them communicate. Taha just watches them, a little nervous, not knowing how to react. But to the woman's surprise, he speaks in Italian, saying he was on a yacht that got attacked nearby. With that, she asks where this impressive child came from. He explains that he's Korean and that during a storm, his family's ship was invaded by armed men who killed his parents and grandfather. The boss says that, apparently, after being shipwrecked, he ended up on the Salerno family's ship. Confused, the boy wonders what the Salerno family is. She starts laughing at the situation as an Asian kid speaking Italian claims to have come from the Gulf of Aden in the Middle East. Pulling out a knife, the woman says it's shameful, but she can't believe it. Pointing the blade at the boy, Regina asks if there's any reason she shouldn't just throw him back into the sea. The boy doesn't know what to say to avoid that. Nervous, he tries to think of something as fast as he can. So Taha shows the pen given to him by his grandfather, explaining that he's the grandson of Suko, president of the Chianhu Group, and the son of Suyuk, Suko's 3rd son. And that because of that, instead of tossing him overboard, they could help him get in touch with his people and reap some benefits. Annoyed, Regina asks if he's really talking about the Chianhu Group. She notices that this is the most successful conglomerate in South Korea, and apparently that brat is part of the family. Because of that, the leader orders her subordinates to check the news related to Korea. While both of them search for something related to what the boy said, the woman asks if the child speaks any other languages. He informs them that he speaks Cantonese, English, Japanese, Arabic, Spanish, Hindi, and Esperanto, claiming to be fluent enough for basic conversations. One of the men says he found some news from Korea. Regina smiles, realizing that this is fascinating. She says that if the boy wants to contact someone from Korea, he can ask them. But the boy remembers what his grandfather had said, telling him to look for lawyer Kim, since the man would know how to help him. The protagonist states that he needs her to contact someone outside of his family, in Seoul at 1:12 a.m. Someone answers the phone, asking who it is. The person says they're calling from abroad, notifying that they will only speak speak in English, asking if he is lawyer Kim. Regina says that from the photo she sent, the lawyer must have realized she has the precious grandson of the group with her, asking if she should send him back to Korea. However, the old man questions what she means by that. She makes an offer of $10 million, saying they should meet in the Panama Canal for the exchange. However, the guy claims he's too busy to negotiate, so he makes a counteroffer offering $1 million. Putting his drink down on the table, he picks up a microphone that was nearby, swearing and stating there'll be $1 million. While dancing with some people, the man says he'll pay $1 million if she kills Taha, ordering the woman to kill the boy and send him video proof within the next 5 minutes, so she'll receive the $1 million as a reward. Regina asks what would happen if he didn't send her the money after the deed. While everyone watches, the lawyer assures her that he only needs to tap his phone 3 times to send such a small amount. Besides that, if she doesn't do it, Kim says he'll reveal to the press that they were responsible for the attacks. Ending the call, he tells his superior that there's no need to worry, as he's contacted some mercenaries close to them. Thanks to that, the Chianhu Group now belongs entirely to them. The boy was still paralyzed by everything he had heard. After all, that man wants him dead within the next 5 minutes, making him even more frightened. The woman says that apparently that's just how things work. Because of that, her reason for keeping him alive is gone. Terrified, Taha starts begging them not to kill him, but Regina claims that he's no longer a member of a wealthy family. Besides, they're probably already preparing his funeral, asking if the boy knows what that means. Claiming that this is quite common in her world, people kill others to take their assets and achievements. Horrified, he complains about why his uncles and relatives are planning to kill his entire family. Both guards talk among themselves, saying that their boss won't kill him, even though she's having fun provoking him. Trembling, he can't believe he survived the sea only to die at the hands of people he doesn't even know. Wondering what Chianhu really means, and if it was worth killing his parents and grandfather for the positions they held. Suddenly, someone enters the room saying they're under attack. The guy informs them that 3 patrol ships and a heavily armed military helicopter have appeared. She asks if it's Interpol, but the man says no and explains that they're ignoring all radio transmissions. Regina doesn't understand what's going on. After all, it would have to be someone crazy to do something like that. Looking at the child, she finally understands the culprit, realizing that those Koreans must have contacted those people to find that boy. Out of nowhere, Taha stabs his right hand with a pen. No one understands what the child is trying to do. He says that the Chianhu Group will never give her the money. Furthermore, the woman has nothing to gain from killing him. The Salerno family's trade leader is surprised to see the boy's reasoning. The protagonist begs to join them, claiming he will be loyal for the rest of his life if they help him get revenge. The woman wonders how he learned the Salerno insignia. The crazy woman starts laughing hysterically. Excited, Regina tells Matteo to get ready because the show must begin. Before leaving, she asks if the boy understands the weight of his words, asking if he truly wants the power of revenge, even if it means staining his hands with blood. Remembering that his grandfather had said that no matter the means, he must inherit Chianhu at all costs. Determined, the protagonist simply nods in affirmation. With a smile, she says that barking dogs rarely bite, but even so, this was quite interesting. The crazy woman kicks the door open, telling them to follow her, claiming that from that point on, the boy's life belongs to the Salerno family, so he will live and die for them. Therefore, he must watch closely, because that is his future. Taha truly observes, frozen by what he sees. With that, 17 years pass and he finally returns to Korea. The boy asks his father and mother to protect him as he takes his revenge. However, he seems surprised by something, quickly turning to look behind him. He jumps to the side as several shots hit the area. Several soldiers had arrived and fired many rounds at Taha. Getting out of some vehicles, someone asks if those insects don't even know how to aim. A Chianhu Group security guard and manager tells them to look for the senior administrative director, stating that he doesn't know the man, but he must be insane to think he could kidnap a Chianhu director. One of the subordinates tells the manager that they found the car they were looking for. He tells everyone to be careful when opening the trunk, as the director is still alive. While ordering them to check his injuries, a large explosion occurs. The guy gets angry at the audacity of placing a bomb there, but suddenly half of his men have their heads decapitated. When he finally looks back, the rest of them are also killed, extremely quickly. Taha had defeated them all in an instant. The man notices a small cut on his waist. Nervously, he sees that it was thanks to the protective vests. Trying to attack the protagonist, the bald man calls him a little insect. However, the boy tells him not to think he's the only one with something to say. Quickly, he lands another strike on the back of his opponent, launching an attack that splits him in half. As he collapses, Jang wonders what that was, unable to understand how that man managed to do such a thing, complaining about who that monster really is. On the other hand, the protagonist didn't seem pleased by it. He begins to clean his daggers as he walks away, heading toward a luxury car, and grabbing a bag that was in the back seat. He then walks to the trunk, Wincing, the director begs Taha to let him go, claiming he was only following orders. This was the former lawyer Kim, the one who had ordered his death, stating that he had no reason to kill the chairman. However, the boy opens the bag and throws several bills on top of the man, saying that this is the 1 million. After all, that money probably was never delivered to him. Frightened, the man asks what money Taha is talking about. However, the director remembers that day. The protagonist takes a lighter from his coat, stating that thanks to the fact that he died that day. As he throws the lighter, he says he was reborn. With that, Kim begins to burn alive. Coldly, Taha just watches with indifference. After that, he calmly picks something up. Putting the cigar in his mouth, the protagonist mentally tries to speak to his parents and grandfather, apologizing for having taken so long, pleading with them not to worry and just to find peace, saying that from that day on, he will carry all their pain. After some time in the middle of the city, a modern building stood out among the others. The protagonist was moving quickly, determined to do something. Some men questioned where he thought he was going as they prepared to shoot to stop him. However, the madmen simply killed the two of them quickly. Even so, Taha didn't seem bothered by the setback. He continued walking calmly through the hall. Seeing the situation, a man sat on the floor, terrified by the scene. Frightened, he asked the protagonist who had sent him there. The man said they were part of the Chianhu Group, claiming that he wouldn't be safe after doing all that. While cleaning his blade, Taha said that this was Holdings, a private security company subcontracted by Chianhu. Its main function was protecting directors and board members outside of working hours, all across the Gangbuk area. During their downtime, they stalked journalists or people who reported on Chianhu. They kidnapped, assaulted, and even killed them. In other words, they were contract killers. The people who had been captured were completely devastated and desperate. The protagonist simply threw one of his daggers to the old man. After that, he told everyone to use it to free themselves and to make sure they never saw him there, so that the bindings were cut. The three were still confused about everything that had happened. The old man got up and brought the knife back to the boy. Running, they thanked him as they left. On the other hand, the company member ordered everyone to come back. One of the escapees looked back as he heard the man complaining. The fat man asked who he was, wondering if Taha was part of their family. Removing his mask, the boy said no and explained that he just wanted to have a slightly more private conversation, saying that he needed the schedule of everyone on the board, from the directors to the president. The man said he didn't know, and even if he did, he wouldn't say. His family and himself would be dead if he did. The protagonist said it looked like he valued his life, stating that he'd start with his eye and that when he felt ready, he should raise his hand. In a building, a large screen outside displayed news about a celebrity. Meanwhile, several people sat on stairs, experiencing homelessness. Due to the heat, even a cicada lay dead on the ground. Breaking the silence of the place, someone seemed to be in a hurry. As he walked, Taha noticed that his cigar would draw too much attention, wondering if he should try Korean cigarettes. The avenue was very busy at that time. He said he had finally returned to Korea and that so far, everything seemed normal. But he noticed his country was going crazy, with various ads for loans and insurance being broadcast everywhere. A politician was giving a speech claiming he would use his power and influence to eradicate the epidemic of crime and violence, declaring that from that day on, his war against crime would be publicly declared. However, his speech was interrupted by someone pointing a gun at him. It was said that in 1990, the president was killed during his campaign against organized crime. Since then, no one had opposed criminal groups, turning the country into a place consumed by violence and money. The boy walked the streets deep in thought. Thus, the Chianhu Group allied with criminal organizations to bribe the media and suppress competitors. They invested in entertainment and sports, making the population lose interest in politics, so much so that even a dog could become a candidate. Even so, people kept saying that the Chianhu Group was a company that benefited the people. Taha entered a store calmly. The clerk welcomed him. Both he and another guy asked for a pack of this. They stared at each other for a moment, unable to understand how such a coincidence could happen. A bit irritated, the protagonist decided to change his choice. However, they both had the same idea and asked for a plus at the same time. Once again, they looked at each other suspiciously. Awkwardly, the woman said that unfortunately, they only had one pack left. Taha sighed deeply, clearly annoyed by the situation. As he left, he asked the clerk to give the pack to the other man, saying he'd be fine without it. The man kept staring as the boy walked away. After the man made his purchase, he found the protagonist outside, who politely asked for a cigarette. However, he asked if the boy couldn't go to another convenience store. But Taha explained that it had been a long time since he was last in Korea, so he wanted to try it quickly. The guy gave up trying to avoid him. As he handed over a cigarette, he said he couldn't believe someone wanted to try that tasteless thing. As they walked, the man said he'd get a fine if he smoked there, so he recommended waiting until reaching a smoking area. Observing him, Taha admitted that when you've been in the Mafia for about 17 years, a simple glance is enough to assess a person. Assuming that guy was strong, just as strong as the ones he faced abroad. He wondered if people like that were common in Korea. Also leaving, the protagonist declared he hoped not to meet him again. After some time, that same man arrived at the place where the protagonist had committed the massacre. While smoking, he calmly observed one of the bodies. Kneeling down, the guy took a closer look at the corpses, noticing they were all fatally wounded by stab wounds from a blade similar in length to a sashimi knife. Putting out his cigarette in the pool of blood, he picked up his phone and called his employer. His boss reminded him he had already said not to call at that hour. The man asked if he had a meeting later. He advised that the best choice would be to cancel the appointment. After all, the assassin who killed director Kim might be after him. The man, sipping his wine, calmly asked what was going on. His subordinate explained that he had gone to the security company and found them dead. From the injuries, it looked like a solo attack. Besides the assassin not being ordinary, it was very likely he knew exactly where the meeting would be held. But his boss said that an emergency family meeting was a tradition in the Chianhu Group, asking if his subordinate really believed someone would invade a meeting known only to family members. He said he sent him so he could hunt that man discreetly. Lost in thought, the man realized the wounds from that knife reminded him of something, remembering the protagonist asking for a cigarette from his hands as he took the cigarette, stating that if he doesn't use knives, there's no way he could have gotten all those scars on his palms. With that in mind, Hunmin asks his boss if there's anyone in his family who's good with knives. Laughing, the man says those people can barely slice an apple. Besides, everyone is present except for the children. So he offers another 100 million for Hunmin to guard the place and ensure its safety. Leaving the office, Hunmin says he'll go to the meeting. Still, he asks for the security to be reinforced. Annoying, his boss just says he understands. Handing his phone to another employee, the man mutters that lunatic is just a gangster and still thinks he can give him orders. As he walks down the hallway, he straightens himself up and gets ready for the meeting. Arriving at the meeting, he greets his boss and asks when the president arrived. Talking on the phone, Hunmin informs the leader of his gang that he plans to help the Chianhu Group for one more day before returning. However, he's called a traitor. Instead of getting angry, he asks if his boss has been drinking. He explains that they offer him another 100 million for the job, claiming only an idiot would turn it down. Also, there seems to be a dangerous assassin on the loose, yet he notices the protagonist hiding in the alley. Quickly, Hunmin ends the call and says he'll explain the details later, looking toward the boy. Feigning casualness, he asks if one cigarette wasn't enough. Taha says that finding someone of his caliber near the site of the incident isn't a coincidence, claiming it was a good idea to follow him. Smiling, the man says it's been one hell of a day. First someone bums his cigarette, then follows him around. He admits he can't believe he didn't notice him, saying it's the first time something like that has happened. Walking toward him, the protagonist says that before they begin, he'd like to ask one thing. He asks whether the man is working with the Chianhu Group. On the other hand, Hunmin asks if he wasn't listening to the conversation, saying he's just helping them temporarily. At that, the boy gives him a deadly stare. He draws the two daggers from his back, and then immediately clashes his blade against the enemy's weapon. They exchange glances, sizing up each other's skill. Thus begins a frenzied exchange of blows. However, Hunmin jumps into the air, rising above the protagonist. He swings his weapon to strike. To his surprise, his bat is sliced into pieces. Seeing that, the gangster wonders when that even happened. What's more, Taha had vanished in the blink of an eye. Then his opponent grows anxious as he realizes something. The positions had flipped, and now the one in the air was the protagonist, who quickly prepares to end the battle. With a touch of fear, Hunmin admits that Chianhu got themselves into serious trouble this time, wondering how they became targets of a monster like that. Taha falls toward his opponent, wielding his blades. The gangster doesn't know what to do now that he's without a weapon. The protagonist lands a blow, knocking the man to the ground, already getting ready to leave. While wiping the excess blood from his knife, he heads for the exit of the alley, leaving Hunmin's body lying there. However, to his surprise, the man asks if the boy is joking. Even wounded, he still wasn't dead. He asks if, even after all that, the protagonist is really just going to walk away, stating that he'll regret letting him live. Sheathing his dagger, Taha explains that he has his own principles, warning that if he were with the Chianhu Group, he'd already be dead. That the man should stay out of his way, otherwise the next time he hears him helping his enemies, he won't be so kind. Besides, if he can't accept the fact that he was spared, he can just take it as payback for the cigarette. Still lying on the ground, Hunmin smiles as he realizes that a simple cigarette saved his life, admitting that this time it was very cheap. A little later, a car speeds down the street. Obviously, the protagonist was the one driving. For some reason, he seemed both irritated and in pain. Seeing a wound around his waist, Taha says that at least the cut wasn't deep. While driving, he says that at least he can still move. He steps on the gas. He only needs 32 minutes. He says that finally the revenge he planned for 17 years will come to fruition, with only 32 minutes to go until its completion. Once again, the boy is consumed by memories from his childhood. His mother begs him not to look, while his father uses his body to shield them both from the bullets. However, extremely scared and worried, he runs toward his father. The man asks what she's doing, telling his wife to grab the boy and run. So his mother picks Taha up so they can try to get away. But then the ship starts shaking violently. Even the assassins struggle to keep their balance. His mother puts the boy outside the door. She tells her son to find a life vest and jump into the water. With a smile, Hujong says he must survive. One of the men says it's annoying and reminds them he said to detonate the bombs only after killing everyone. Looking in his direction, the protagonist is surprised they speak Korean. The man's face was completely covered with a mask and goggles as he aimed at him and his mother. Hujong panics and tells Taha to run as fast as he can. The boy starts running frantically through the ship. Terrified, the child was overwhelmed with fear. He runs, gasping while crying uncontrollably. After that earlier explosion, part of the yacht was already on fire. But then, another bomb goes off. Because of this, the ship starts to sink even faster. Back to the present in the secret annex in Gangbuk. The CDO of the Chianhu Group's department store asks if they really found the person who killed director Kim. However, Jae-sung says it was probably a crime of passion. After all, the director had 2 mistresses in secret. His sister says that's disgusting, but he replies that it's ironic coming from someone who has several lovers. Jong-won asks what director Kim's role was in the company's share quota, stating they'll need to make an announcement soon. But suddenly, someone slams their hand on the table, catching everyone's attention. The man tells everyone to be quiet. Guho tells his son to speak. Chang says 2 employees were found at the scene, but they didn't have much to say and were dismissed. Also, it was confirmed there were no other witnesses. The man says they were just subcontractors, so they don't know much in general, and the police ensured the incident wouldn't leak. Suddenly, his father throws a glass of wine at his head. Everyone at the table is left confused by what just happened. The old man asks where the Ojong gang is. Cheong was visibly irritated by that. Even so, he smirks and says they don't seem to know anything, even sending Huimin, their 7th in command. Still, the old man smashes a bottle on his son's head. He says that even after 24 hours, he hasn't found out who the killer is or where he is. Instead, he brings news about a gang. He says that if the former president and Suyak hadn't died 17 years ago, someone as incompetent as him would never have stepped foot there. Along with the wine, the man's face was now completely covered in blood. Regardless of what happened, Chum assures them he'll find him within the next 12 hours. The rest of the family sees that neither of them has changed, and it bothers them all. Juvia asks why he's so harsh with the eldest. After all, he's still his firstborn. However, her brother says it's not out of hate, stating that it's definitely out of fear. Grabbing a cloth, Chang immediately asks his subordinate for his phone. While wiping his face, he searches for something on his phone. He asks where his men are. His assistant says they're already ready. The guy says it's exciting, saying he's eager to see how big this entrance will be. On a highway at night, the protagonist was heading toward his goal. Taha admits he's always kept an eye on the Chianhu Group. 17 years ago, the day he was accepted into the Salerno family. Even before his grandfather's funeral, Guo became the new chairman, taking over all the shares and seizing the position. Taking advantage of the chaos from the failed war on crime and forming alliances with factions like the Ojong gang to grow his power. Even though that was the beginning of the Chianhu era, they still hold meetings with official members during moments like this. This had been an old family tradition since the days when his grandfather was still alive. Neither the system nor the traditions had changed. Everyone had killed to reach their positions within the hierarchy created by Suko, willing even to murder their own parents and him. One of the guards was monitoring the cameras, wondering whose car that was approaching. He asks his superior if the members are expecting any guests, but this is denied. He reports that there's a car heading toward the front gates. Also, it doesn't seem to be slowing down. Seeing that it's probably some lunatic, the head of security orders the barriers to be raised. With that, some containment stakes begin to rise from the ground. However, the protagonist accelerates even more. After all, he doesn't need tricks up his sleeve to take down people who have been protected their entire lives. Taking off his belt, Taha says there's no point in making elaborate plans. His car's front end is completely destroyed from the impact. Even so, he leaps out with his blade in hand. He states that the only thing he hopes is that they haven't forgotten about his family, so he can say it to all of their faces. The security guards look at the intruder in fear. The boy quickly takes down all of them in a single attack, and declares that he's back. Confused, they ask what that loud noise was. They question why it keeps getting louder. Moreover, it seems to be coming from the front gate. Unlike the others, Chum looked confused but confident. His uncle tells the guy to go over there and check out what all the commotion is about. However, surprising Jong-won, he says there's no need. All the guards who were inside the hall point their weapons at the family members. The oldest of the sisters asks what's going on. Guho, irritated, asks if they're seriously trying to mess around at a time like this. However, his son calmly stands up while wiping his mouth. The old man asks if he's really going to go through with it. With a smile, Chum claims that his father always expected this to happen sooner or later. That was the reason his father was always angry with him, because he was afraid he'd end up like his grandfather. With a terrifying look, the madman says that after all, the one who killed his grandfather and uncle was him. Meanwhile, the protagonist passed through the gates, saying that his revenge was finally about to begin. The guards point their weapons, asking if this is some kind of ambush. Jae-sung asks if his nephew has gone mad. They question what the guy is doing, claiming that he should never point a weapon at his own family. However, Chung states that he's not doing anything. Still, they keep cursing him and saying it's clear what he's trying to do. Looking at one of the guards, Jui asks if he's really going to betray them for that kid. Even though he was her personal bodyguard, Yangmin apologizes, making it clear he's abandoning her. Even his second son's bodyguard says it's nothing personal, but the rewards for betrayal were just too tempting. On the other hand, one of them says that if they had at least gotten a raise, none of this would be happening. The only person who remains silent is Chang's own bodyguard. The guy's father says he can understand the others betraying them, but he doesn't understand why his own son would do this. He asks if his own guard will really turn his back on them. Junsu simply watches, without moving or saying a word. The man says he isn't paid to protect him personally, but rather the Chianhu Group. Jong-won asks if the guards really think they'll gain anything by doing this. He tries to keep threatening them, but a gun is placed against his head. His own bodyguard kills him in cold blood. With that, the two remaining brothers become desperate and beg for mercy. However, gunshots echo through the hall as blood spreads everywhere. John hands the cloth to his subordinate, walking calmly toward his father. The old man admits he already expected something like this to happen someday, ever since the day his other son died of acute leukemia, and shortly after that, his wife asked for a divorce without wanting a single cent. Trembling with rage, he says he always suspected Chiang was behind everything, and because of that, always kept his distance. Spinning the gun, the guy says that for someone who ordered the deaths of his own father and brother, Guvo talks too much. Putting the gun to his head, the man asks the old man who it was that sent his father and brother out to sea. He asks what else he could have done. If he hadn't killed everyone, Suyuk's son would have inherited the presidency, and they would have never made it this far. The psychopath comes closer and asks why his father never declared him the future successor. The old man becomes more and more terrified by it all. On top of that, his son was staring at him with a frightening look, while Google claims that if he had done that, the boy would have killed him even sooner. He doesn't deny that he would have killed him earlier, but says he's a little upset to hear it out loud. His father assures him that even if he kills him right there, he will never become president. But Chung interrupts, saying he already knows that. After all, power transfers through political or violent coups aren't recognized. That's a clause made by the committee. Because of that, the guy says it's a shame. He explains that the person making all that noise outside isn't one of them. The president asks who it would be. As he shoots his father, he explains that it's a young master who waited 17 long years for this day. The guards were firing at the intruder. They tried to surround him since the assassin didn't have a firearm. The protagonist remembers that the Central Security Force is made up of those who protect the executive members, so they hold high-ranking positions. Therefore, he assumes the bodyguards will be much stronger than the ones before. He stops running for a moment. Changing the direction of his charge, the boy says this won't be a problem. He starts moving toward the enemies in a zigzag pattern to dodge the bullets, using one of the guards' bodies as a shield. Desperately, the man begs them not to shoot since he'll get hit. But the guards don't care and open fire. Leaving one of the security men terrified, his weapon is cut in half. In an instant, Taha is able to defeat them all quickly. The leader orders his men to evacuate the president as fast as possible. However, the protagonist throws his dagger at the guy. Still, one guard manages to intercept the blade. A man with glasses asks why they're making all that noise, questioning if they can't do this quietly. 3 department heads show up to try to stop him, but that little group is simply ignored as the protagonist kills the others. One of them says he can stop him alone and tells his comrades to stand back. However, even though he's extremely strong, Taha is struggling with the wound he received earlier. With each passing minute, the wound seems to be getting worse. Snapping back to reality, he realizes his opponent's fist is already dangerously close to his face. So, his only option is to block the attack as he's thrown backward. He manages to regain some balance, but unexpectedly, a shadow looms above him. The man asks how he dares attack that place, and worse, gets distracted while invading his territory. However, the protagonist agrees and says it's no time to be distracted by wounds, launching a strike straight at the man's chest, startling his companions as they witness the sudden defeat. Quickly, Taha throws his remaining dagger at the 2 who are left. Neither of them looked as confident as before. Surprisingly, the intruder had already landed a hit on the man who had defended against his ranged attacks. Cholo can barely keep up with him with his eyes. Grabbing one of the knives he had thrown earlier, the protagonist slices off the head of the last department head. Thanks to that, he had defeated all the outside guards. As he walks for the entrance, he spots his second dagger, picking it up calmly as if no one else were there. Wiping off the excess blood, he admits it took longer than expected. Even so, the place is eerily quiet. He wonders whether they escaped through a secret passage he didn't know about. Without knowing what awaits him, the boy begins to walk through the house. Finally arriving at the room where everyone was dead and only Chong remained seated amidst the blood, he welcomes him. He also congratulates him for making it that far, asking if he wants to sit down to catch his breath and rest a little. Seeing all that, even a protagonist doesn't quite understand what's going on. Observing Jae-sung's body with a bullet wound in the middle of his forehead. The same goes for his aunt Ju-hui. Even Jong-won had met the same fate. The current president was also dead. Standing up, his cousin says he's in better shape than he expected. claiming that modern assassins should take better care of themselves. Formally greeting him, Chiang asks if he recognizes him. On the other hand, the protagonist simply says the man's name and mentions that he's Guho's eldest son. Laughing, the madman says he doesn't remember them being so close that he called his father by his first name. Suspicious, Taha simply observes that strange behavior. His cousin says he stayed there because he thought it would be disrespectful not to greet him, and also because he needs to explain a few things, informing him that if he doesn't want to sit, they can remain standing, since it won't take long anyway. Chiang asks if the boy remembers that day 17 years ago, the day he was rescued by the Italian Mafia. Interrupting him, his bodyguard says that the helicopter is ready, saying they should leave soon as it's too dangerous to stay. Annoyed, the guy says he had asked her to only call him once he was done talking. However, Taha is suddenly surprised by something, clearly showing he wasn't expecting that at all, saying he recognizes that voice, the voice of the one who killed his family 17 years ago, remembering the man who pointed a rifle at him and his mother, the person who complained about the early explosions while laughing beneath a mask. Extremely angry, Taha asks if he was that worm. The madman begins trying to hold back his laughter, saying there's not much left to say, telling the protagonist to stop talking to him so casually. After all, it's making him feel like killing him. Charging forward, he dares the guy to try, since his goal from the beginning was to wipe out the whole family. But his cousin starts saying there's a saying that goes, when in Korea, act like a Korean, telling him to change his speech. Annoyed, Taha starts trying to understand what exactly is going on. Realizing that Chiang knows he survived 17 years ago and also knows about him being a Salerno assassin, he wonders why he waited until his return minus 17 years after the event to make his move. Try and get the boy's attention, the guy asks him to really listen, saying he's about to begin. Only then does Taha realize that the madman doesn't want to pull off a coup. He wants to blame him for the attack, claiming he led it so that he can successfully take the presidency. Jeonhyuk tells the young master that they don't need introductions. The protagonist simply raises his dagger. The bodyguard starts shooting at the boy. However, the assassin manages to deflect all of them, using his blade to redirect the path of the projectiles, quickly closing the distance between them. However, another guard lands a harsh blow on the boy. Even though he knew there would be more, he couldn't predict the strike. Unlike the other, the man introduces himself as Chianhu Park. Avoiding being cornered, the young master swiftly moves back, stopping in front of his opponents. Wasting no time, Jeonhyuk begins shooting him again. Admitting that he's faster than the rumors claimed, he could dominate track and field if he went pro. His partner blocks the protagonist's escape. Even, he gets a little nervous about the situation. Juno asks if flexibility is the young master's secret to success, quickly launching a frantic series of attacks. Taha realizes they are strong, completely different from the ones he fought outside. However, if it weren't for that injury, he might even be able to fight them without issue. Noticing that Chiang seems to have let his guard down, and that this might be the only chance before guard Jumsu arrives. Besides, if the woman beside him is Daein, there are 3 guards in the room, yet there were 4 members at the meeting. Unexpectedly, his thoughts are interrupted as Juno prepares to attack him. Thanks to the reflection in his opponent's pupil, Taha identifies the 4th guard. Yaman was holding a sword, preparing to strike him from behind. To the surprise of them both, he vanishes between the two. They can't understand how that's even possible. Kneeling on the ground, the protagonist realizes this must be the last one. The guy complains about being reflected, blaming Juno, but his companion says that if it were that easy, the boy would already be dead. Reloading his weapons, Jeonhyuk says he can barely imagine the bonus they'll get if they kill that guy. So both he and the guard with glasses use their weapons to shoot at the assassin. Seeing that situation, Chung says out loud that it's hard to follow a fight that involves both range and close combat, noting that they were trained specifically to defeat him, since rumors of his inhuman speed circulated through Interpol. Admitting he even thought about killing him with a bomb, the story of him dying in a battle would bring him greater fame. Juno positions himself in front of the boy, intending to stop him from escaping. Jeonhyuk says it doesn't matter how fast he is. It's all over now that Taha has been cornered. With that, the guard uses his brass knuckles to try to land a blow. The protagonist didn't have much to do, only watching the attack coming at him. His cousin thanks him for the show while smiling malevolently. After being struck by the enemy's fist, he slammed against the wall, causing it to crack entirely. Flashing back to 4 years ago, Regina was scolding him and asking what the hell that was, saying she told him to take care of the traitor, not use him as paint for the walls. Even she started vomiting upon seeing the scene. Still yelling, the woman says that with his speed, he could have done it silently. Recalling the day they saved him, she says she understands his anger, since Lorenzo always treated him well, but killing someone like that will only spark a thirst for revenge. That's why, as his mentor and spokesperson for the Salerno family, Regina asks him never to do something like that again. However, the protagonist didn't seem happy or remorseful. Still, he says that this way, people will never forget. Confused, she asks what Taha is talking about. He explains that if they kill traitors silently, their deaths won't serve as examples, saying that everyone needs to know what awaits them if they betray the family. Rumors must spread in exaggerated and distorted ways, thus gradually reducing the number of traitors, because otherwise it'll always be an endless battle. The woman asks if he chose the path of violent deaths to prevent greater bloodshed. Aside from where he was standing, everything around him was stained with blood. She says it's absurd for such a thing to come from a boy standing in the middle of a river of blood without a single drop on his face. Interrupting her own thoughts, Regina says that apparently being an assassin really doesn't suit him. Back to the present moment, Juno freezes as a glint appears in the middle of his chest. The guy starts coughing up blood while that glint keeps shining. Even Xiang and his bodyguard are surprised by it. The protagonist had slashed the guy brutally. With a threatening look, he faces his other opponents. Frightened, Yaman quickly points his weapon. However, in an instant, his eye is pierced. After being struck, the man admits to himself that they underestimated this guy. Besides his speed, he's strong. Moreover, those who truly saw his skills never lived to tell what they were like. Even while showing all that ability to keep fighting, Taha was even more injured, and his wounds were getting worse. Jung-hyuk was desperate. No one told him his strength was this immense. However, Junsu appears and calls out to the woman, asking her to take the master outside, claiming he'll follow soon. Seeing that, the boy is surprised, noticing that his cousin is trying to escape. He shouts the guy's name, slashing both of Jung-hyuk's weapons and rushing toward the elevator. Xiang leans his head out to see what's happening. With uncontrollable rage, Taha demands to know where he thinks he's going when their standoff isn't over yet. However, blocking the entrance stood Junsu, who greets the young master. Taha is surprised to see that the president's bodyguard had arrived. Still, the boy leaps forward, demanding he get out of his way. But, surprisingly, the man stops both blades with a single hand. Preparing to punch him, the older man notes that the boy has grown a lot, admitting he's impressed. With that, the man lands several blows all over the protagonist's body. Almost all of Taha's ribs end up fractured. Consequently, Taha begins to spit blood from all the damage. Crushing the blades with his hand, Junsu declares that, unfortunately, this will be his end. Landing a punch in the same spot, he sends the assassin's body flying. However, the old man is surprised to see that his clothes have been torn. Looking at his subordinate, he orders Jung-hyuk to get up, saying he knows he's fine. Nervously, he admits he thought it was over for him. The old man warns that the building will explode soon, telling him to grab his partner and leave. Lying on the ground was the protagonist, who appeared to be dead. Reaching the rooftop, the president's bodyguard walks toward the helicopter. Xiang asks if he completed the job. The man confirms and says he'll blow up the building as soon as they take off. Junsu says he'll handle the preparations for takeoff, but the man tells him to just keep the door open and get them in the air. Putting on his headset, the bodyguard warns that they'll fly straight into the helicopter, so he suggests closing the door. However, the psychopath insists he needs to see it, claiming he waited too long for this moment. With that, the helicopter begins to ascend as Xiang stands in front of the door. He calmly watches as he smiles, cursing and saying he always hated that house. As he complains about how annoying and hypocritical his family was, Daeun and Junsu exchange looks. Suddenly, the madman remembers when the protagonist said things weren't over between them. With a grin, he calls him a poor child. After all, he lived for his revenge and ended up facing the same fate. He asks if they knew that the word family comes from the Latin famulus, meaning slave. Holding the detonator in his hands, he asks everyone to witness how he will change Chianhu from now on, completely destroying the mansion of those secret meetings. Inside, Taha was lying on the floor, unconscious. Still dazed, he realizes that the sound is from the helicopter and acknowledges that it's all over. Changing his mind, he declares that there's still time. Meanwhile, Xiang watches the explosion. Throwing the detonator down, he says they really wrap things up with a bang. As the protagonist jumps amid the flames, the lunatic says he's going to lie down a bit since it's so hot, ordering his subordinates to head straight to headquarters, but Taha strikes him with his knife. However, he only manages to hit his calf. His cousin starts screaming in pain. Both guards rise, alarmed by the situation. Furious, his cousin calls him an insect and demands to know what he's doing. The protagonist asks if he really thought he could escape after destroying so many families. Because he's hanging from the knife, his weight causes it to tear Chang's leg even more. As the blood gushes, Taha says he will kill him no matter what. Daeun grabs her weapon and asks her master to step back. However, the lunatic takes the pistol and says he'll do it himself. Pointing the gun at his cousin, Xiang asks if he really thinks he's the hero of this story. Insisting that he is the main character, he calls him a thug and tells the boy to die. As he falls, Taha manages to avoid the fatal shots, though he is hit elsewhere. As a result, he goes into free fall. Immediately after they close the helicopter door, his bodyguard calls the hospital, reporting that they have an emergency. The protagonist was falling from an absurd height. Luckily, he crashes into a tree, slowing his descent. Even so, he hits his back against the wall of the house. Then he lands on a truck, rolling down near a stream. Someone passing by on a bicycle ends up seeing the scene. The person stops and looks toward him. It was one of the victims Taha had rescued from the security company earlier. The guy notices that it was the man who had saved him. Given the state of his body, he wonders if he arrived too late, but then he hears a plea for help. Looking again in Taha's direction, he tries to look more carefully. The protagonist was asking for help, barely able to stay conscious. Even extremely wounded, he kept saying it wasn't over yet and kept pleading for help. On a messaging app, someone had sent an 11-minute voice message. The person was requesting backup, stating that the guy had refused the breathalyzer test 3 times and kept insisting he was Congressman Kim. That man was typing something while listening to the audio of former director Kim using his influence to threaten the police. He asked someone if that voice and name were clear enough. The person questioned where the director was at that moment. The young man replied he was probably at the police station giving a statement and would soon head home. His partner seemed a bit hesitant, so the guy offered 200 and asked if that was enough to catch a big figure from the majority party. For a while, the only notification was that the other person was typing. But to his surprise, the counteroffer was 30. Naturally, he was extremely frustrated, claiming that it was worth way more. However, the buyer said that it wasn't even election season, so no one cared about those old men. The guy said it seemed like the buyer didn't understand the current market, explaining that a regular person was worth 1x, a celebrity 10x. But if it was someone related to Chianhu, the value was 1,000 times higher. Taking a deep breath, he realized everything revolved around the Chianhu. After some time, the radio reported an accident at a tower. Not interested in that information, the guy turned the radio off. He was getting ready to leave. But instead of heading to the street, he was in a restaurant. The owner was already getting things ready to open. The woman warned the boy that he'd be late if he stayed there. The boy said he was fine and would make it on time if he went by skateboard. So she told him to eat something. However, if he did, he really would be late. Suddenly, someone appeared and said that this chef should stop playing games. A guy entered saying the owner should sell the place before they stopped being polite. Baksu asked the boy if he agreed with him. The lady questioned if they were already there in the morning to collect money, claiming that delinquents really knew how to stay busy. She told the boy not to worry and to head to school, saying nothing would change anyway. Even though he was irritated, there was nothing he could do. Grabbing a knife, the thug said she shouldn't say those things so quickly, claiming she was already 2 months late. The guy told the woman to sell the building and gather as much as she could, stating that their interests aligned. She said she'd never sell that place for crumbs, telling him to at least learn basic arithmetic before coming back. Meanwhile, the kid was at his station waiting for his transport. Exhausted from it all, he just sighed, unsure of what to do. He admitted that in his district, the fights over redevelopment were out of control. With disputes between groups like Chianhu and Ojong, it was a very neglected area, turning into a lawless land where small gangs tried to exploit the people living there. People like him and that lady had nowhere else to go. Upon returning, the restaurant owner had several bruises on her face. Still, she just asked him to clean the tables. Worried, he asked her what happened to her face. A customer said he saw some Yaburi men leaving earlier, visibly upset. The man said they were probably trying to pressure people into selling their buildings for redevelopment. She told him not to worry and asked the kid to put his backpack in the back of the shop. The boy did as she asked, but angrily threw everything aside. Frustrated, the boy muttered that he really needed to do something. He remembered that before his father passed away, Dr. Youngsuk was a close friend of his. She had once been a professor at a medical school, but crossed paths with the Ojong gang. Still, she took care of him. None of it was her fault, just like with the restaurant, even if her food was good and the dishes always well made. Interrupting his thoughts, an idea came to his mind. He recalled what that guy told him on the phone. After all, someone from the Chianhu Group was worth 1,000 times the normal value. So the boy messaged him again. The guy asked if he had any news. Even though he was nervous, the boy told him everything he knew, sending some images that proved his story, claiming that one of the security guards of Chianhu's directors, Juhak, was hooking up with Mio, the leader of ladies. Still very afraid, he waited for the buyer's response. Not quite understanding, the guy asked what the boy wanted with that info, but quickly remembered the values mentioned earlier. The next day was a sunny Saturday. Some men in suits approached and asked if he was gray. He confirmed, but as he looked back, he immediately realized he shouldn't have done that. The guy punched him in the stomach, knocking him out and taking him to a van. As he was being taken, Gray finally understood why they paid so much. After all, it was just bait. The boy was tied up and sitting inside the security company's office. The leader said that at first he thought he was just an annoying informant, but in reality the kid was very good. He asked where he got those images, wondering if his father had hidden them before dying. The guy asked if the brat was Jingbu's son, one of the people who reported Chianhu. Seeing that, Gray gave a slight smile. Taking off his watch, the guy asked if he thought it was funny. Then he punched the boy in the face, asking if that was funny too. Still hitting him, the man asked if he had more files like that one, hurting the boy more and more, throwing him to the ground and cursing him non-stop. Even so, Gray couldn't hold back his laughter and kept laughing. Still laughing, he said the old man looked like a piece of trash he used as a toilet, claiming that if he had more, he would have already sold them. The fat guy ordered his men to bring the hammer. The man threatens to rip out all of the boy's teeth until he understands that this isn't a game. But luckily for him, one of the guards calls the old man. His subordinate reports that a central dispatch order just came in, stating that they need to provide security for an emergency meeting. Standing up, he says that if it's really a level 1 priority, that means they should go right now. So he orders them to tape the boy's mouth and lock him in the room. Kicking him inside, the fat man says he'll be back to finish this later. Inside, there was already an elderly man along with a woman. Still on the floor, he says his father was a fool. Driven by his ridiculous sense of justice, he didn't even try to expose Chianhu. He just died in a car accident with his mother. And instead, he should have just gone into hiding to live a peaceful life working for for them. No matter how significant the information his father had, as long as he remained defenseless, it would all be in vain. However, they begin to hear the guards asking who that person was. Gunfire and screams suddenly mix together. Even the leader panics, shouting for his men to kill the intruder. Everyone starts to panic, not knowing what's happening. Suddenly, the large door in front of them bursts open. The protagonist hands them a knife and tells them to use it to free themselves and get out of there. Then he assures them that none of the three ever saw him there. They don't fully understand what just happened. They start to leave, thanking him for the help. That's when the boy looked around and behind him one last time. Staring at the bodies, Gray wonders if that man did all of this by himself. Sometime later, he finally returns home. Young-suk asks what happened to his face and where he had been all that time. She gets more and more upset, demanding he explain, but Gray says nothing happened. With a smile, a girl tells her not to worry. The boy heads to his room. The woman watches him, clearly concerned. As soon as he enters his room, he collapses onto the floor. Still shaken, the boy wonders if it was the Ojang gang that sent that man there. After all, they had guns, but even so, he killed them with just 2 knives as if it didn't matter. While opening his drawer to search for something, the boy keeps wondering if that guy was sent by someone. Closing it, he figures there might be something more behind all of this, suspecting it might be a revenge plot. He remembers the moment the department head mentioned his father, questioning if he had more files related to Chianhu. The boy admits that no matter how important the information is, it's worthless unless you have the power to use it. As he accesses the files, Gray says he needs power. The man says it's practically impossible to find him among those folders just by his face. But then he remembers something one of the subordinates said when he mentioned an emergency meeting. With that, he remembers the level 1 priority code, accessing the Chianhu Partnership Directive. Seeing that it was also noted among his father's folders, he says he finally found it. It stated that in the event of a significant incident, the executive members would begin a meeting at the Bugek Mountain Annex. However, even with all that information, the actual location wasn't provided. Giving up, Gray says he doesn't care anyway. He doesn't even know that guy. Even so, he says not everyone who considers Chianhu is considered by them in return. On the police radio, the massacre Taha was committing is reported, with multiple confirmed victims. The extent of the damage is unknown, but it's confirmed that the mansion was secretly used by Chianhu executives. Getting up, the boy realizes it can only be that man, so he decides to go there, grabbing his bike and leaving in the middle of the night, even though he doesn't know who that person is, nor his reasons for doing all of this. The best decision he can make right now is to go there. That's when he saw someone hanging from a helicopter. After following the sound of gunshots and screams, the boy went in the direction where the person might have fallen. However, upon seeing him in that state, he thought the man was dead, seeing that blade in his hands and his cry for help. He notices his face as he declares that it's not over. Gray is shocked by all that strength of will. Sometime later, he arrives home screaming for his adoptive mother. As always, she was working. Alarmed, the woman asks who that is and what happened to him. Desperate, the boy begs Young-suk to save that person. Time passes. The protagonist is already better and asks who he is and why he was saved. Gray introduces himself and says he buys and sells information, claiming that he's been looking for something specific lately, saying that he hoped to find someone like him. Doubting his words, the protagonist asks if someone like him could really be a data broker. The boy continues, saying he's more like a wholesale information dealer, always providing great intel to his clients. Besides that, his main clients are other info merchants and the financial sector of Uedo. He explains that he nearly died after falling into the Chianhu's trap, thinking he was about to meet a fellow informant. Taha asks if the boy was one of the hostages from that day, wondering if he was able to recognize him even after seeing him just once. Gray confirms he did, saying he wants to win an award for the youngest data broker or something like that. With that, the protagonist starts looking around, noticing the things the boy owns. Then he asks how many days he's been there, and the boy tells him it's been 4 days. The man wonders if he really slept that long. Still, he calls for Gray and asks if this supposed broker could find someone for him. But unfortunately, he has to admit he was bluffing, saying it was hard enough just finding him, and he'd need another broker for that. Moreover, finding someone requires a lot of money, and above all, he'd like to ask for something in return for saving him, since he spent a lot on medical expenses. Ignoring all the rest, the protagonist asks if what the boy's trying to say is that he can't find him. Gray asks what the man would do if he couldn't. However, Taha just turns his back and says it's fine. Grabbing his jacket, he thanks the boy for his help and says he'll erase him once everything's settled. The boy asks if he's really leaving just like that, but the protagonist says he still has matters to take care of. As a final piece of advice, he tells the boy not to interfere or try to stop him, since this won't end with just one kidnapping. Scared, Gray just sits back down in his chair, but soon he smiles, realizing that apparently that's how things work. After leaving the boy's room, he notices a strong smell of pork and wonders if that place is a restaurant. Surprising Taha, Taha, Young-suk says the boy shouldn't be up yet. She says he was hit by 22 caliber bullets, making it possible to stitch him up, but his fractures aren't kept still. He'll be lost even if a doctor helps him again. Politely thanking her, the protagonist says she must be the doctor who saved him and assures her he'll repay her. But she says she's not a doctor, claiming she owns a gukbap restaurant, and asks him not to come back there if his stitches open. So the protagonist heads outside. Looking around, he wonders if this is a market. Ignoring these things, Taha picks up a phone. Answering it, he says it's not his phone. Gray explains his broke, and until it's fixed, he can keep that one. He says there should also be a box in his pocket with earbuds, asking the protagonist to use them. Taking the device, Taha is surprised by its size. The kid explains about the battery, connection, and mic, also warning that the first button on the shirt is a camera. The protagonist says he was very clear, claiming the boy will die if he gets involved with him. However, to his surprise, the boy asks why he's exterminating the Chianhu family. The kid asks him not to be surprised. After all, even though Korea is a mess, something like that wouldn't go unnoticed. The whole country went into chaos while he was unconscious, with news saying the entire Chianhu family was a victim of terrorism. Taha asks why the boy wants a favor from him, even knowing that. The kid explains that in that neighborhood there are a lot of power struggles between Ojong and Chianhu to gain redevelopment rights. Besides the two gangs getting closer to that area, there are many other issues making life harder. Even so, since the protagonist's problem seems more urgent, he'll help, but in return, he wants help in the future. Until everything is resolved, they can't lose contact. But if Taha refuses, he'll have to hand him over to Chianhu. Obviously, the man doesn't like that at all. However, he says he wants to see what the brat is made of. Sometime later, he's already walking through a busier area, heading to a fancy building. Taha had gone to a kind of bank, where he had a private vault. There, he opens one of the drawers looking for something. Gray admits he didn't know a company like that existed in Seoul, asking if they could be tracked through it. But the protagonist explains that these companies work based on trust, so they would never consider making deals with other businesses. He says people usually go there to hide jewelry or sins, making it the safest place possible. Seeing this, the boy realizes that this guy is apparently prepared to go undercover. He gets thoughtful, watching Taha's actions. Confused, since the assassin didn't have any firearms and a knife wouldn't be enough. Many drops of sweat start to fall to the floor. His body was getting heavier, making it hard to keep a neutral face and also feeling like he was being stabbed. Feeling the same as when Ray Juning used to beat him. The protagonist asks if the boy found the guy he asked him to look for. He asks if the CEO of the company Night Move, Piljong, is the broker who helped him enter Korea. Apparently, he worked in Europe, became famous in the field, and is now looking for a smuggling ship to go to China. Great explains that border pressure increased after the man did what he did to the Chianhu family. The protagonist tells the boy to announce to the merchants that a ship is available with rates 10 times higher than normal. His companion asks what he'll do when he finds that guide, wondering if Taha wants to leave with him. Putting his knives back in their sheaths, he says he's going to kill him. The reason he almost died that day was because someone leaked his information. The only one who knew where he was Piljong. Coldly, the protagonist says that traitors must die. Later, in a church, he admits he doesn't care if it's a longtime friend or not. A hooded figure enters the chapel. Approaching the confessional, the man calls for the priest and asks if they could talk. Using a specific phrase, each brings water to their own mill. Piljong complains about how stuffy that place is, questioning why they're meeting in a sacred location. He says it might not seem like it, but even so, he's a devout Catholic. However, the so-called priest only asks where the money is. The informant reaches into his bag for the money. Showing the 100 million won, the man says it would have been more profitable to exchange that for $10,000. Changing the subject, Piljong says he needs to know something. After all, the country is full of frauds like him, so he can't trust the priest. Gray warns that there are many men outside. Suddenly, several people enter holding melee weapons. The man says it's very strange that someone managed to get a ship that not even he, a person who works with information, could find. Claiming that the rule in that line of work is clear. If someone lies, they must pay with their life. Admitting that the protagonist must be ready to face the consequences of his actions. But leaving the man startled, Taha says he could hardly believe that he wouldn't recognize his own friend's voice. Piljong can't believe what he's hearing, saying they had assured him they had killed him. The man quickly realizes there's no point in talking. Even so, he claims he was a fool and should have suspected something as soon as he noticed the password was an Italian expression. Trying to explain himself, his friend says he lost everything because of gambling, ended up in Korea, and racked up massive debts in Chianhu's casinos. As he reaches for his weapon, Piljong tries to convince him that he wouldn't have said anything if he'd known they would try to kill him. But before he can finish his sentence, Taha bursts through the confessional wall and drives a blade through his throat. He panics, trying to stop the bleeding in his neck. The men outside ask what's going on. Through the camera on the protagonist's shirt button, it was possible to see the man's body and all the blood that had spread. Obviously, Gray is terrified. Despite all his injuries, enough to make most people barely able to walk, Taha was still going to fight. Leaving the booth, the protagonist says that Piljong surely ordered them not to bring firearms to avoid conflicts. The psychopath tells everyone to pray before they begin, asking them to inform God that they'll soon be with him, stating that it doesn't matter whether they're hired hands or subordinates of his friend. Gray didn't know what to do seeing all that. The protagonist says that just the fact they're armed with bats and knives is enough for him to consider them a threat to his life. In that case, there's no reason for him to hold back. They ask what that guy can even do with a broken arm. One of them charges to strike, saying that apparently there's money in the confessional. The protagonist simply prepares to take them down. The boy admits that the assassin's broken arm isn't the only issue, as he has fractured ribs and gunshot wounds. However, he moves smoothly as he dodges the attack, and with a single motion he pierces the back of his opponent's neck, already shifting to attack the next one. Again, he dodges the blow while slashing the man's throat. Quickly, he throws a dagger into another man's neck. One of them runs in to try and stab him. However, John Wick uses the sling to immobilize the enemy. In a flash, he lands an elbow strike with his other arm. With that, Taha had defeated everyone who came at him in an instant. He explains that when someone gains the upper hand in the beginning, it's hard for the opponents to keep their composure. Considering all that money waving in front of their eyes, it was obvious adrenaline would take over. Even so, among them, there was still someone else. Someone had something they shouldn't, but some of those guys charge at him. The protagonist takes a simple step forward and, in doing so, disappears before everyone's eyes. Using his speed, he rushes past the men. Obviously, his target was to eliminate the one most capable of hurting him. The two who had stepped up to attack him are completely confused. Even Gray can't understand what just happened. With that, the weapon drops to the ground after his rush. He calmly starts turning to the others, asking who's next. Despite all that chaos outside, the church didn't seem affected. In the parking lot, only one car was parked at that hour. Gray was inside, unable to believe what he had just seen. Supposing that man doesn't even seem human, since even with a battered body, he still did all that. Suddenly, Taha calls out to the boy and asks if he can hear him. The protagonist asks the kid to go to the confessional and retrieve a bag of money, since he no longer has the strength for it. The brat asks, frightened, what he's talking about, but the man says he knows he's in the area. After all, he warned him about the men before they even showed up. Gray doesn't know what to say in that situation. Even a bit nervous, he simply accepts the mission. So the boy gets out of the vehicle and heads toward the church. With that, the boy walks up to the door. A bit hesitant, he opens the doors. In front of him, the church was completely stained with blood and bodies. Sitting on one of the pews was the protagonist. He says he's up there. Even more nervous, Gray begins to walk. Arriving at the booth, he notices the body of the protagonist's former friend. He feels a bit sick after all. There were bodies scattered all over the place. The boy says he called a cab, saying it should arrive in the next 10 minutes. However, looking at his companion, the boy realizes Taha is in really bad shape. He asks what's wrong with him, saying he'll call Youngsuk and ask her to prepare some medicine for them. But the madman stabs his phone. At that moment, Gray is frozen in fear. Taking off a glove, the protagonist says that when he woke up, his clothes and phone had been changed. But the strangest part was that his gloves were still on his hands. Obviously, the boy just listens without saying a word. On Taha's hand, the mark of the Salerno family was drawn. Looking at the boy, the man claims he knows who he's dealing with. Gray just nods his head, saying his name, his father's name, and the fact that he's the grandson of the late president of the Chianhu Group. He's the only Asian member of the Italian Salerno Mafia, around 20 to 30 years old, with a bounty of 5.5 billion on his head. The boy insists he wasn't plotting against anyone, saying not even the lady knows, claiming he just needs his help. Taha asks if that amount is worth more than the risk of losing his life or earning the reward for his head. Gray tries to say that the reason he and his adoptive mother live in hiding is because of the Chianhu, but the protagonist cuts him off, assuring him that the smartest choice would have been to turn him over to Chianhu instead of going through all of this. Recalling the conversation they had earlier when the kid said he wanted to win a prize by becoming the youngest broker. Noticing that the reason his career was stagnant despite being capable of more and even getting involved in the field, something nobody in the business does, is due to his lack of experience. That's why top informants are usually older. With that, he asks if Gray wants to step into a much bigger arena. A little later, in a large modern building, two people were walking down the hallway while one of them told the other to only answer what was asked directly. Huimin gets upset and assures he would never say anything that could put Ojong at a disadvantage. His companion says people from the gang aren't exactly known for being well-spoken. Even irritated, the guy can't deny it. The two enter as the man apologizes for making that person wait. Back at the chapel, Taita praises the boy's work, saying he'll fulfill a favor, but also wants them to work together afterward. He says Gray will be risking his life and won't have an easy death if he's caught. However, he could become the best if they work together. The protagonist says that's a promise. After all, he will crush Chianhu once and for all. The leader of Ojong admits he didn't expect them to call so soon. After all, they understand that Chang must be busy with the funeral of his relatives. They'd affirm they wouldn't have gone anywhere before getting in touch, but the man raises his hand, signaling them to stay quiet. Both are afraid of what might happen. The strange man makes a little hand gesture, asking for silence. With that, he begins to nod his head affirmatively. A kind of speaker starts playing music. He raises his clenched fist, making a sort of resistance pose. The two members of the Ojong gang don't understand what it means. Still, someone starts clapping. The guy accompanying Human says it's a shame they arrived just as the performance was ending. Chang asks if he knows that piece. The man says its exact name, but notes the composition seemed disjointed, assuming maybe it was due to his performance. That clearly doesn't please the lunatic. He orders his bodyguard to turn it off. While Dayan uncovers her ears, the man says that was a 6th grade piano competition, assuming he never practiced again. Moreover, all the relatives who went to watch him that day are now dead. The man asks if they know what happened, assuring them that if they had known who was coming, they wouldn't have been so defenseless. However, Human insists he did warn them, advising they should have even canceled the meeting since the assassin wasn't just anyone. While saying it was Chung who didn't heed the warning, Chung cuts him off, telling him to put away that cigarette, claiming he was the one who knew best. This visibly angers him. Chung says it was a traditional emergency meeting of his family, something that could be canceled on a whim, claiming that's why he paid 200 million won for him to deal with that man discreetly, without alerting the other members. The man rests his knee against a sort of cane. While touching his leg, he says that instead of handling the assassin, they suffered losses and now he'll even need to use that. With that, the man says he can't help but wonder how Human is still alive, even though all the other guards died. The guy says he already explained, saying that assassin kills according to his own rules and he didn't fall within them. With a smile, the lunatic says maybe the rule of a terrorist is to avoid friendly fire. Obviously, this infuriates Human. He tells the guy to stop barking nonsense, asking if they really think he put the honor of his organization and parents at risk. Chung says it must be nice to have parents to support you, stating that even if you wanted, his are already 6 feet under. Suddenly, the other Ojang member adjusts his glasses, preparing to step in. The man asks who is responsible for handling the so-called terrorist. The guy assures it shouldn't even be questioned. It was Mr. Junsu. The girl once again looks at the old man with suspicion. Huimin's partner asks the bodyguard directly. The man obviously confirms immediately. However, even he seems a bit suspicious. He says he understands and asks what Xiang wants from them. The lunatic claims he doesn't care about money or anything like that. He just wants to make sure to stay quiet about the incident. And if anyone asks, Human has never seen the assassin before. The guy doesn't understand why Chianhu are trying to bury the matter. His companion lights a cigarette, asking if that's really all they want. Xiang tries to make him put the cigarette out again, but Junsu touches his shoulder. Startled, the man looks at his bodyguard, who speaks in his place and assures both that it will be enough. The Ojang representative says he needs some time to digest everything, asking if the bodyguard would also like a cigarette. But the man thanks him and says he's quit the habit. However, Chang slams the table, getting increasingly furious. He asks if they're not afraid. After all, he'll be the new president soon, questioning what that old worm is doing. The guy strings together insults and tells that little shit to know his place. Standing up, he says that's what his boss would say, and that's why he's in that seat. Bidding farewell, the man addresses the bodyguard directly, saying they agree to the terms. Throwing the cigarette butt on the floor, the man tells them to have an ashtray next time, and preferably a wet napkin too. With that, the three are left in the room in deafening silence. Chung stays quiet for a few seconds, not saying or doing anything. Huimin says he really is something else. After all, he dismantled all of Chianhu's arrogance using only his words. Adjusting his glasses again, he says that's his role there since, apparently, Chang doesn't understand how things work, claiming that the former president truly taught him nothing and deserved his fate for not dealing with that brat sooner. The guy is in disbelief, asking if he's really trying to say that. Calmly, the old man claims the incident was probably a coup planned by Chiang to seize the presidency. The elevator opens and they resume walking, declaring it's essential that they find the assassin who attacked the Chianhu Group. Huimin tries to say the guy is dead, but his companion assures him that's not true. After all, Junsu is strong but never kills people. At the moment, he asks the old man that he confirmed his suspicions. The guy is even more amazed by all the twists. He declares it's unlikely the man was hired by Chiang, since Junsu lost many men. The assassin was merely used in the end. Huimin says that when he met him, the so-called terrorist said he hadn't been to Korea in a long time, asking if they should try to bring him to their side, maybe even managing to take Chianhu down completely. However, the old man says that would be good, but even so, if they find him, they must kill him. The guy can't understand the point of everything earlier. Still, the old man admits what irritates him is the fact that Chung called him thinking Huimin isn't a match for the assassin. That's why next time they meet, he must show them who's boss. Japal admits he's not the biggest fan of Ojang, but still hates seeing one of his men get beaten. Back inside, while some ice cubes fall into a container, Chung assures there's one thing he's become very good at. Thanking his father, he asks if either of them wants to guess. The room still had the broken coffee table and both bodyguards remained motionless. Pouring the whiskey into the glass, the man says he's great at picking up on subtle cues. He says that when that old man asked if Taha was really dead, the room felt like everyone was holding their breath. Sitting back on the couch, Chung says his bodyguard assured him he had finished off his cousin. However, Taha jumped and injured his leg. Besides that, his body hasn't been found to this day. Bringing the glass close to his lips, he pauses for a moment. With a terrifying gaze, the man questions if Taha is still alive. Junsu asks if the guy is suggesting that he let the former young master escape. The old man says he was the one who shot the boy from the helicopter. Chang states that if he had done his job properly, that wouldn't have been necessary. The bodyguard admits the boy was stronger than he expected. Furious, he throws his glass at the counter. He says it's time to move on now. As he leaves, the guy says his priority is the council meeting, claiming he needs to win their votes in order to join the committee. The psychopath says that whether Taha is alive or not, the old man cannot betray him, asking President Junsu if he's not right. The old man assures that he never goes back on his promises. They head to the rooftop toward the helicopter. Yaman was already waiting for them. Xiang is surprised to see that the guard managed to survive. The guy says this is different from what he was promised, asking to reconsider his transfer. He claims to have served the Chianhu family for a long time, so he shouldn't be reassigned to be just a director's bodyguard. Annoyed, he says if he had known this would happen, he would never have betrayed his former boss. The lunatic approaches and asks who told the guard he could get his ass kicked. Before doing anything, Yaman looks at Dayan, as he simply lowers his head. His boss tells him to be grateful he wasn't discarded after his terrible contributions. Even so, he yells out, calling for Junsu. The old man tells him to stay calm for now, saying he will contact him later. With that, the helicopter starts to lift off. Yaman just watches them. Somewhere in a less developed area of the city stood Ms. Young-suk's restaurant. Taha says he now understands why Gray was able to identify him, since his late father was a researcher at the company. The boy says that with the tattoo on the back of his hand and the search for the 20-year-old Asian tied to the Chianhu massacre, it all made sense. Assuring it's not so bad, the protagonist compliments him, saying it wasn't bad at all. His adoptive mother says it looks like he has a lot of free time. Young-suk says that for someone from Chianhu to come back for revenge, he must have plans, stating the boy shouldn't just be sitting around chatting. Making Gray spit out his food, he asks if she would betray him just to keep him busy. At that moment, the psychopath mutters to himself that traitors must die. His friend tries to lighten the mood, but the woman says it's only fair. She says there's no way a killer who lived his life for the Mafia can easily trust others. However, the protagonist says he was just handling some matters that would be more important in case of emergencies. He asks the lady not to worry, saying that anyone hated by Chianhu or Ojang is not his enemy. So Tae goes back to eating calmly. They both realize the assassin is probably saying he could take care of them in the future, in case he's betrayed. Suddenly, those thugs walk into the restaurant complaining about the heat. One of them tells the woman to turn the AC on full blast, asking how she plans to pay her interest if the customers don't stay. Young-suk says she paid everything and asks why they're causing a scene again. She tells Tae to come back after lunch and a smoke, also sending Gray off to school. Baksu tells her to leave him alone, assuring that he won't do anything to the two. However, he seems confused and irritated about something. He says he's never seen that boy around there, questioning how someone could end up eating a place like that. On the other hand, the protagonist is surprised at the size of the radish kimchi. Furious, the guy asks if the brat is choking on the food or something. Standing up, Gray tells the lady he's heading to school. He heads toward the exit while glancing back. He remembers he asked his friend to promise something before listening to his requests. He tells Taha not to kill or do anything like that, begging him not to turn the neighbors against each other. The protagonist asks if the boy thinks he would go after people recklessly, but Gray says that's exactly what he did. Returning to the subject, the guy asks what his request is. His friend reminds him that the 3rd district of Jiangxiu is at a stalemate between Chianhu and Ojang. When those disputes were really about to turn into chaos thanks to a local gang, Yaburi, the fight was halted. However, Taha asks if a small gang really managed to stop a power struggle between Chianhu and Ojang. Gray reiterates that the safety of everyone was ensured by Yaburi. However, they are also buying buildings to create a housing cooperative, so they can negotiate in future cases. The protagonist notes that it seems he disagrees with that. He says that if an agreement with a solution would have been done already, stating that the mayor was elected with Ojang's support. Moreover, Young-suk tried talking to the boss, but apparently she's not worth his time, asking Tae to speak on her behalf. However, he couldn't kill or irreversibly harm anyone. The protagonist admits that, in his view, they're nothing more than common thugs, but they were able to make the crime leaders back off. He simply stands up thanking the lady. Baksu, annoyed, asks if he's really going to ignore him. He tries to go after the brat, but Young-suk steps in front of him. The woman says she already asked him not to touch her customers, saying she already paid and asking what the ugly guy is doing there. The guy raises his hand to slap her, asking who she's calling ugly. But Tae stops the slap using a bowl. So even before Gray walks away from the shop, the 3 of them go flying through the door. The protagonist follows right behind them. The boy couldn't believe the lunatic did all that in under 10 seconds. Terrified on the ground, Baksu asks if the brat even knows who he is. As he approaches the men, the guy admits mentally that his revenge consists of 30 grand schemes. Even with all the planning, some parts were still uncertain. After all, he hadn't considered that his real enemy would be Chang. Because of that, he considers this a failure, but says he might be able to guess his plan for the future. Since, even being of Jin family bloodline, he'll still need to be elected president by the board. So he will use the development of the Jiangxiu district to stir up the board, asking the delinquents to take him to their boss. While they ask if the boy is crazy, a girl from across the street asks who he is. Suri asks if he wants to start a war against her gang all by himself. However, Taeka just responds negatively. He calmly grabs his cigarette and lights it. saying he's only there to talk. Suri asks what he means by that, saying that there's no way she can believe it with her men lying on the ground while he says something like that. However, the protagonist simply looks toward them, understanding the situation. The boy apologizes, saying they don't seem interested in listening to him, so he doesn't want to talk to people like that either. Looking up, Taha realizes that's how they managed to make both sides back down. With armed men spread across all the buildings, he states that if these guys took control of the whole city, the 3rd district of Jiangxia would become the base of these armed forces. Moreover, if even one of them used to be an officer, it's certain they have a very efficient system. He wonders if this is how Korea prepares itself. The girl says she can listen to his last words, asking him to be brief, calling him a bastard from Ojong or Chianhu. Obviously, that makes the guy mad. But before he can take a single step, a shot hits the asphalt in front of him. Suri tells him to say where he's from unless he wants to be full of holes. The girl says he better hurry up. However, that just makes the assassin even more irritated. Clenching his fist, he says he knew this day would come, stating he can't believe the day would unfold in such a disgusting way. Her guards warn her that it's dangerous, asking if they should kill him. She quickly calls for someone named Hwaryeon. Her subordinate jumps off the building, landing quickly in front of the protagonist. The guy was huge, literally known as Tank. The guy stands still, staring down the kid. But contrary to expectations, Taha simply tells the guard to step aside. The man stands there staring, unmoved. Unexpectedly though, he does as the protagonist ordered, leaving Suri completely confused by the guard's behavior. The girl asks how he could betray her like that while her other subordinates rush over. Surprisingly, the assassin just grabs the milkshake she was drinking. Throwing it away, he says it's no wonder nothing she does goes as planned. This obviously leaves her bewildered, not knowing what just happened. He gets close to her face while looking toward the building, saying something into her ear. She's left confused and scared by how things are turning out. Walking away, the protagonist says that either way, they don't seem worth his time. The girl was still paralyzed while her men ask if they shouldn't go after him. However, she calmly approaches Hwaryeon. The man admits he couldn't feel any kind of threat coming from the protagonist. The girl asks if that's why he let that lunatic get so close to her, stating her gang is really united. Smiling, the guy asks if she felt it too, claiming that even he was able to sense it, saying it's been a long time since the war, long enough to forget what it's like to see something real. Later, still at the ladies' restaurant, they were working to fit the door back into place. Gray asks his companion to hold it steady while he screws it in. They fix the restaurant's entrance. Both announce it's all done, saying the door now closes properly. While Yeon-suk asks if he's sure he fixed it right, Gray assures her he did and begs her to give them some food. Of course, she scolds Taha, saying if he breaks anything again, she'll kick him out of there. She was still scolding him since the door was expensive, but then Suri appears and breaks it again. The girl asks what's wrong with that door. Hugging Yeon-suk, the brat says she missed her and asks how she's doing. Pulling the girl's cheeks, the woman asks when these delinquents will let her door see the morning light. Seeing that, the protagonist thinks to himself the girl is completely different from how she was earlier that day. Once again, someone sets the door in place. Aside from fixing the door, Shuri says she heard Baksu laid a hand on the lady last time. Apologizing, she says she broke all his fingers to make sure he never does something like that again. However, the woman tells her to finish fixing the door and go eat, saying the girl is skin and bones. Gray explains to the protagonist that during a war that happened there, Yeon-suk helped treat many members of Yaburi, also treating Suri's father for free several times, which is why they consider her their savior. Taha asks out loud how gang lackeys can treat someone who's considered their boss's savior so rudely. Obviously, the girl doesn't like hearing that. Looking at her, the protagonist says everyone calls her the boss, but the girl is just a symbolic figure. She jumps at him, wrapping several wires around him, focusing especially on his neck. Suri curses at him, saying she's been going easy from the start, but the brat doesn't seem grateful. Confident, the girl asks him to repeat what he said. The protagonist realizes those wires aren't normal, noticing their tension is different. To her surprise, the guy claims she must know that better than he does, saying that among those men who were positioned inside the buildings when he was there, some seemed to have their weapons aimed at a specific spot. Instead of targeting the intruder, they were aiming at their own boss, saying that while everything externally looks like a stalemate, she acts like nothing more than a puppet controlled from within. At the moment he approached her, the boy asked Suri to meet him at the ladies' restaurant, since there were too many spies there, asking who ordered them to buy the buildings there, wondering if it was Ojong. While the girl pulls the wire tighter, the protagonist claims there's only one last option, asking if it was Chianhu, but the girl pulls the wire, visibly furious. But to her surprise, all the wires had snapped. With his dagger in hand, Taha says he got his answer. Elsewhere in the city, in a luxurious house, a man was banging on a glass window, begging the director to save him, saying that even with the failed deal with Lebanon, he guarantees he'll raise twice the revenue in 2 months. On the other hand, the director was on the phone asking what happened. The spy says an intruder approached Suri earlier, claiming the boy might have noticed them and asking how he should proceed. A cage begins to open with some feline inside. A hungry lion steps out into the same yard where the man was. Desperate, the guy tells the animal to stay back, begging the director frantically, pleading for another chance. But as expected, the man does nothing, letting the guy be killed and devoured by the beast. In the photo he received, the protagonist's face was fully exposed, making the director find it interesting. In-Yu orders them to bring the brat to him, alive. Taha says that apparently the one behind the entire 3rd district was really Chianhu. Furthermore, the reason the girl hasn't dealt with them is because she's being threatened. Suri starts complaining about who that guy is. After all, he cut through her wires like they were nothing, even though they're her best weapons made of Kevlar fiber. She indirectly questions who he is. The protagonist assures her he's simply the best person in the whole country at killing Chianhu. That obviously leaves her even more confused. He claims that if Chianhu is her problem, he supposes he can help her. Gray assures her that she can trust the protagonist. She's surprised when the old lady arrives. Yang-suk also tells Suri she can trust that guy. That shocks her even more, since the woman usually doesn't meddle in anything. With that, she gets off the table. As she walks away, the girl says that if it were just a matter of killing a few people, everything would have already been solved. Irritated, she warns that this is her last warning and tells Taha to leave the district. She leaves, abandoning the 3 at the restaurant. Later, the protagonist and the old lady are smoking outside. He thanks her for trying to help earlier, when she asked the girl to trust him if the matter involved dealing with Chianhu members. But Yang-suk just says it's the truth, complaining if there's anyone else capable of standing against them in this country. The protagonist asks who secretly plotted all that mess within Chianhu. The woman says it was the director of the electric company, In-Yu, assuring him that that worm is always behind everything. She says that when the former leader of the Yabiri, Suri's father, nearly died in the redevelopment war, that man took him to the hospital. But only the 2 of them know that. The rest of the neighborhood thinks he died, because if they knew, there would be resistance, and they'd all end up dead. Yang-suk admits she would prefer everything be resolved without Suri's father dying and asks if Taha could help. They go silent for a moment. Someone reports being B1 and warns that the target is in their sights. They ask if there was any conversation. The spy says yes, affirming that Yang-suk asked the intruder for help, claiming that the man is harder to read so he doesn't know what the answer was. This was a mercenary from the private company Peak. The person on the other end raises the possibility that the guy is a mercenary. B1 says that either way, they just need to bring him in alive. His colleague asks about the woman and the boy from the restaurant, but the mercenary says they're unnecessary, claiming he'll just kill them all. But Taha was already right behind him. The guy gets extremely startled when he notices his presence. The protagonist quickly hits his hand, preventing him from using his weapon, closing the distance between them fast. His colleague asks what happened, if B1 is okay, tells him to answer already, but the mercenary is still trying to pull out the knife that was stabbed into his hand. Meanwhile, the boy calmly walks over to the spot where his enemy had been watching him earlier. He picks up the radio lying on the ground, saying he's B1 and not to worry, saying goodbye and that he'll see them soon. Sometime later the next day, at the Chianhu's private hospital, a guy eats something while stating that he asked for all contracts to be completed yesterday, asking if Suri took his words seriously. The girl says she's trying to convince everyone to sign the papers, saying that way they'll avoid problems later. Her father was breathing through machines, clearly struggling. In-Yu says he truly doesn't see useless people as human beings. While stabbing something into the man's leg, the lunatic claims they're just chunks of meat from his perspective. Obviously, the girl is shocked and screams at him. Still jabbing her father with the fork, the director says the machines are beeping like crazy, claiming that proves he's alive, saying he's doing his best to keep that chunk of meat alive. Suri, extremely shaken, assures him she understands, saying she'll bring all the signed documents no matter the cost. She trembles as she begs In-Yu to stop, saying she'll do exactly as he asked. He grabs the girl by the face as she begs him to leave her father alone. The freak calls her a lady of the night, assuring her that if she follows all his orders, everything will be fine. Obviously, she's furious, but she can't do anything. The creep says he loves seeing that defiant look, claiming it's worth taming her. Showing her a paper, the man asks if she met that man yesterday. Looking down, she still seems a bit dazed. The girl looks at a photo of the protagonist while In-Yu claims he wants to meet him, asking her to bring him before the day ends. She stops crying, still looking at the photo. As he leaves, the guy tells her not to forget, saying she has a lot to lose if she betrays them. A doctor bows in front of the director. The guy walks nonchalantly toward the elevator. While he calls someone who doesn't pick up, another person was also in the elevator. In-Yu is irritated, asking what those delinquents are doing that they're not answering, saying he ordered them to find Taha. He keeps complaining while looking at the other person inside. As expected, it's the protagonist who just stares at the director. The guy tries to say something, but the boy simply cuts off his ear. Not really understanding what happened, In-Yu looks down and sees the piece that was taken. Obviously, he starts screaming in despair. Taika says he heard about it through rumors, saying that apparently the director was after him. The guy asks if the protagonist even knows who he is, trying to end with a punch. Inju asks how the boy dares to lay a hand on him, recalling that during his conversation with Yongsuk, she told him that in the redevelopment war, Chianhu hired mercenaries. They were men from the Peak Company, ruthless killers who do anything for money. The protagonist asks if the director really thought everything would be resolved if he just threw more money at it. Grabbing the mercenaries' dog tags, Taha declares that if the guy wants bloodshed, he better be prepared to watch his own spill. He throws all the tags into the lunatic's mouth. The psychopath assures Ingyu that no matter where or when, he will find him and stab him once a day from now on. With that, he says to get ready and take aim, saying the hunt starts now. After some time, the man was running desperately, wondering what was happening. He fell to the ground as the protagonist calmly approached him. The director screamed, begging him to stop. Crying, he pleaded for him not to come any closer. Taha had killed all the guards, which explained his calm demeanor. The boy stabbed his leg. He told the man to stop being dramatic, assuring him that the femoral region has a lot of muscle, so he wouldn't suffer a serious injury. As he pulled the blade out, the protagonist stated that compared to other places he had struck, this one wasn't so bad. Cleaning his knife, he said he would see him tomorrow. After some time, a sort of festival painting appears. Xiaolong drinks wine as he informs that out of the 15 directors, 7 are his allies. 6 support the vice president, and the remaining 2 are neutral. He states that in difficult times, they should stick together, lamenting that it's a shame. Another person agrees, saying they can hardly imagine how distressed the late president would be with this. They say the 2 neutral members can only be persuaded by action, assuring that the young ones are surpassing the vice president. However, unexpectedly, Cham calls for Ingyu. He says he heard he's working on the Jiangxiu redevelopment case, asking if he can expect good results by the meeting. Nervous, the director simply agrees, assuring him completely. But the man starts laughing, asking him not to be so formal and why he looks so nervous. In a terrifying tone, the man tells his colleague to do his best so they can avoid any future hostility. While placing his hand over his latest wound, Ingyu assures that he doesn't want things to turn out that way. Later, he walks toward his car. He sits in the back seat, clearly in a lot of pain. He recalls the protagonist's words as he stabbed him with his dagger. The man curses him, claiming he'll destroy him next time. His driver asks if he should take him home. The director kicks his seat, questioning if that kind of question is even necessary. As Ingyu locks everything that can be locked, Taha appears in the passenger seat, asking if the man committed any crime. Obviously, the man is in disbelief that he got in there. Pulling out his blade, the protagonist says that apparently that leg doesn't have much education, quickly stabbing it into the man's knee. That makes the director scream desperately. After that, the psychopath calmly steps out and says he'll be back tomorrow. Terrified, Ingyu asks who he is and why he keeps doing that, stating that he won't get what he wants if the man doesn't talk. Night falls. Taha says it's already the 7th day, and even though he's been stabbing him in non-lethal areas, the director must surely be reaching his limit. He tells Suri that even if they hand him over, her group will never be the same again. They ask what the protagonist was thinking going after the director, claiming it was very hard to drive them out. One of them asks their boss for permission to kill him, stating that if they don't hand him over, another war will break out. Suri questions why he did that and why he came there to tell them. But Taga simply says there's error 307. He states that this error prevents people from fully using online banking, an error usually encountered by journalists. Additionally, the internet speed there is below 10K, as if everyone's grinding their teeth waiting to be hacked. He asks her why that is. However, the 2 guards claim he doesn't understand anything, saying he's just an outsider. Even knowing that everything is because of Chianhu, she still stands firm for their families. He says that if all she wants is to protect her family, they should have stayed out of the way, questioning why they didn't fight back. However, Shuri just lowers her head, unsure of what to say. Leaving, Taga says the director will try to deal with it on his own since he can't trouble the council, and tells them to be ready. Oryang asks what the boy gains from all of this. He claims he'll earn the title of director within Chianhu. Later, in the same house where Ingyu once released a lion to devour his subordinate, a man says it's a tragedy for both of them. The CEO of the mercenary company Peak says he never imagined the powerful director would be suffering such humiliation from an outsider. But Ingyu tells the man to shut up, claiming he's not tolerating it because he likes it. While smoking, he curses the protagonist, saying that if it weren't for the council meeting, this would have already been resolved. Insik asks why he doesn't just bring that up, but the man vehemently denies that possibility. He assures that they symbolically call that meeting as such, claiming it can completely reorganize Chianhu. He says he's always maintained a friendship with Chang, and that once he's finally appointed, he'll have a kind of god by his side. He tells him it's best he gives it his all too, since if the project fails, the guy will also be punished for associating with him. With that, Insik says that Psycho managed to handle his men so he did a background check on his own. He asks if Ingyu has heard of the Salernos from Italy. The man admits he has no idea, asking if it's some kind of mafia. The CEO confirms, claiming they're insane. He says the boy is one of them, going by the name Vendetta, their best executioner. The only thing known is that he's Asian. He states that since he's a senior director at Chianhu, he must have a lot of money. Insik then asks how much he'll need. He says that if a nuclear bomb appeared, they'll need to create one of their own, declaring that someone who can rival him has been summoned to Korea. He says that Jerome is a guy who crossed paths with this Vendetta twice and lived to tell the tale. However, the director says he should have found someone the protagonist understands, not someone who just survived. Still, the guy explains that the boy is infamous for chasing a traitor even to the ends of the earth. He tells a story of how once Vendetta went into the Amazon jungle to hunt down a traitor, surviving solely on insects. Ingyu asks if that doesn't just make Jerome good at running, but Insik replies that if that were the case, he wouldn't have come immediately. The CEO states that the commission is $700,000 upfront, $300,000 later, and another $300,000 as brokerage. He claims it was very hard for him and his men to bring that guy in. The man asks how many men Insik still has. He assures that if he wants his company involved, a payment will have to be doubled. The director makes a call, ordering them to bring 200 kilograms of cash to the first floor of the basement. With that, the elevator doors open. Something inside glistens in the light. He asks the CEO if it really makes sense to spend $1.3 million to kill one man. Ingyu says that there's 200 kilograms of 50,000 won notes there, each weighing about 0.97 grams, affirming the guy can do the math. He assures it's more than enough to retire on, saying they need to have a productive conversation. Someone was observing a blueprint from somewhere. Gray says that it's the blueprint of the director's property, and that he got in touch with a security company and bought the poster. Taha asks how he managed to buy it. The boy says that except for Chianhu's own insurer, all the others trade for money. After all, Chianhu is always ready to replace anyone who doesn't turn a profit. In other words, their employees have no loyalty. Hearing that, the protagonist says his grandfather would rise from the grave if he heard such a thing. The boy explains that most of Inyu's schedule is sent from headquarters, so it's risky. The best time is 10 p.m. However, they realize they don't have the blueprint of the first basement floor. Gray says he's sure one exists since there are stairs and elevators, but supposes that the blueprint might be with the director himself. He notices that the phrase B1 kruk appears several times, and based on his studies, that's some kind of cement used in construction. Since it's highly resistant to moisture, chemicals, and weather, it's used for soundproof walls and even in zoos. Hearing this, the protagonist falls into thought for a moment. Taha asks the boy to do him a favor. Gray says he's listening. Vendetta gets close to the boy and whispers something in his ear. He asks why all of a sudden, but the protagonist simply says he supposes he'll need it. Gray says he has that at home, but never thought the guy was the type to use those things. However, Taga claims there's no such thing as a type for that kind of thing, and asks the kid to keep an eye on the CCTV for any intruders. After that, he calmly leaves the restaurant. Someone asks if he's heading out again. Horion asks if the lunatic is going to provoke the director again. The protagonist says it's hard to think someone being stabbed every 24 hours would see that as just a provocation. He says he's been around since the revolution of the 90s, so he knows how to spot real talent. Even so, he'd never heard of him before and asks who the kid is. Taha asks if it would change anything if the man knew who he was. The big guy seems a bit irritated by this. He warns that if he refused to explain, he'll be considered a threat to the boss and will have to be eliminated right there. The protagonist just stares indifferently, saying that the man knows his opponent's skills and still wants to fight fair instead of scheming to get an advantage, claiming that apparently he used to be part of the Ojom gang. As he leaves, Vendetta says he trusts his skills too, which is why he's leaving the place under his care while he's gone, assuring him that he'll personally compensate him if there's any redevelopment, offering 10 times the amount initially offered. Night finally falls. The director's mansion is as quiet as ever. The protagonist had managed to slip past the entrance security. With some caution, the assassin slowly opens the door, using his knife to hold it open. He then begins walking through the rooms looking for his target. Seeing how quiet everything is and the lights all off, Taha assumes the dear director hasn't returned yet, but that he notices the stairs that Gray suspected led to the first basement floor, wondering if that's the entrance. And so the lunatic simply starts descending the staircase, stopping in front of a glass window that shows a lion's habitat. Suddenly, the door slams shut. Ingyu speaks through a speaker box, saying it's good to see him again. Obviously, Vendetta realizes this is a trap. The director says he suspected from the start that he'd gotten hold of the schedule. After all, the kid always knew when to strike, calling the assassin a disgusting insect. With that, the lion's cage opens. The man says it doesn't matter how skilled the protagonist is with knives, he'll never be able to face two lions. Naturally, the felines begin to roar, showing off their predator nature. Ingyu says he couldn't do anything in the 3rd district because of the Ojong gang, but now he has the perfect excuse, declaring that as he's devoured alive, the place will fall as armed assassins infiltrate, assuring that tonight the boy and all the scum of the 3rd neighborhood will be wiped out. Calling the lions by name, the director orders them to attack. With that, the lions begin to approach him, quickly running toward their prey. Naturally, even the protagonist feels fear in a moment like that. However, he pulls out the flamethrower and still criticizes their names, saying both are males, taking them down with bullets. Seeing this, Ingyu no longer knows what to do since his entire plan has failed. The director asks if that was a gun, wondering why the psychopath isn't using his knives. However, Taha says the daggers are for humans and asks if the guy thinks he's in a comic book to imagine someone would do that. Speaking on the phone, he contacts Gray, realizing he still has a signal. Cutting the splint off his arm, he warns that an attack is coming soon, asking the boy to tell Suri to get ready. With that, Ingyu starts trembling in fear and nerves, remembering the story of how he entered the Amazon just to hunt down a traitor, surviving for a month eating only insects. He locks up tighter as he sees the calm with which the protagonist speaks on the phone. Vendetta, terrifyingly, looks into the camera and says that while Gray does his part, he'll hunt down the director. The boy informs everyone that Chianhu is on his way there, especially warning about the Peak Company, confirming that the message ends with Taha asking them to wait for his return and he is going to get Ingyu. Furthermore, since that fight is inevitable, the best choice is to face them head-on. If they don't do that, it will be the end of everyone. The Yemburi gang members are furious, claiming that the scammer must have run away after causing all that chaos. Gray tries to defend his friend, assuring them that he will return, but the guys tell him to shut up. They say the kid doesn't even know how the last war went, mentioning that children his age died, leaving their parents grieving to this day. Stopping the boy, Yang-suk also assures everyone that Taha will return. Some question what that man means to her, but another person declares that it's enough. Assistant Suyan tells everyone to be quiet, stating that this is not a decision for them to make. He asks his boss what they should do. The girl obviously was also irritated and worried. Suri says she didn't see the last war, as when she came back it was already over. Confusing them, the girl says she was afraid of losing her father and because of that, she became Chianhu's puppet. Apologizing for deceiving them, she claims that now is the time to end everything. That's why all the members of the Yemburi gang should join forces and drive Chianhu out once and for all. INSIC informs that the director's plan is to kill everyone living in the 3rd district. Since no property owner has the right to significant apartments, the construction company can make greater profits by selling luxury apartments, even though the truce with Ojong prevents them from attacking. With the appearance of the intruder Vendetta and the assassin pursuing him, the story changes. His men say that apparently the assassin is a decoy. The bald man confirms, claiming that this despicable Chianhu is good at what he does, warning that it's strictly necessary for them to stay out of the fight until the Ojong gang arrives, since Vendetta and that guy will be responsible. Jerome had been watching everything nonchalantly, admitting that he initially expected nothing, but now this is really starting to captivate him again. He says he can smell the war, mentioning that Korea seems to be a very interesting country. The CEO of the company orders them to turn on the drones. With that, a van is shown in an alley, another in a parking lot, surrounded by combat drones. All of them had bombs attached to their bodies. And Six says that unlike the last war, they won't need to limit themselves to small arms anymore. He laughs, claiming they are mercenaries. As long as there's money, there are no rules, ensuring they'll win every battle. While a car speeds down a highway, Ingyu asks the CEO if his men are on guard, desperately asking him to confirm this properly. The guy tells him to relax, assuring him that the director should be more protected than the president, since 70% of his men are on guard. He starts kicking the back of his driver's seat, telling the bald guy to say that after being stabbed in a public sauna, instructing them to only monitor the surroundings, claiming that the psychopath threatened to hunt him down. The protagonist was inside a car, and Ingyu notices, saying that Vendetta is approaching. Taha thinks to himself that installing trackers in all of the director's cars was definitely worth it. Additionally, he's concerned about how Gray and the others will handle things in the district, claiming he needs to finish this soon. In one of the security cars, a guard warns the driver that the assassin is right behind them. The guy questions how that crazy person knew they were there. While preparing to shoot, the soldier asks how fearless this Vendetta guy really is. With that, he sprays the windshield with bullets, aiming at the driver. Somehow, the protagonist manages to survive without getting hit. However, his car seems to lose control. The security guard warns the others that the black sedan behind them is the target. A bus aligns with Taha's vehicle. He's surprised to see that while they order everyone to stay alert. Several soldiers prepare their rifles through the window, stating they won't give him a chance to catch his breath. However, the protagonist quickly slams the brakes and throws himself into the barrier. He breaks one of the doors while simultaneously jumping out of the car, using it as a sort of skateboard on the asphalt. Obviously, his car flips ahead. He looks back, startled, trying to figure out his next move. After all, besides the many cars, 2 motorcycles with armed soldiers are approaching. Thus, he uses the door to knock one of them down, jumping and landing a knee to break the other guard's helmet, quickly taking out both of them. He steals one of the motorcycles for himself, accelerating as fast as he can to catch up with the director. For some reason, one of the escort vehicles was a truck with a car ramp. One of the guards says they have a visual on him, ordering his companions to open fire. The Neo from the Matrix dodges all the bullets, entering their blind spot and heading toward the ramp, realizing it's time to play some GTA, accelerating even more to gain momentum, and jumping over the truck. Still in the air, he prepares for another bold move, skillfully leaping from the motorcycle toward another vehicle, landing on top of one of the security cars. Carefully, he stands up and gets on his feet, breathing deeply and getting ready, taking his 2 daggers in hand and saying that from now on, the fun begins. Since they couldn't risk hitting their own comrades, the guards just watched the protagonist, noticing he didn't even have a weapon. The lunatics decide to speed up, saying that as soon as he gets alongside the vehicle, they'll crush him. Naturally, Taha can hear the engine revving louder. He lifts his head while listening carefully, waiting for the right moment. So Vendetta simply makes a small jump to stop relying on the car for support. Consequently, he heads straight toward the bus. The protagonist quickly gets ready to enter through the windshield, taking advantage of the guard's moment of confusion. With that, he smashes the glass and enters the vehicle. The soldiers obviously weren't expecting anything like that, so they barely react. Taking advantage of the situation, Vendetta swiftly slashes them down fatally, passing through them like a brutal hurricane, literally disconnecting all of his enemies' heads. Then he breaks the windows separating the driver and sits next to him. Obviously, the guy doesn't know what to do in that situation. He could barely process how a biker who was just flying a moment ago could now be there. Handing over some money, Taha apologizes and asks if the man could drive a bit faster, assuring him it won't take long. In the district, it's reported that drones have been confirmed within a 600-meter radius, claiming that 16 were sighted. Gray reports that they split up to strike from a lower altitude. Also, judging by the speed, they seem to be FPVs. Suyeon says it's exactly what they expected. A few hours earlier, Shuri had asked the Major how the last war was fought. The man explains that Cheong and Ojong only fought during prearranged times. She says it's ironic as they're not in medieval Europe. Still, she asks why the war was contained within the district. After all, whenever one side left, the other did the same. The Major explains that only small arms were used and only Peak made use of them, since both gangs didn't want to draw attention. After all, if a monster like that appeared again, no one would live to see the next day. With that, the girl becomes thoughtful for a moment. Stuyan says that's why Peak tried to end things before it reached Ojang's radar, but taking over the district would take too long. The boy finally understands the reason behind the drones. The assistant says they are probably equipped with RPGs or grenades for self-destruction, warning that they must prepare. The drones begin to fly over the region. Some soldiers spot them and get ready to fire with anti-drone weapons to take them down. With that, some of them start to hover in place. One soldier celebrates the hit. Another shoots with his rifle while cursing the mercenaries. The bald man is informed that they lost control of drones on 1st and 7th Streets, assuming the enemy might have anti-drone capabilities. And Sick questions why they're making that assumption. His subordinate says the signals were lost only in certain locations. Naturally, the CEO gets furious, asking if Yapuri has radars. Besides, anti-drones aren't something commonly seen. Laughing, he assures that won't be enough to stop them. Suddenly, Gray is incredibly surprised. They try to understand what's happening with the drones, reporting that there are many of them, assuming at least 100. And Sick asks if they really thought his company would start a war with just 10 to 20 drones. The anti-drones only block a small area, and when you point in another direction, the signal comes back. Now with hundreds of drones scattered across the sky, the guy wonders how many they'll be able to suppress. With the previous war leading to renovations in most of the district's buildings, a simple command allows drones to be sent anywhere. The CEO says he's eager to know how many will survive with 800 explosive drones behind them. Someone on the radio reports that drones are infiltrating through the ventilation, warning that they seem to know the layout of the building. Suvian orders everyone to get out of there, saying those have already been programmed, so there's no way to stop them. Smiling, the Major assures that the boss is already heading over. Someone calls out to the bald man, saying there's something strange in the sky. And Sick looks up, confused. The sky seemed as normal as ever, but suddenly, several lights appear. They intensify more and more. Then several explosions start going off. On top of one of the buildings in front of the drones was Shuri, trying to draw the attention of as many as she could, quickly manipulating her threads, completely wrapping them, making them stop. Then she jumps away while making them self-destruct. Insik is startled, asking who that is, assuring that nothing like that ever happened during the last war. Some time ago, her subordinates were asking what that was. She apologizes for not telling them before, claiming that this is her true weapon. The girl says maybe they're surprised, but as she said, she was somewhere else during the last war, saying she was in another place learning how to use that weapon to help her father, but fate made her arrive too late. That's why she wants to make things right this time, saying they will ensure those bastards never step foot in their neighborhood again. Suvian is proud, asking Gisav to see how much his daughter has grown. The bald man orders another batch to be brought in, telling them to overwhelm them with numbers, ordering to blow up everyone in their path. But when his soldier tries to respond, something seems to surprise him. Suddenly, someone hits the van behind him. Someone informs Oreong that this must be some kind of drone command center. The big guy confirms they were right. With that, the CDO becomes nervous upon seeing him. The tank heads toward the bald man, stating that it'll take care of that guy first. 10 years ago, the guy asked if his friend really wanted to form a gang. He said times were changing, and instead of paying some gang for protection, it was easier to start their own. The major said he was still a soldier, and besides, there was no one there who could fight like Gizab. But the guy assured him they weren't getting together to beat anyone up, just to make negotiations easier. With a smile, he asked his friend what he thought of the name Yaburi. Back to the present, the mercenaries were wondering how Hworyong had found that place. The soldiers reported that Alpha Team had identified a threat. The big guy kept running faster, lowering his head to avoid the gunfire. Annoyed, their captain shouted to stop aiming at the head and shoot at his feet instead. But the tank had already slammed one of them against the wall. His partner couldn't believe what was happening. Then the big guy quickly took down the second mercenary, also slamming him unconscious against the wall. A sniper said Alpha Team's threat was in his sights. He admitted the man was a monster. However, before he could do anything, his body was completely sliced apart. As expected, it was done by the girl. She was sprinting quickly across rooftops. In6 saw it and cursed furiously. She informed everyone that she had just taken out another sniper. Subion congratulated her on the work and warned that there were probably more, telling her to stay alert. Besides, they didn't even know she existed, so the snipers were likely positioned in places with a clear view downward. And the location where the snipers were grouped was probably the same place the drones were stationed. Gray said he had found a possible location. He claimed it was a public parking lot on the other side of the community center, in a black van. The girl said she understood and was already heading there. But something caught her attention. After all, Hworyong had just been hit by a bullet. But his nickname wasn't Tank for nothing. The guy hadn't suffered a scratch. As he approached, he said that in the last 20 years of bloodshed, he had only survived as a mercenary in that country one way. In6 swore he would kill the girl after taking care of all of them first. Tearing off his coat, the man revealed his robotic arm, saying he would finish the bald guy right there. Elsewhere, a car crashed onto a viaduct. Luckily, it didn't flip over when it hit the road below. The director was on his knees in front of the protagonist, calling him crazy, asking what Vendetta wanted with him and why he was doing all this. However, the man replied he had already said. He planned to stab him once a day, and he drove the knife into the man's shoulder. And you asked if Taha was insane to be doing something like this over such a petty reason. The protagonist pulled out his phone, saying it would be too much trouble to track him down if he went abroad, so he was taking him to the district. But the director insisted it was already too late. He assured him that by now there was nothing left on those streets. He declared that he had ordered his men to exterminate everyone, including children and the elderly, commanding them not to discriminate. He said he had spent more than 100 billion won, asking if the kid had any idea what that meant, saying they were supposed to destroy everything within an hour, using bombs, missiles, or whatever they found necessary. The protagonist said he'd heard many people died in the last war just for getting caught between the two gangs, claiming that it seemed the guy still didn't understand why he was only coming after him. He stated that no one is deadlier than someone who has lost their family, because people like that have nothing left to lose, so they risk everything without fear. However, there is a group of people even stronger than them, those who have a family to protect. Then the director remembered that day in the hospital. Taha said he was sure the man had also seen the eyes of someone who would do anything to protect their family, with a pain that tears through their lungs, a fury that destroys their hearts, all trapped in shallow breaths that promise vengeance. People like that are strong, and one of the ones who made them that way was none other than the director himself. So the protagonist told him to shut up and follow him silently. But Inju asked if the kid really thought things like family and revenge were stronger than money. Back to Hworyong's fight, the mercenary admitted he'd never imagined the guy was an ex-Ojan, the 16th in command of the gang during the last war. Dodging bullets, the big guy said that was in the past. Swinging his axe, In6 told his opponent not to belittle himself, stating everyone knows what that ranking means. Anyone within the top 20 in Ojong is considered one of the strongest in the nation. Suddenly, Suri's threads appeared mid-battle. The girl quickly managed to wrap the bald man completely. While cursing the girl, the man wondered what kind of thread it was that he couldn't even cut. She said his name, claiming she heard he was the one who killed the most in his entire city. Cursing him, Suri vowed to take his head to ease the sorrow in the hearts of those who remained. With that, Hworyong leaped toward him to deliver the final blow. The CEO tried to plead for them to wait, but to his luck, Jerome appeared and rescued him from there. This obviously surprised the big guy. Not much differently, Shuri also didn't understand what had just happened. The man said that because he had chosen toys like drones to win, that was the reason the bald guy ended up in that situation. Grabbing a crowbar, the assassin asked if he was wrong. Looking directly at the two, the guy states that he's going to begin. Still confused, the girl wonders if the man is a new enemy. Noticing that even though In6 was completely entangled in his wires, that lunatic pulled him out as if it were nothing. The leader of the mercenaries asks what the lunatic was doing to show up so late. However, Jerome simply says that their base is 350 meters to the northwest on the 4th floor of a ruined building, ordering the bald guy to go there. Before he can finish his sentence, Hworyong shoves the assassin against the wall. However, the tank seems surprised by something. After all, the guy is laughing while saying he'll stay there to have a little fun. In6 screams over the radio in desperation, ordering them to get all the drones in the air. His subordinate objects, arguing they don't even know where the enemy's control center is. Nevertheless, the leader says it doesn't matter since his best man is already there. He orders them to kill everyone while Jerome keeps the guy busy. Suri approaches the guy, saying he can't do something like that. This distracts the big guy for a moment, creating an opening for the assassin to land a kick and throw him far away. Obviously, Hworyong struggles to stop himself. Annoyed, he admits he didn't expect the guy to be able to throw 120 kilograms so far, noticing from his form that's not even his full strength. The big guy acknowledges that this man is truly promising. The girl calls out to her friend, but he asks his boss not to worry, stating that he'll take care of things there. The girl says she'll handle the drones, asking him to take the man down and bring him to the base. She says it's an order, telling the guy to finish things there in the next 5 minutes, because if the peaks arrive first, it's over. However, Hworyong becomes extremely frightened by something. After all, Jerome appears next to the girl, asking if she's already leaving. He asked her to stay a little longer, claiming it'll be more fun that way. However, the big guy appears ready to punch him, landing a strong blow on the assassin, sending him flying. The guy once again asks her to leave it to him, assuring her that he'll catch up soon. The girl simply nods. With that, she starts running as fast as she can. Hworyong mentally admits that if she had hesitated, he would have cursed at her until she left. He's surprised that she's not losing her composure even though it's her first war, stating it must be in her blood. But Jerome starts laughing, asking if this isn't a surprise, admitting that if he takes a few more punches like that, he might actually die. The big guy complains about how he survived a direct hit to the chest, asking where the guy came from. His opponent says he's from the Philippines, explaining that he learned Korean out of sheer interest, and asks how this pronunciation is. They stand face to face, staring at each other. Jerome admits that his life has been boring lately, saying he misses fights and things like that. He introduces himself and says the two of them will have a lot of fun. With that, the lunatic punches Hworyong in the face. As expected, he strikes back. Preparing another blow, he introduces himself too, unleashing a series of attacks all over the enemy's body. While taking advantage of an opening and landing an uppercut, the assassin declares that he loves this. Naturally, a hit like that leaves Hworyong dazed. Before he can regain his senses, the psychopath lands another one. Still taking hits, the big guy remembers someone who discovered his identity, recalling the protagonist, stating that he trusted his abilities and would leave everything to him while he was gone. Clenching his fist, he wonders why that man would trust his abilities, remembering that during the First District War, he was the leader of the main squad of the Ojang gang when it was still new, and that Gisa was the head of Yaburi, a close friend who worked with him for the gang before retiring. Back then, he asked his friend to trust him, assuring him he would make sure everyone moved into an apartment with a great view. However, Suri's father argues that most people there are elderly, so they can't wait 10 years just to live there again. He says he'll fight, and if he dies along the way, at least he'll know he tried to do something. But before anything else, he asked a favor, saying that if he dies, he'll leave whatever comes next in his hands. Even badly injured, Hworyong gets up once more, yelling as he tries to land a hit on the opponent. But Jerome manages to dodge and counterattack, while the big guy admits he joined the Ojang gang to find out what it meant to be strong. However, the truth he found only brought him despair, a world full of talents that rose above him like mountains impossible to overcome. Upon reaching the top 16, the man finally realized that was the limit of his abilities. However, the death of his friend illuminated something he hadn't known, admitting that what made him stronger wasn't the mountains, but the people he needed to protect. Jerome kept landing blows on him, but surprisingly, Hworyong grabs the assassin's head, running while carrying him along with his body, stating that he's known as the tank for a reason, proclaiming that he's the one who paves the way so others can follow. His enemy seems surprised by the whole turnaround. Smiling, the weirdo says that Fist is full of conviction, claiming he thought they were just having fun from the start. Appearing behind him, the lunatic says that if the man is taking it seriously, he'll have to do the same. Grabbing a crowbar, Jerome admits that it was fun, saying he'll make him pass on without pain. With that, Hworyong is completely paralyzed in shock. A large slash cuts through him horizontally, even slicing the wall in front of him, causing it to begin falling on top of him. Someone praises the man for all his work. Unexpectedly, Taha appears and cuts the wall, preventing it from falling on him. The protagonist asks Hworyong to let him take over from there, thanking him once again for all his work. With that, he turns his gaze to Jerome. Staring at him, the assassin says that Vendetta is very late. The boy says that from now on, he will be his opponent. But first, Taha asks if his comrade can move even with those injuries, visibly covered in deep cuts. Hworyong insists that it wasn't enough, claiming that he's fine, assuring them that they'd have to kill him to make him stop moving. So the protagonist tells him to walk 1 block, saying there will be a black car near a streetlight. Inside the trunk, Ingyu will be waiting for him. He declares that he will take care of things here, asking the man to drive the car to their hideout. Jerome asks if they really think he'll let the big guy go so easily. However, Taha throws a manhole cover at his feet. As expected, the guy simply blocks it. The protagonist starts walking toward his opponent. Smiling, the lunatic asks if he's serious, quickly using his crowbar to catch the manhole cover still in the air, skillfully throwing it back, growing more and more excited. Vendetta runs toward him as fast as he can, barely managing to dodge it. Both stop at a certain distance from each other. However, Jerome lunges forward, seeming more and more thirsty for adrenaline. The protagonist says that apparently the guy has really been walking around claiming to be his rival. The weirdo asks if it isn't true. With that, They begin exchanging blows at an absurd speed. However, Taha says the only thing that guy is a stalker. But the assassin keeps laughing, claiming it's all the same. Several explosions erupt in the sky. Suri is taking down every drone she can. Tired, the girl admits there are too many drones around. Besides that, she can't waste too much time on this. Suddenly, a voice on the radio says that HQ is exchanging fire with the peaks about 50 meters from the base. Gray says the situation is dangerous, but their position makes it hard for enemies to approach, telling them not to worry. He says that as soon as that man returns, the war will be over, so they just need to hold on until then. The girl, hearing those words, wonders if he might be talking about someone in particular. Then she hears the sound of a car. Inside the trunk was the director. Even incredibly injured, Waryong had gone there to retrieve him. Obviously, the man was increasingly afraid of what fate had in store for him. The big guy grabs him by the face like a doll. He wonders if the way to end the war is to smash that worm's skull right then and there. However, if that man loses, Shuri won't be able to face Jerome alone, so he considers it might be better to ask the Ojong for help. With that, he starts squeezing Inyu's face tighter and tighter, saying to himself that this is the one responsible for everything, and after his death, Peek and Jerome will have to retreat. However, Taha and his opponent pass by above him, still fighting. The assassin was blocking the protagonist's blades. Both start clashing their weapons again, face to face, staring each other down once more. They exchange another flurry of blows. Vendetta manages to land a kick to his enemy's stomach, sending him flying. The guy uses his crowbar as leverage to stop. Getting up, he admits he was surprised to learn that his rival was in Korea, but says he might be starting to understand why he came here, destroying the air conditioner where he'd driven the crowbar's tip. He surprises the protagonist by saying that for assassins like them, that place is a paradise. Trying to hit him with it, Jerome asks if Vendetta doesn't agree. Obviously, the boy has a hard time dodging the attack. As a last resort, Taha throws himself backward through an apartment. However, his opponent had already anticipated that, laughing maniacally as he tries to strike him again. Subion asks if Gray is sure everything will end when that man arrives. The boy says he's absolutely certain, making the major freak out, asking who he is and why they have so much faith in him. Gray asks if the advisor remembers that the news used to call the Chianhu family royalty, informing him that the so-called terrorist was Taha. However, he asks the man to forget the words he just heard, saying that in fact he is not a terrorist who killed the royal family, because even though he left, that man is still part of that royal family, declaring that calling him the heir to the throne makes much more sense. In his mind, Vendetta remembers the first time their paths crossed. They were both in England and had the same target. Suddenly, a massive explosion shakes the tunnel walls. The protagonist and Jerome were fighting. The guy had fallen onto the train tracks. He supports himself with his crowbar. Looking down, he seems surprised, realizing that his legs had been completely shattered. Because of that, he couldn't move and a train was approaching. The guy even looks up, hoping for some help from Taha. However, the boy does nothing, claiming he was sure he had killed him in that moment. But then, sometime later, a cargo plane flies across the skies. Two people begin to fall from it. The protagonist says that once he was dealing with a traitor trying to escape to Russia. That's when they crossed paths again, fighting in midair. They started exchanging blows while free-falling, until Vendetta manages to strike his vest, cutting the parachute trigger, placing his foot on his chest and pushing him downward. Yet he didn't die that time either. On the contrary, Jerome seems to grow stronger with each confrontation. The madman keeps laughing, claiming the protagonist's strike wasn't enough, saying it came down to a very subtle difference, noticing that his right-hand strikes are weaker than the left-hand ones. With that, Jerome quickly charges at Taha, saying that Vendetta failed to kill him despite multiple opportunities, including the last blow. The guy lands a fiercely powerful strike. The protagonist realizes that his right arm begins to tremble after the attack, as it was the one that had been broken during his revenge. Taking advantage of that brief distraction, the lunatic appears behind him, questioning whether someone of his caliber really hurt his arm. The boy manages to dodge the strike, while his opponent says that after his brief experience in that country, he can even understand him. Jerome says it would be madness to assume that place isn't filled with great fighters, after they created a lawless environment by killing the president. He claims that even so, the best among them all is still Vendetta, since the only one to push him to the brink of death and make him stronger every time is him. The guy starts cutting the water tank with the tip of his crowbar, tearing a large gash into its structure, throwing that chunk at his opponent. Taha doesn't have time to react. The assassin jumps, preparing for the finishing blow while exploiting his enemy's vulnerability, landing an incredibly powerful strike, raising a cloud of smoke. He lands calmly on the ground, but to his surprise, the protagonist wasn't there, wondering how the boy managed to escape that. He begins to tremble with rage, claiming he clearly saw him being hit, realizing that he can vanish from sight easily. He blocks one of the daggers his opponent threw. Jerome declares that Vendetta has failed once again and missed another chance. However, the protagonist cuts him off, assuring that this time he'll make sure it's over. As the blade finally hits the ground, Taha was already standing in front of his opponent. The guy couldn't understand what had just happened, asking if his rival had always been this fast. The assassin Vendetta delivers a slash that cuts everything around him in half. Taha says he's just like him, stating that he too breathed through death, finishing his rival right then and there. Meanwhile, Shuri was desperately running across rooftops. She says that according to the radio, this is the last batch of drones, stating she needs to take them out as quickly as possible and return to base. The girl is confused upon seeing two men carrying a body. One of them notices her presence. Frozen, she wonders if those are more enemies. However, the guy calls her by name, claiming to be from a special forces unit of the Ojong gang. While saying they're acting under Captain Huimin's orders, the man himself appears in front of the protagonist. He immediately warns that he received orders to kill him, asking Taha what he should do. The two stare at each other after that unusual question. The protagonist remembers him, also wondering how he knew his location, realizing that he's probably not one of Inyu's men. Besides, if he wanted to kill him, the guy would have ambushed him instead of revealing himself. The boy says he thought he was special, stating that apparently he's part of Ojong. Huimin asks if he wants a thank you or something like that, claiming he should know they can't afford chaos there. Taha says the guy probably didn't get the full story, but he assures him he wasn't the one who made the first move. Just as the two were about to start arguing in detail, the lunatic begins to rise like a zombie behind him. That obviously leaves both of them completely speechless. Barely able to talk, Jerome admits that was pretty serious. Naturally, Vendetta picks up his other dagger that was on the ground. However, the corpse manages to dodge. The madman pulls a grenade from his pocket. He throws it, saying he'll see his friend another time. The other two get flashbanged by the TR. The protagonist scans the area with his eye, trying to locate him. He starts walking, wanting to go after the zombie. However, Huimin stops the boy, telling him to wait a minute, saying Taha should maintain order. Obviously, Vendetta is irritated by this. Brandishing his dagger, the protagonist claims the zombie was first in line. However, his opponent easily blocks the attack. He realizes that this guy predicted his move. Huimin admits he can't see him at that ridiculous speed. Still, it would be humiliating to be fooled by the same trick twice. The captain says that from the looks of it, the boy isn't in fighting condition, questioning why he doesn't try being kind just once. He admits the guy always seems strong to him, but says he's someone promising who hasn't reached his full potential yet. That would mean Huimin is someone capable of pushing things forward within the gang. Both take distance from each other. The protagonist says he had already noticed, but considering his skills, his opponent doesn't seem to have blood on his hands. He asks if he's right in assuming Huimin has never killed before. The man tries to land a blow, but Taha disappears. Leaving the guy surprised, the protagonist was already behind him, smiling as he watches him. However, to the boy's surprise, the captain also increases his speed, saying that he's already beaten many until they were left in puddles of blood. Seeing that, Vendetta is shocked by the ferocity. Even so, he dodges the blow, telling the guy to head to the third floor of the abandoned building 450 meters northwest of there, saying it's there in the resident's hideout, stating that even if Huimin can't kill him, he'll gain something rewarding. But when he turns around, the man realizes no one is there anymore, left alone in the middle of that alley. Snorting in anger, he says he's sick of that brat. The third district was completely silent. The Ojong gang's special force speaks on the radio, ordering everyone to pay attention, telling them to surrender. If they don't, a squad will destroy each of them. The announcement is repeated once more as Insik hides to avoid getting shot. He curses as he sees his soldiers dead on the stairs. The guy complains, wondering if the Ojong gang also planted spies there, just like they did. Greg remained hidden in another room, asking if the major was okay and begging him not to pass out. Even struggling to breathe, Suyan tells the boy to speak more quietly, saying they can't let their locations be discovered. Over the radio, it said that they found two individuals in the hideout. However, there were many soldiers in surrounding buildings, making the area dangerous. His subordinate asks why they don't retreat, assuring him they'll be tough with Ojong there. But Insik tells them to shut up. Obviously, the mercenary leader could only think about the money, saying that opportunities like this only come once in a lifetime. The major speaks to the bald man, saying it seems he really wants to go all the way. The guy claims that if they manage to kill Giziab, Jerome will handle the rest. But that's only if they wrap things up there. He goes on saying he'll kill the leader of Yabura with his own hands. But Hand silently approaches him. Freezing him in fear, the person covers his mouth. It was Quarion, questioning if he really just declared that their lives were worth 10 billion won. Turning quickly, the bald guy says the man must be nothing more than a walking corpse by now. But the big man steps back, saying he'll make him spit out every drop of blood, swearing it's for all the ones he killed, landing a punch right in the center of his chest, making the mercenary leader vomit a massive amount of blood. The force of the blow is so strong it sends him flying out of the building. The mercenaries in the building across the street are frightened by that, but before they can do anything, some wires appear. With that, they start getting strangled. As she leaps, Shuri easily decapitates them. Meanwhile, Insik had died from the fall. While running, the girl realizes everything is finally over. After that, 5 minutes pass. Huimin had finally arrived at the building the protagonist had told him about. Upon entering one of the rooms, the guy asks what that is. At an improvised table, Taha asks the man to join them. The boy makes an observation, saying that at that table sits the representative of the 3rd District, a representative from the Chianhu, and finally a spokesperson from the Ozhong gang, stating that apparently all the key parties are present. The protagonist announces that they are now officially going to negotiate the redevelopment rights of the district, claiming that everyone should walk away happy. Still in the Yaburi base building, someone tells their boss that they don't know how to say it, stating that they weren't tricked. They say they don't feel like the right person to speak there and ask if the sir could help. As someone approaches, the guy asks the old man not to grumble so much. He takes a deep breath after hanging up the phone and grabs a cigarette. With that, Taha offers his lighter, saying it must be hard working until that hour. Huimin says it seems the kid has started carrying his own cigarettes. The protagonist asks if the guy still hasn't gotten over it, wondering if he wants one in return, but he just refuses. The captain admits he wasn't confident in his victory during the last fight, saying that'll be the case for many of his future battles. However, he states that if he gets the chance to fight 3 more times, he guarantees he'll win. The boy simply watches him in silence. Annoying the guy, Vendetta says it's a shame he only has 1 life. With that, one of them finishes smoking their cigarette. As the protagonist walks away, Huimin asks how he can still be alive and well after facing Junsu. He says he won't tell him anything right there, declaring that, like it or not, the guy will know everything the next time they meet. The captain smiles, saying the brat never gives straight answers, saying he wants to see if Tae will act that way with the man who's about to arrive. After some time back at the abandoned building, Huimin returns accompanied by 2 more men, including Jaepo. As they enter, Hworyong promptly bows, greeting them, introducing himself as the former leader of Group B from the ancient branch, saying he's sorry for making the vice president come all the way there. The older man says it's been a while since he last saw him, noticing the man has some injuries. However, the guy says that fortunately he's not having trouble moving. Jaepo says that apparently he is the problematic one here, asking him to stop the formalities. After all, Hworyong isn't part of the gang anymore, telling him not to bow so easily to others, saying he didn't let him leave so peacefully just to be greeted like that. Even Huimin notices the strange tension. The big man admits it's already surprising to see the 7th, but he never imagined seeing the 2nd in command show up there. He was the one who turned the gang into an organization incorporated into the political system. When he was appointed vice president, it caused quite a stir, admitting that the guy always led them toward victory, where violence is not an option. He supposes that's even more troublesome than Chianhu. Everyone goes silent as they hear his footsteps approaching. Jaepo introduces himself and says that before they begin, there are some matters he'd like to address. Ingyu was still tied up, muttering non-stop. The man demands that they untie the director, saying he refuses to negotiate anything until then. Unlike Shuri, who is furious, the protagonist simply says that man is a criminal who violated the agreement. Taha was about to say something else, but the old man orders him to shut up. He claims the boy is an outsider who shouldn't even be there, warning that one more word and he'll leave. So the boy has no choice but to remain silent. The man once again demands they release the director, while Huimin seems pleased with his superior's stance. Since he couldn't speak, the boy just nods to the girl. She does as she was asked. Jaepo says there's a car waiting for him outside, ordering the guy to go first. Ingyu begins to leave, assuring them he'll repay his debt, telling everyone to wait, promising he'll make sure their deaths are as painless as possible. Suri obviously was furious about all of it. The girl asks what the old man's problem is, saying he was going to be betrayed by the manager and still did that. However, Jaepo asks how the bitch expects him to believe everything they said. That leaves her even more confused and outraged, asking how could she possibly know whether it was truly a breach of contract or just some internal dispute between the two. She slams the table, stating that the director kept her father hostage, the man who was almost killed by their 3rd best subordinate. Looking at the protagonist, the man asks if it wasn't him who stabbed Ingyu at the hospital. That, of course, leaves her speechless. He states that even if the director was threatening her people, it still wouldn't justify a war. So after they provoked and threatened that man with an outsider, it's his duty to hold both parties responsible for breaking the contract. After that, Jaepo asks if they have any strong evidence to contradict him. Clearly, the protagonist was dying to kill them. On the other hand, Shuri says that in that case, they're no longer interested in negotiating with the Ozhong gang. The man says that decision is no longer in the girl's hands since they accepted the terms of the agreement, but violated them. The representative announces that within 24 hours they will send a proposal, informing them that they'll have another 24 hours to respond. With that, the 3 of them leave normally. Shuri kicks the table, extremely irritated. Trembling, the girl says she couldn't even say everything she wanted to, declaring that Jaepo never intended to negotiate from the start. Taena simply agrees with her. She also suspects that there's a spy among them, since the old man already knew everything before even arriving there. The girl looks at the protagonist, asking if at least everything is going according to plan. He says yes, praising her work. Meanwhile, the members of Ozhong head toward the car. Surprisingly, the older man says that Huimin should go separately, claiming he doesn't offer careers to cowards who hide at the first sign of defeat. But obviously, the captain doesn't like that, saying he explained exactly what was going on, declaring that he's still young and asks what was expected of him. However, Jaepo doesn't care and continues on his way. Yet someone intercepts their car. As expected, it was the protagonist. The car slowly approaches him. Cracking the window open a bit, Jeppel asks what he wants. The boy says that since both gangs are now part of a larger power structure, it's important they don't cross certain lines. Therefore, if they lose the director who was just released, and since Chianhu Group recently lost its president, they'll become more vulnerable, weakening the agreement between them, especially if the person and motive behind the disappearance remain a mystery, stating that for someone who claimed he didn't need to negotiate with a stranger, he now has excellent reasons to at least discuss this. At that moment, Jeppel remembers what was said in the meeting. Recalling Horion, the man realizes that he wasn't waiting for him, but was waiting for the director's release. The old man admits that he expected the boy to come after him, but now that he realizes the kid isn't as foolish as he thought, he doesn't know what to think anymore. The old man completely changes his demeanor, saying there's a seat available and asks if the boy would like to join him. However, the protagonist says they're not that familiar with each other, claiming they just need to settle things in a simple way. Jeppel assures him that he wouldn't set a trap this late in the game, saying he just knows a great cigar lounge. Taha says that only makes things worse, since he's extremely picky about his cigars. The man says he heard that he was away from Korea for a while and asks where the protagonist has been living. The boy says he was in Italy. The old man says that even though he's not too familiar with them, the place he's talking about also has cigars, trying to remember the name. Before the man can even finish his sentence, the guy gets in the car, saying he should have mentioned that from the start. Jeppel is a bit surprised by the assassin's reaction. He notes that Seoul's speed limit is 31 miles per hour, but Taha tells him not to worry and just to hurry. After that, they arrive at the place. A white-haired man approaches them. He says these are the cigars the gentleman usually smokes. Additionally, he brought the ones he had ordered. The man says he'll enjoy them as always. The waiter wishes them a good time. However, before he leaves, Taha calls him, asking if they have matches. The waiter says yes and asks if he should bring them. It was a high-end place with incredibly expensive drinks. The boy says that isn't a typical cigar made with a Kentucky blend appreciated by workers as well as other social classes, characterized by its considerable length, which is sometimes cut in half to be shared with partners. Handing a piece to Jeppel, he explains that's why it was named the friendship cigar. A bit surprised, the man takes it, saying it takes about half an hour to an hour to smoke a whole cigar, realizing Taha only wants a 15-minute talk. With that, both remain silent for a moment. The old man admits that the cigar isn't bad. He also confesses that he doesn't care what happens to the 3rd District, as topics like that don't interest him. That's why he reveals the real reason he showed up there. First, Huimin still doesn't know how to handle situations like that. Second, he couldn't understand how someone capable of facing Chianhu's royalty ended up in a place like that. The protagonist says he almost died back then, assuring he's only alive because of the people from there. He requests the man to offer guaranteed housing to the citizens until the redevelopment plans are completed, providing the necessary relocation support for a new apartment by Gangnam standards, with no extra fees. Jeppel states that just the construction alone will cost 3 trillion won. If they offer that kind of support, families would earn 10 times the property's value. Taha asks if they're not there to negotiate, as he got the impression the man wanted to know about his plans for Chianhu's future. However, the old man denies that intention, saying he's there for another reason. His true interest lies in the protagonist's knowledge of the committee, the largest conglomerate in South Korea, controlling advanced industries and entertainment businesses across the country, Chianhu Corporation, the criminal organization behind the president's assassination, ranking members by skill, Ojang, the pseudo-religious group with the largest chamber, made up of all post-assassination presidents, the Eternal Life Sect, the largest crime syndicate composed of military elites and media moguls rejected by Osham, the Dobang Association, and finally the committee's organizer, the Yan House of Changju. Since 1990, these 5 factions have overseen the country through the committee. The only thing they covet is balance, perfect balance, with power shared equally. Hearing this, Taha remains silent, a bit thoughtful. The protagonist says it seems they're afraid that Chang might disturb that balance. However, Jeppel assures that's not it and says the boy already knows the right answer. He asks if it was Chang who was responsible for his near-death experience, but the protagonist seems to hesitate for a moment, remembering when he faced Junsu, and the moment when the old man said it all ends here. Still, the boy claims it was Junsu. The man suddenly says Chianhu got Junsu, claiming that's what was said the moment they acknowledged his strength. A man of unknown origin, age, and identity, who became the president's bodyguard, saying Chianhu's presidency shines thanks to his light. This man first emerged through a coup, and although he fears believing it, perhaps Junsu is using the organization to feed his ambitions. Taha asks what the man is looking for by telling him this. Leaning back, Jeppel assures that he must know, declaring he's sure the boy knows what he really wants. The protagonist assumes that maybe this man wants him to kill Chang and Junsu. Standing up, Vendetta thanks him for the cigar, warning that he'll take that as agreement on the district matter. The old man says that if someone outside the committee learns about him, the rule says he must be eliminated. With that, he asks the protagonist not to try running, assuring him that he wants to maintain the connection they have. The boy stops walking. encouraging Jeppel to look to the future and observe the next Chianhu Council meeting. Elsewhere, a fax arrives at an office. This was the 31st floor of Chianhu Electronics. One of the employees asks who could send a fax there, calmly reading the message that had been sent, surprised at what was written. Meanwhile, in a forest-like area near a waterfall, someone was running barefoot over the ground. It was Pyoto, a board member, trying to hide with the same message in his hands. Calling the vice president, the man informs him that Ingyu has announced he won't take part in the vote. The old man who was bathing stops in place, visibly irritated. The man says he sent a fax stating that a proxy will be present. The gruff man asks who the proxy would be. Only a single word of astonishment escaped the assassin as he turned to the young master, and with his hand gripping the knife, he wondered if it had all been a plan to lure him into the elevator. Then the young man explained that it was the same technique magicians use to divert attention. By breaking the pole, he made his opponent believe he was fleeing into the empty building. With that, he commented that the man had natural qualities to be an assassin, since he hid so well. But whether a magician or an assassin, now that his game had been revealed, the master declared he would pay the price. Immediately, the enemy lunged forward with his weapon, but the strike was blocked with the very same blade. Still in disbelief, the attacker questioned how the other could possibly know what his game was. With a calm look, the young master simply confirmed he was right. Next, the blades clashed again with full force in the middle of the elevator, and a rapid sequence of strikes was unleashed, but the master blocked all the attacks effortlessly. The speed of the counterattack left the assassin stunned, unable to understand how he hadn't been this fast before. Soon, he rushed forward quickly, leaving a trail along the elevator wall. But leaping backward, the enemy ended up evading the attack. As soon as he raised his weapon for a new strike, he froze at the sight of the blade already pointed at his throat. For an instant, an aura surrounded the master as he raised the blade over the fallen opponent. And in a swift movement, the knife grazed the assassin's face, who only watched without reacting. With a smile, the young man said he had warned him, for he was like an open book, and a flicker of astonishment filled the assassin's eye. Suddenly, the elevator cable snapped with a loud crash at the top of the shaft. Then the cabin began to plummet in free fall. And in a nearby hallway, the master revealed he had expected that since there was only one way out of the elevator. He soon asked how it felt to have someone always one step ahead. Unable to respond, the assassin only shouted an insult at his opponent. Then the young master knocked him to the floor, pressing a blade against his neck. With the impact, they both burst through the doors and were thrown into the middle of the hallway, and the blade shattered as it was blocked by the enemy's strike. With a smile, the man revealed that the knife was a defective piece, questioning how he could possibly be defeated with it. But before the assassin could finish his sentence, the master grabbed his face with his hand, and with a steady gaze, he simply told his opponent to stay quiet. The sound of impacts echoed from outside the building. Then the young master hurled him toward the window, which shattered, sending them both out of the building. During the fall, the assassin still attempted a quick strike to break free, but the young man used the broken knife to block the attack. With that, he seized the chance to leave a cut on his opponent's face, and then the enemy's body slammed into the ground with great force. Meanwhile, the master landed on his feet without any difficulty. Standing at a distance, he took out his cigarette. Right after, he tried to use his lighter, but it wouldn't work. Amid the dusk, he admitted that the man's skills were impressive and that he had never encountered such a talented assassin. But he added that no matter how good he was at acting and disguising himself, living together was a completely different story. Then he recalled that he knew very well Wangsu had ignored him on purpose, and even so, dared to betray him after being taken in. With that, the man's silhouette began to fade away. Before disappearing, he could only say that his body was. And with the man's knife in hand, the master revealed that the poison had passed to his blade during the repeated clashes. As he fell, the assassin made one last request to the young master, and with his final strength, he asked the master not to kill that boy. As he brought the cigarette to his lips, he said that under normal circumstances, he would kill him and leave his signature. Instead, he used the blade to light the fallen man's cigarette. With that, the tip of the cigarette finally lit upon touching the metal. But he declared that, for the man's loyalty, he would let him go just this once. And in the end, he simply told the man to consider himself lucky. Night fell over the city. And elsewhere, a man was biting the straw of his drink. At a table, one of the men asked if the other was sure about his decision. Not too certain, he asked if Du Gaiyang had really said he would vote for him. And the man with glasses confirmed, adding that he had asked him to join them so he could hear it personally. As soon as his phone vibrated, the man commented that the successes just kept coming, as it seemed the master had also been dealt with. Right after, he tossed the phone to the other, asking President Baek to answer the call for him. On the phone, President Baek heard the order to confirm the young master's body and make sure it was dissolved. After the call, he informed that he would bring Nameless back, but the seated man simply asked why. And he was told that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and that both should simply be dissolved together. After a moment of silence, President Baek agreed to the order. Then he left the room and walked down the hallway. Already in the hallway, he answered the phone and told the person on the line to proceed. And the voice on the other end said he feared Chiang would hang up on him, and that was why he was glad to have him on the phone. Surprised, Baek realized that the young master was still alive. On the other end of the line, the young man invited him to come outside. While looking up at the top of the building, he then asked if he should go inside instead. On the phone, he assumed that the young master had already dealt with Nameless. And with that, he said he was glad to see the young man still alive and well. Without patience, the master asked him to spare the empty pleasantries. Then he repeated the invitation for him to come outside, unless he preferred that he come in on his own. Out on the street, he stood still, waiting for an answer. Back in the building, Baek replied that if the intention had been to attack young Master Chiang, a phone call would not have been necessary. Soon after, he provoked him, asking if he was just buying time out of fear of failing like the last time. As he walked, the young man explained that at first, the situation had seemed simple. His family had been murdered, and he had returned seeking revenge. But he revealed that he had changed his mind and wanted to hear him out before taking any action. Directly, he asked why exactly Junsu had betrayed his parents and his grandfather. Even with Chiang's thirst for power, he pointed out that Junsu was still in the same position as years ago as president of Chianhu Security. After turning his back twice, first on his grandfather and then on Taha Jinn, he questioned what Junsu was truly after with all of this. With a metaphor, Junsu replied that a wild beast would gladly sacrifice his own life for its offspring. But if the offspring failed to grow or fell ill, that same beast would break its neck with the same reverence. With the phone in hand, Junsu asked if the young master felt betrayed, saying there was no need to overanalyze the situation. Then it was explained that the Chianhu company does not belong to any single person, but rather to its own legal entity. Furthermore, the vote he had cast for the late president Taha Jinn had been for one single cause. That vote, he revealed, had been to protect Chianhu. With the call ended, the master simply watched him. Then he asked if his parents had been murdered for such a ridiculous reason. With his hand already on his weapon, he concluded that in the end he hadn't needed to listen to him at all. And to finish, he simply asked if Junsu didn't agree. Instead of answering, the man simply made a hand gesture, which brought a puzzled look to the young man's face. In front of him, he held his stance without saying a word. Soon, his hand rose slowly, and then his hand closed over the other. Not understanding, the master wondered what that was, perhaps some form of sign language. Suddenly, a man with long hair appeared silently behind him, and the newcomer simply looked down at him from above. Turning around, he met the gaze of the man who had silently appeared behind him. Without hesitation, he jumped back to create distance, asking who the man was and when he had arrived. At a distance, Junsu placed his hands over his chest, signaling that the time had not yet come. Then he opened his hands, completing the signal for the man. The long-haired newcomer remained silent, simply watching. Slowly, he walked over and stood beside Junsu, ignoring the young master. Standing at the man's side, Junsu revealed that Nameless had never been who Chiang expected, and that he himself hadn't come down merely for polite exchanges. To finish, he declared that he would see him at the next board meeting, where they would settle the matter once and for all. With that, the master was left behind in the parking lot as the two men walked away. Standing with his back turned, he simply tightened his grip on the weapon in his hand. And with a determined look, he agreed that they would indeed resolve the matter. The scene shifted to the city's buildings under the night sky. And elsewhere, a man with dark sunglasses and a cigar asked whether members of the Dobang Association had also gotten involved. An informant from the Ojang faction known as Mendaphone began to report the events. He told them that while chasing the bounty on director Herin Yeon, Pincher had lost his right arm and Batter had ended up in the ICU with serious injuries. The informant went on, saying that rumors claimed Vice President Yang of Chiansu had already met with the Dobang Association on several occasions. With that, the man in sunglasses concluded that since Junsu had aligned himself with Chang, Yang had been forced to turn to outside mercenaries. Faced with this revelation, he understood that Yang's involvement was turning the family feud into a full-scale war. Then he asked where that man was at the moment. In a warehouse, a mannequin sat on a couch, and a voice gave the order to fire. Immediately, an explosion destroyed the mannequin as the three men watched. One of them explained that the explosive was designed to direct shrapnel into the spine, and that they were ready to fire as soon as they received a text signal. Vice President Yang then asked if he could count on them, and the man wearing protective glasses confirmed that everything had been tested. It was explained that explosives had been installed in all the seats designated for Chang's supporters in the meeting room, and since the detonator was made of ceramic, it would not be detected by metal detectors. Another man added that the seating arrangement was correct, but that their response would be quick even if there were changes. However, he pointed out that the problem was that man and asked if it would be fine with his whereabouts unknown. With a determined look, Vice President Wang Huyang declared that neither Chiang nor Junsu were concerned because no one could fix the wrongs he had suffered. With the end of that turbulent day, a sinister calm settled over the country, and as the tension reached its peak, reports of internal conflict within Chianhu began to surface. On the day of the board meeting, the Chianhu building was surrounded by unprecedented media attention. Reporters in the crowd questioned what was going on, on as no board member or vehicle had arrived. Soon, one of them pointed to something, saying that just a picture of that would give them material for the entire month. With Chianhu's main security personnel gathered there, expectations were high that something big was about to happen. Inside an office, it was revealed that according to Director Yan, Japil Kim had been the one responsible for leaking information about the meeting, and the director of the Chianhu Group, Taha Jinn, commented that this was a way of fanning the flames as Vice President Yang would be concerned about an all-out war. Speaking of which, he suggested it was better to bring in more people, asking if the young master had been located yet. Director Myong-dae Kim replied that unfortunately President Baek had ordered security to focus on the first floor. Meanwhile, at the entrance of the building, a figure was walking toward the reporters. Back in the office, Taha Jinn found this situation ridiculous, commenting that the person didn't seem to care about the message he was sending. Then he wondered aloud whether Taha would really dare walk in through the front door. On the 36th floor of Chianhu headquarters, a certain door had remained closed for months. That door led to the president's office, a room reserved for all leaders of Chianhu where a gong would sound. Inside, a ritual was taking place, for that place reigned over everything, and many coveted the key to its doors. While musicians beat the drums, the shaman conducted the ceremony with his gong. Several shirtless men danced fervently to the rhythm of the drums. At the same time, another man moved with zeal before a table of offerings. The eldest among them shouted amidst the dance. Far away at the end of a hallway, Jumsu watched in silence. Back in the office, Taha Jinn asked about him, being informed that he was on the 36th floor. It was soon explained that a shamanic rite was taking place at the vice president's request, and for that reason, the floor manager had to be present. Myong-dae Kim then asked the reason for the ritual, only to hear that the vice president must be feeling excited. It was clarified that the man was excited at the prospect of becoming the next president, and one could hardly be more obvious about it. With a distant look, Taha Jinn recalled that after his grandfather's death, most had attributed the massacre of the legalists to his father. But the truth he revealed was that the person who tortured the legalists to death was none other than the vice president himself. To conclude, he stated that he had seen it all with his own eyes, because his father had wanted someone to keep a close watch on him. Suddenly, the memory of a scream echoed in Myong-dae Kim's mind. In the scene, a bound man cried out that he was not part of the legalist group, claiming they had only respected the late president. With pliers in hand, the vice president demanded the Jin family's secrets, threatening to kill him if he stayed silent. Back in the present, Taha Jinn could hardly wait, wondering who would take Taha's head first, him or the vice president. Outside the building, reporters tried to film the interior, commenting that the lobby was completely blocked off. As one of them turned, he bumped into a passing man. Failing to recognize Taha, the others wondered who he was, assuming he must be a new employee. However, from inside the lobby, Myong-dae Kim recognized him instantly. With an incredulous look, he could only wonder if the young master was being serious. A faint smile formed on Taha's face. Elsewhere, he entered the Bowman Gukbap restaurant, knowing that although his life was still intact, the day ahead would be difficult. Eventually, he visited Guangsu in a room, who joked that he didn't need so many visits or he'd die of embarrassment. Taha said there was something he was very curious about, and Guangsu offered to answer. Without hesitation, the young master asked why he hadn't run away. In response, the other man only gave a calm smile. Standing in the room, Taha remarked that after the massacre, Chianhu was a hopeless place for a surviving legalist like him. With a questioning look, he asked what kept him there when he could have fled. He also wanted to know why Chianhu would place a spy beside someone of no value to them. With a serene smile, Guangsu replied that it was because of his determination. He believed that someone, one day, would follow in the late president's footsteps. This blind conviction, he explained, was something Chianhu could not ignore, and that was why the spy chose to have hope and wait with him. Surprised by the revelation, the heir could only ask who that person might be. Suddenly, in the building's lobby, a voice shouted for everyone to stand at attention. The sudden order caught Chianhu's security guards off guard. As a new group marched inside, it was announced that it was election day and unidentified individuals were forbidden to enter. The captain of the black team, Vu Kim, then gave the order to immediately kill anyone who posed a threat to Chianhu. One of the men in the lobby remarked that another celebrated face had arrived, recognizing the captain. It was explained that the black team was a secret espionage unit with far more field experience than the headquarters personnel. Moreover, it was revealed that with the team positioned in a hard-to-reach location, Vice President Yang had gained the support he wanted. Soon, the black team took formation in the lobby. One of the men stated that this, however, did not make them enemies. After all, while the security staff might be divided by whom they served, the mission of protecting Chianhu remained the same for all. And no matter how confident he seemed, that place was a tiger's den with 400 men ready to strike. With a faint smile, Tao walked toward the main entrance without the slightest hesitation. Thus, Myong-dae Kim ordered the blinds on the main door to be lowered as soon as he entered. With his hand on his weapon, the order to eliminate him swiftly had already been given. However, the young master stopped at the entrance and began to introduce himself. In a loud voice, he declared himself Taha Jinn, grandson of the late President Suko Jin and son of Suyep Jin. The statement caused murmurs among the reporters, while Vice President Yang observed the scene. Elsewhere, Taha Jinn smiled, wondering if he planned to simply walk in like last time. Taha went on to say that he had escaped death in an ambush 17 years ago, and after a long journey, had returned. Finally, holding a pen in his hand, he stated that he was there to honor his grandfather's last wishes and declare his right as heir of Chianhu. He then raised the object and asked if anyone there recognized that pen. In response, one of the guards merely scoffed, saying it was a thing of the past. Without understanding, the other man watched as his colleague began walking toward him. That, he recalled, was why he had chosen to remain with hope and wait by his side. The memory continued with the man asking who among the legalists still remained. It was said that the legalist faction was composed of more than just those who had knelt at the gate that day. The memory then shifted back to the scene of the shamanic ritual. The shaman continued to lead the ceremony. With pliers, the demand was made to reveal the secrets he knew about the Jinn family. At that moment, Taha Jinn revealed that the one who had tortured the legalists to death was Vice President Yang. To conclude, he affirmed that he had seen it all, since his father had sent him to watch the vice president. Meanwhile, the dance continued amidst the sound of drums. The order was clear: speak or die for your silence. During the ritual, the vice president sought judgment for his actions, but also blessings for himself as the new heir. Suddenly, back in the lobby, one of the men knelt before Taha. Soon, several others followed, welcoming the young master. The scene left both reporters and guards speechless. Meanwhile, Taha Jinn simply laughed at the situation. Then, a memory showed the same man asking his executives to take care of the company until his return. With his head lowered to the floor, one of them apologized on behalf of all the legalists for failing to fulfill the president's last wish and to protect the company. With that, Taha announced that the board meeting awaited them and called them to come along. Next, Taha led the group of legalists toward the building where the meeting would take place. Thus, the revelation of his identity as the son of Suyep Jinn left those outside completely stunned. Meanwhile, inside, Taha Jinn walked down the hallway with his subordinates. The young director wore a confident expression as he made his way to the confrontation. Elsewhere, the head of security, Yang Min, questioned what was happening around him. The news of the vice president's loyalty left him perplexed, as he remembered him leading the black team in the massacre of the former legalists. Soon, one of his men warned him to prepare for the group's arrival while holding a gun. Even so, the subordinate questioned the order, asking if they weren't going to fight. After a moment, Yang Min agreed with his subordinate's suggestion. Then Taha Jinn told his men that the vice president's betrayal changed nothing, since their group was still 3 times larger. With that, the head of security added that it was imperative to resolve the conflict there to secure the council's vote. He knew that any failure would make him responsible, not only for his career, but also for the incident at the annex. Suddenly, a female voice interrupted the conversation, asking about all the commotion. Soon, the external director, Haran Yeon, approached, commenting that something interesting seemed to be happening. Yang Min turned in surprise, immediately recognizing Director Yan. At that moment, Vice President Yang explained that he had urgently summoned Taha for the board meeting. It then revealed that the young master was a key witness to both the yacht incident and the recent massacre of the Jin family. Yang declared that if these facts were linked to Chianhu, they would be treated as an organized coup for power. Upon hearing the statement, Director Yeon observed the scene with a discreet smile on her face. With that, she agreed to the situation and offered to lead the way to the meeting room. She also added that her official role there was to ensure the company followed the rules. Soon, she turned and asked the young master to follow her. The group then entered Chianhu headquarters' VIP elevator and began descending. Inside the elevator, the director remarked to the vice president that she would never have imagined him as a legalist. She went on, supposing that his former ambition for power had been an act, since the legalists served the late president Suko Jin. Finally, Haran asked whether he had maintained the facade out of loyalty to a dead man or if he had simply been waiting for the young master's return. In response, Vice President Yang stated that he had no idea even after the attack at the annex. He explained that he only learned the truth when former security guard Wang Su contacted him and he saw the photo released during the bounty hunt. That was the moment he realized the young master was alive and that their long vigil had finally been rewarded. As soon as the elevator doors opened, Taha asked Director Yan if the elementary school she attended still existed. She replied with a laugh that the school had already disappeared and wanted to know the reason for his interest. Then Yang commented on how bittersweet it is to see the past disappear, as memories last a lifetime. With that, he continued, explaining that when a workplace of 30 years vanishes, it feels as if one's very existence has been erased. For that reason, he said he had endured everything to ensure that madmen would not bring Chianhu to ruin. It was then announced that the vice president and the director were entering the room accompanied by someone. Soon, the scene opened to the Chianhu board of directors meeting, with everyone already seated. At the table sat director Myung Gai Kim, one of Chang's supporters. There was also director Piotr Jang, an ally of the vice president. Among those present was director Du Gyeon Han, who maintained a moderate position. Taking her place, Haran Yeon announced to those present that she had brought a man as a key witness for the urgent agenda. With that, Taha stood behind an empty chair at the head of the table, staring at the board. At the other end, Taha Jinn leaned back in his chair to watch the scene. Soon, a man at the podium declared the opening of the 81st Chianhu Board of Directors meeting. However, just as he was about to announce the first agenda item of the day, a hand was raised to interrupt him. Executive Director Tachuo, a supporter of Chong, demanded to know the meaning of the situation. He protested, questioning how they could bring a wanted fugitive to a meeting that governed all of Chianhu. Even as the moderator tried to explain, Tachuo slammed the table and said that was exactly his point. He reminded everyone that the matter concerned the ambush at the annex, where important company executives had been murdered. With that, Taha Jinn added that such an incident was a matter for the police, not the boardroom. Vice President Yang asked Mr. O to watch his words and revealed that the witness was the biological son of Suyeo Jin. Upon hearing the news, Tachuo scoffed, asking if they were supposed to bow and serve Taha as the new heir. Soon, he accused the vice president of clinging to any hope to reach the 36th floor. The other directors on Taha Jinn's side laughed at the accusation. Then, Taha broke the silence and began listing names, starting with Captain Yuri Nikulin of the Watercall Military Company. As he tapped his fingers on the table, he continued naming Vladimir Ilyin, Harry Felt, and 4 other men. Through a flashback, he revealed that of the 8 men who had boarded the yacht, he had already dealt with 7. He went on to explain that the last man, an Asian who spoke Korean, was the only one he had never captured, but whom he had found in Chianhu. Outraged, Director Tachuo asked what kind of nonsense that was and demanded proof immediately. However, Taha simply replied no, justifying that this was not how he usually worked. With a mocking smile, the man remarked that Taha might as well say he had fought 7,000 men. In response, Taha tapped his finger on the table. With an aura around him, he commented that the director did not seem to be very good at reading the room. Then he mentioned the death of Insu Kim and the murder of the Jin family in their annex. Right after that, he pointed out the disappearance of Director Hong and asked how the others still had the audacity to speak that way. Director O just stared at him in silence. Seeing that he would not respond, Taha asked if he was finished because now he would like to speak. Far from there, the scene shifted to the facades of several businesses along a commercial street. In that place, Guangsu was preparing for the confrontation, fastening a knife and adjusting a gun in his holster. Right after, he straightened his jacket and got ready to leave. As soon as he stepped onto the sidewalk, a blue van pulled up beside him and the door slid open. From inside the vehicle, a voice called out, asking if he was Guangsu. Then Suri-un remarked that he looked ready to head out. It was then that Guangsu recognized them as the townspeople who had treated him when he was wounded. The former leader of the Yabiri gang, Suri-un, invited him to join them as she and the dead broker Gray were also heading to Chianhu. Even so, he warned them not to underestimate the situation, reminding them that this wasn't a game and they could die. However, Suri-un cut him off, stating that they knew that better than anyone, since it wasn't the first time they had dealt with Taha's methods. Back in the meeting room, Tachuo asked if Taha wished to speak. The young man then began his speech, commenting on the country's laws and the revised inheritance and gift tax law. He explained that Article 1 of this law aimed to promote national wealth and therefore exempted certain assets from inheritance tax. With that, he clarified that assets, such as stocks and bonds, were exempt from taxes when passed down to blood relatives. Finally, he revealed that this law, unknown to the public, was passed only 2 months before he and his grandfather were ambushed on the yacht. Taha continued, saying that the 28.5% of shares owned by his grandfather and father were entirely inherited by the late President Guho Jin. At that moment, Tachuo interrupted him once again, questioning the point of this since the law didn't apply only to Chianhu. Next, Vice President Yang stepped in, telling Tachu that enough was enough. The director turned around, surprised at the order. With his hands on the table, Yang began explaining that an emergency committee had been formed after the death of President Suko Jin. He added that the legalists had been purged, Guho Jin took over the presidency, and then asked how long it all took. Soon after, he revealed that it had all happened in just 1 week, right after President Suko Jin's funeral. He then reminded Tachu that he was only there because 2 of his superiors had been dismissed, making the director slam the table in protest. Taha then interjected, suggesting that perhaps it was all just a coincidence. He began listing the events, mentioning that the broker who brought him back to Korea was affiliated with Chianhu. Then he pointed out that Insu Kim, without bodyguards, just happened to be the first to die. Next, he highlighted that the Jin family held a meeting in the same village from his childhood. Furthermore, he pointed out that when he got there, everyone except Chang was dead. Finally, he questioned how he ended up meeting Human from the Ojang faction purely by chance. The mention of the name made the directors whisper among themselves, questioning Ojang's involvement in the matter. Thus, Director Heron Yan leaned over the table, watching the situation with interest. Confused, Director Tachuo turned to the young Taha Jinn and repeated the name Human. However, the other simply remained seated with his arms crossed, keeping silent. Then, in a flashback, showed Taha asking Human if he was with Chianhu. In the memory, the young man explained that he had overheard the call and was only helping temporarily. Soon, Taha revealed he had heard from Chinon that Junsu had taken care of him, questioning how he was still alive and who he really was. Back in the present, he explained to the council that Human had been hired by Chinon, to track down the assailant behind In-soo Kim's death. He then questioned why Chiang would give such an order to the Ojong faction when Chianhu's own security was at his disposal. At that moment, one of the directors interjected, asking why he would expose company affairs to outsiders and put it at risk. During the accusation, Taha Jinn merely observed everything with a faint smile. Still, Taha continued, stating that it was to gain leverage because if Chiang wanted to join the council after becoming president. With that, he concluded that his rival would need Ojong's help and thought their support would serve him somehow. Another memory then showed Chiang telling Japil Kim that he understood the situation and asking what he wanted in return. The Ojong underboss replied that he didn't want money, only that they keep quiet about the matter. This revelation threw the meeting room into an uproar, with the directors whispering among themselves. Soon, Taha commented that no one else seemed to know about Human's involvement, implying that Chiang had kept the matter a secret. He then reasoned that it made sense since only Chiang himself would be joining the council, and there was no reason for others to know about the deal. At that moment, Vice President Yang stood up and, as a matter of order, proposed reopening the investigations into the events mentioned. Shortly after, one of the directors agreed, suggesting the creation of an emergency committee to thoroughly investigate the yacht incident and the Jin family murders. Yang added that if the allegations were true, the council's legitimacy would be in doubt, proposing to postpone the meeting and summon Human. The proposal sparked another wave of whispers among the directors present in the room. Meanwhile, Director Herin Yan simply watched the unfolding events with her arms crossed. She then addressed Taha Jinn, commenting that the vice president's wishes were clear and asking if he had anything to add. The young director remained silent, seated in his chair. Suddenly, he brought a handkerchief to his face in an abrupt gesture. Finally, Director Taekshu Oh observed the scene with a surprised expression. With the handkerchief still in hand, he lamented how greed for power could change a man. Soon after, he turned to Taha and asked why he was purposely straying from the truth. He then confronted him directly, asking who had murdered In-soo Kim, spilled the blood of his allies, and ambushed the village. While gripping his cane tightly, he pressed on, demanding to know who had killed his father, who had wounded him, and finally, who the real culprit was. With a hand on his chest, Taha Jinn turned to the vice president, questioning why he was ignoring his truth, even after all he had done for Chianhu. The other directors watched the scene in absolute silence. For one of them, it was unclear what he intended to achieve, but his presence at that meeting seemed to be a grave mistake. The same director then reflected that the young master couldn't possibly know certain details unless he was closely connected to Chiang. It was then that an intense aura began to emanate from Taha Jinn's hand as he held the cane. Without hesitation, he confirmed the accusation of killing his own father to inherit Chianhu's shares, agreeing with the seriousness of the situation. With his arm raised, he declared that he would return all the inherited shares to the state. He further clarified that this return also included the portion belonging to his grandfather, a detail that, according to him, the young master could never have known. The sudden declaration left Vice President Yang completely stunned, and then Vice President Yang loudly questioned whether he really intended to donate all of his inherited shares to the state. With a smile, the heir confirmed that since the legal formalities were still underway, he would renounce the inheritance in favor of the state. He then detailed that the funds would be directed to the Ministry of Health and Welfare and absorbed into the National Pension Reserve. With this, he hoped to prevent the devaluation of the shares and allow the pension fund to support more beneficiaries. Furthermore, he declared that he only aspired to create a happy future for Chianhu without coveting power at the expense of others' misfortune. However, the proposal to donate almost 30% of Chianhu's shares raised questions about what he was truly planning. Next came doubts as to whether this move was a threat or if there were other means to retain power. A possible connection with the sect of eternal life was even considered as the reason behind such confidence. After a moment, Vice President Yang simply told him to do as he wished. The unexpected response left him silent. Soon after, Taha intervened, agreeing that he could do whatever he wanted with the shares, but demanding that the investigations into the incidents be reopened. At that moment, the accused merely stared back without saying a word. Director Jasu Chien then slammed the table and agreed, demanding that the cases be made a priority. In addition, he stated that they first needed to determine whether the heir was eligible to receive the shares. Another director then asked Ijasu Chien to mind his words, reminding him that this was still a board meeting. The accused then asked if the director truly believed those accusations, questioning whether he saw him as a monster who would kill his own family. In response, Director Chien called him shameless, saying he knew exactly what he had done the previous month. He revealed that under the pretense of having caught the culprit behind the massacre, the accused had lured the families of his late uncles to a restaurant. There, the family members had been tied up and gagged on the floor. Shortly after, multiple gunshots had been fired through the door of the room where they were held. As a result, they were all killed, but a janitor hiding in a storage room had witnessed the entire scene. Back in the present, the accused calmly asked if there was any proof of what was being said. He went on to question how they could be sure this janitor wasn't just an invention. Director Chien replied that the janitor was well regarded in the company, with 8 years of service, and that he had personally verified her background. He'd raised his voice to emphasize his point. In response, the accused struck his cane against the floor, questioning if they were accusing him of killing his entire family simply because they were a threat. With his arms open, he asked if they really saw him as someone who would kill anyone who crossed his path. Director Chiam then leaned back and said the truth would be revealed through investigations. Meanwhile, Taha remained silent, observing his opponent's reaction. The calm expression as he denied the accusations seemed to catch his attention. Still, even knowing that every word was a lie, the situation felt like being ensnared by a serpent. The hare, meanwhile, kept wearing a wide, confident smile. Taha realized he needed to end the meeting quickly, as his opponent was clearly plotting something. He'd raised his hand, agreeing that the investigations were essential. But Director O slammed the table, complaining that the agenda was already set and could not be delayed. Director Chian quickly warned that electing a president today only to later expose him as a criminal would cause a brutal drop in Chianhu's stock price. Taha then addressed the vice president, suggesting that they postpone the meeting right there. However, the accused raised his hand and offered a new proposal. He acknowledged the points of both directors, admitting that ending the meeting would leave the position vacant and that the concerns were valid. For that reason, he suggested being elected that day, but postponing his formal inauguration for 1 month to conclude the investigations. Vice President Yang countered that 1 month was impossible, as a full reinvestigation would take at least 6 months. The proponent then questioned how they could guarantee he wouldn't use his authority to influence the election. He proposed proceeding with the election, reminding the vice president that resignation was always an option if he felt dissatisfied. The other man simply stared at him in silence. Meanwhile, Director Yeon observed the scene, questioning the reason for such haste, given how openly suspicious he was acting. Faced with the stalemate, the moderator announced that they would proceed with the main item on the agenda, the presidential election. He informed them that 2 candidates had declared their intention to run. The moderator then named them Director Jin and Vice President Yang. The vote count suggested a possible 7-7 tie, hinging on a single decision. But the possibility of a tie raised questions about the accused's true goal, as the rules would require a new vote. A new suspicion arose, perhaps some of his own supporters would betray him. The moderator began the voting, asking all those in favor of Director Jin to raise their hands. Immediately, several hands went up in support. Among them was Director Do Gayon Han, the moderate, who also raised his hand. With the count reaching 7 votes, the results seemed to be going as expected. However, another hand suddenly went up in the middle of the room. It was Director Pyoto Jang, one of the vice president's declared supporters. The unexpected move left Yang frozen. Director Jasu Chian rose to his feet and shouted Pyoto's name. The man tried to explain himself, but his voice faltered at first. Holding a small detonator, he explained that he had been compelled to act after discovering the vice president's true nature. Yang reacted upon recognizing the device, realizing the terrible truth behind the situation. A flashback showed the order to detonate an explosive that had violently destroyed a mannequin during a test. At that moment, it was explained to the vice president that the explosive had been designed to direct shrapnel and would be ready to detonate at a signal. Back in the meeting, the vice president asked why Pyoto had the switch, which was supposed to be a precaution only if the opponent resorted to violence. It was then revealed that explosives had been placed under each seat assigned to the hare's supporters. Unable to believe it, he turned to the director and asked if a fellow loyalist had truly betrayed him and sided with a rival. The scene recalled the accused's earlier words, asking if they saw him as a man who would kill anyone who crossed his path. Yang finally realized those words had been a direct threat to Pyoto, who repeatedly apologized while holding the detonator. Sensing the imminent danger, Taha immediately shouted for everyone to get down while pushing the vice president to the floor. Director Pyoto then pressed the button, detonating the explosives beneath the seats of his former allies. For a brief moment, the scene showed the peaceful facade of the Chianhu building under a clear sky. Then a voice gave the final order to fire, and a spray of blood struck the meeting room's window from the inside. Amid the chaos, the man at the center of the accusations remained calm, even with blood splattered on his face and screams all around. Right after the detonation, Myong-gai Kim looked at the carnage around him and questioned what had just happened. Among the blood-soaked floor, the moderator announced that Director Cheong had secured the majority with 7 votes in his favor. The chairman of the board, Song-Eun Lee, declared him the new president. After the gavel struck, the bodies of the vice president and Director Chien lay lifeless in the room. The victor then stood and, upon looking at the bodies on the floor, mentioned the storage room. As he wiped the blood from his face, he remarked that cockroaches really did seem to hide anywhere. With his face covered in blood, Taha turned and shouted the name of the new president. Thus, Taha stood up and faced his rival on the other side of the blood-soaked room. He then demanded to know how he could kill so many people in broad daylight. With a mocking air, the accused pretended to have done nothing, saying that Director Pyoto had his own reasons. Right after, he commented on the foolishness of anyone daring to provoke a sleeping bear. Taha then gave the order for them to stand up. At that moment, Director Yun charged toward him. As she ran, she shouted furiously about having been dragged into that situation. The target, however, only watched the incoming attack with a confident smile. Suddenly, Du Gaion's hand appeared and grabbed the director's wrist, stopping the blow in midair. She then ordered him to release her, calling him an unleashed dog. Right after, the accused turned to Yun, saying she was mistaken about who had activated the bombs. Taking advantage of the distraction, Taha leaped over the table in a surprise attack. The young master continued his advance through the air toward the target. Without turning around, the man finished his sentence by asking if the blame wasn't being misdirected. Before the blow could land, Du Gaion's hand intercepted Taha with a kick to the chest that sent him flying. The impact hurled the young man to the other side of the conference room. Seizing the opportunity, Yun charged at Du Gaion's hand, who ducked to evade the attack. As she straightened up, she glared at the two of them and declared that it would be that way. Then she stated that there was no need to report anything, since she could defeat them right there. Across the room, Taha stood up and agreed that everything would end there for the opponent. With that, he pulled his hidden card from behind his back, declaring that the time was now. Suddenly, Yang awoke, trying to call out to the young master. The vice president, injured on the floor, asked if he was unharmed. Taha remained silent, simply looking toward his fallen ally. At that moment, the accused ordered Junsu of the phone to alert the entire building's security. The order was to blame Taha and the legalists for an attack in the conference room. Soon, Yang Min-mun and his team received the command to immediately eliminate all remaining members. The head of security hesitated for a moment upon receiving the order. Suddenly, one of the men beside him was struck, taking everyone by surprise. Amid the chaos, the guard appeared and declared that the war had begun. In the conference room, Taha simply observed the scene in silence. While looking at the fallen vice president, the young master pondered his next move. He then realized that the opponent must have a plan to escape and that more reinforcements would arrive soon. Across from him, the accused waved with a mocking smile. Despite the situation, Taha gripped the handle tighter. The target simply watched him, anticipating his move. With that, he decided he needed to eliminate him that day, or perhaps he would never have another chance. At that moment, a series of memories came to his mind. The first memory was of when he was asked to take the presidency of the Chianhu Group. The second was the promise he made to his grandfather that he would inherit the company no matter what. Lastly, the image of the legalists awaiting his return as young master came to mind. When the memories ended, his decision became final. Just as he was about to act, the vice president grabbed him and told him to escape while they could. The man then pulled him closer and repeated that they should leave the area immediately. The ally looked at Taha with wide eyes. He said that the young master's smile had brought him back to his senses, insisting they could already leave. Taha then smiled back while the opponent watched them from across the room. Looking back, he stated that there is no such thing as left 3 times and swore to defeat her at the next opportunity. With a broad smile, the accused retorted that it was a pity because he would not have the next time. Thus, Taha and the vice president withdrew into a dark corridor. Soon, he pointed toward the stairs, saying they could not use the elevators. The vice president, however, disagreed and assured him that the elevators would work. Taha then questioned him, explaining that there would surely be guards posted on the stairs. With that, the ally revealed he was aware and for that reason had ordered the elevators to be checked first. Not understanding, the young master asked what that meant. At that very moment, the elevator doors opened. It was then revealed that even with his skills, it would be impossible to face Chianhu's security alone. Right after, it was said that the opponent was not the only one who had prepared for the chaos of that day. Inside the elevator, Vu Kim cleaned his weapon and reminded the young master that he was no longer alone. Then the head of the American branch's black team introduced himself and apologized for the delay. Vu Kim then called the young master to leave, who only watched him in silence. Outside, the police began dispersing the reporters, announcing that the event was over. As they left, one of the journalists complained about the excessive security that had closed the main entrance. Suddenly, a noise from inside the building caught Yang Min-mun's attention. One of his men beside him turned and asked if he had heard it too. In the main lobby, a large-scale battle had broken out between the two security factions. With that, Yang Min-mun ordered his men to spread out to prevent the enemy from advancing. The fight then intensified, with Chianhu's team clashing against the black team. The leader of Group 2 of the black team, Ozra, lamented that they had been too slow and ordered them not to let the enemy get close. He soon questioned how they could have declared war directly in the company's headquarters. At the same time, bodyguard Jung Yo Kwang fired into the air, demanding to know where they thought they were going. Amid the battle, one of the black team members was shot in the hand as he tried to use his communicator. The attack grazed his fingers, preventing him from calling for reinforcements. Even wounded, the man only ordered his companions to advance. One of his subordinates volunteered to clear a path, and Asra approved the plan. As soon as he received the order, the man ran to the front line under the crossfire from the security team. Even after being hit, his body was used as a shield so his comrade could push forward. With that, Ozra shouted that the way was clear and ordered all units to advance. Right after, the leader of Group 4 of the black team, Eric Kang, also launched his attack. He soon found himself surrounded by Chianhu's security team, who attacked with batons. Still, he skillfully dodged the blows, defending against their strikes. Seeing this, Ozra shouted for his men to catch them and ran to join the fight. Meanwhile, Eric Kang continued his swift advance down the hallway. Suddenly, Yang Min-mun intercepted him, blocking his blade with his own. The head of security then taunted him, saying he should have retired and stayed away. In response, Eric Kang remarked that it had been a while and mocked him for losing an eye. At that moment, an announcement echoed over the loudspeakers, warning of a large-scale terrorist attack in the building. The message instructed all employees to head to safe rooms as quickly as possible. Far away on another floor, a weapon cut through the air and struck Chianhu's guards. As soon as the bodies hit the ground, the vice president appeared on the scene along with Gray and Suri Un. Hui Kim explained that since the employees were at home, the loudspeaker announcement was just a trap to lure them out. With that, Taylor questioned the lack of security for such a bold attempt. The vice president deduced that most of the security forces had been positioned on the first floor to contain the media. Hui Kim added that thanks to using the council's private elevator, they had reached the executive lobby on the 11th floor. The plan was to use the 2 emergency staircases on opposite sides of the building to go down and catch the enemy by surprise. Thus, Taha reflected that under normal circumstances, using the elevator would have been a death sentence. Vice President Yang agreed, stating that Taha Jinn would not have planned a war there if he had thought everything through. With the plan set, the young master opened the door to the emergency stairs, leading the group. As they descended, he remarked that the pieces of the situation were starting to fall into place now that his mind was clearer. The vice president explained that Chiang would already have the 8 votes needed to become president even without Pyoto's betrayal. Furthermore, he mentioned that everything the rivals said in the meeting was to provoke and threaten Pyoto into pressing the detonator. The scene showed a flashback of the man apologizing while holding the device in his hand. Thus, the vice president concluded that Chiang had likely exploited the fact that Pyoto was a family man. He then revealed that eliminating the legalists was necessary to prevent the reopening of investigations into the Annex massacre and the yacht incident. Finally, he stated that although Chiang tried to appear indifferent, the mere presence of Taha and the legalists had cornered him. Hui Kim then added that the enemy would suffer a major blow if the 2 of them could get out alive. The vice president declared it was imperative that Chianhu's future not fall into the hands of a madman like that. Taha, however, questioned whether that was truly the case. He then wondered if escaping alive was really the only way to strike at Chiang. Meanwhile, in the conference room, the scene remained empty and destroyed. There, Taha Jinn complained to Mayon Guy for not shutting down the elevators, asking what he had been doing while the rats escaped. A subordinate explained that knowing he would lose the fight, he preferred to stay out of the way. The president mocked that he couldn't even threaten to cut his pay since there was nothing left to cut. The 2 then stopped in front of the conference room door. Upon entering, they found Junsu waiting inside. Taha Jinn commented that despite the setbacks, he had become president as promised. He then extended his hand and demanded the key to the 36th floor. Without hesitation, Junsu raised a key ring. He handed it to the president, congratulating him on the achievement. Lastly, he warned him not to disappoint either him or Chianhu. As Junsu's assistant watched, Taha Jinn held the keys and declared that he had finally done it. He then turned to Junsu and asked if they should take a look at the president's famous office. The ally, however, warned that the place was still dangerous and suggested evacuating by the helicopter already prepared. Without turning, the president curtly refused the offer. Junsu and his assistant then simply watched him in silence. He turned back and questioned why he should flee like last time, stating that the building was his now. Soon after, he announced that his first orders as Chianhu's newest leader were for Junsu to kill Taha and all the other legalists. To finish, he demanded that he wanted each of their heads by the end of that day. Meanwhile, Ozra, the leader of Group 2 of the Black Team, ordered them to close in, stating that the opponents were weak at close range. Right after, he charged forward, shouting that he would show the rookies what a real fight looked like. At the same time, Eric Kang, the leader of Group 4, taunted his opponent, asking why he remained so weak. With a strike, he reminded him that he had high hopes for Yang Min-mun, asking if he had stopped training since joining the Jin family. However, the young man shouted back that if his opponent cared so much, that he should have been the one to stay. He then revealed that he knew the man's skills well, as he had once been his mentor, and that he himself had been trained by Junsu to capture Taha. Still, the leader of Group 4 asked why there was such a vast difference between their abilities. Next, his weapon clashed violently with that of his former apprentice. With a single blow, the younger fighter was thrown back from the impact. Thus, the veteran's superiority made clear the combat experience the Black Team had gained overseas. From the floor, the injured disciple raised his weapon, facing what seemed to be the wall Junsu had spoken of. The scene then shifted to an earlier moment, where a subordinate asked Junsu what he meant. In the same place, the man argued that they had made no tactical errors in the village operation, questioning why they were being punished for lacking information on Taha. Calmly, the leader explained that he wasn't blaming anyone, as the demotion was merely to keep them out of harm's way. Not understanding, the subordinate questioned the decision, arguing that no one in Chianhu posed a threat to their team. With a firm gaze, Junsu asked if he would rather try again instead. He then asked if the young man would be confident in winning should he face young master Taha once more. The question caught him off guard, making him ask for it to be repeated. Unfazed, Junsu repeated his question about his confidence in confronting Taha in another fight. Faced with the persistence, he could not answer immediately. After a moment of hesitation, he finally admitted that he would need more time. With a tone of reproach, the master remarked that even after so many years of training, he was still asking for more time. He then took the blame, saying that he had protected him too much and perhaps prevented him from overcoming that wall on his own. Back in the present, the memory of Junsu's words about how those who retreat before a wall fall into despair froze him in place. In the midst of the clash, Junye Kwang shouted desperately for everyone to get down. Suddenly, a heavy machine gun mounted on a tripod began firing at the intruders. The one manning it called them useless for failing to contain a bunch of men with knives. Immediately after, his shadow loomed over one of the attackers, who looked up completely defenseless. With a thud, Payan Won-ho crushed the man beneath his feet while wielding 2 machine guns. Finally, he identified himself as the vice president of security, the Mad Tiger, and shouted for the intruders to forget about their vacations. He then opened fire with the weapons, mowing down everyone in his path. Meanwhile, still in cover, Junye Kwang questioned whether he was drunk since he was supposed to shoot only at the enemies. Because of this, Eric Kang and his companion were forced to dodge as the gunman complained that he couldn't get a break. From a distance, Ozra recognized the man as the Mad Tiger, confirming that the rumors of his madness were true. Not understanding, he wondered how Junsu could have appointed someone like that as vice president of security. While one of his men fired, the leader of Group 2 voiced aloud whether Junsu had really gone senile. In another hallway, Taha advanced and drove his blade into a guard's back. He then remarked to Vice President Yang that they were getting close, but never imagined Chianhu had such heavily armed forces. The Vice President explained that the Yangwudi military project had been cancelled, but Payan Won had secretly kept it active. After Taha asked about the VP of security, his ally replied that he was a beast and that they needed to hurry to give him backup. Thus, Taha realized that all the security was concentrated on the first floor, as if they were being herded there. When the phone rang, he answered and identified himself. On the other end of the line, Gray commented on the chaos and asked what floor they were on. Seeing the destruction in the hallway, Taha warned him not to come there, as it was too dangerous. Unconcerned, Gray replied that his guy had already spoken to everyone, leaving the other confused. At that moment, Osura appeared in the lobby, humming a tune. With a grin, he ran to the exit, commenting that this was the perfect moment. Soon, his hand slammed onto the door release button. As the glass door slid open, he peeked outside where his men were waiting. Seeing the opening, the security team shouted for the forces not to let them escape and to block the way. Suddenly, Osra's men were knocked to the ground by Payan Won-ho. Mockingly, he asked if they were already leaving, reminding them that a month's notice was required to quit. The opponent replied that it wasn't that at all, but that it seemed the Mad Tiger had forgotten to mention a few things. The remark left the man confused as the sound of an engine grew closer. Then a blue van burst through the building's entrance and slammed straight into him. The impact hurled Payan Won-ho backward, sending him rolling down an escalator. The driver then stepped out of the vehicle, grabbed his gun, and stated that he had never wanted to return to that company. In the end, Gwang Soo-bu, the former co-president of security, observed that nothing had changed in that place. Thus, Ozra praised the impeccable timing, while Gwang Soo-bu asked if the arrival had been deliberate. With a knife in hand, he remarked sarcastically, asking who would plan a return to a company that had already kicked him out once. The sudden appearance made the security team wonder if this was a new enemy. Beside them, Junye Kwang commented that he didn't recognize that face. Moments later, the tripod-mounted machine gun was lifted and resumed firing at the van. With that, Gwang Soo-bu dashed for cover behind a couch, dodging every shot. Now standing, Payan Won-ho said he had been wondering who had shown up. He then identified the man as his former superior, who had been fired for backing the wrong people. The visitor corrected him, stating he preferred to be remembered as the legalist who resigned. The revelation left Yao and Mun frozen in disbelief that the man was indeed Wang Su. He soon recognized the legend who had built the building's entire security system alongside Junsu. At that moment, Vui Kim and his men entered the lobby, commenting on the scare and the mess in the place. One of the newcomers then turned to Ozra and asked if the control room was already secured. Ignoring the question, he looked at the group and asked who those brats were. Wang Soo-bu assured him they could be trusted, revealing that one was a data broker. He then added that the other had been trained to be a successor of the Yen family. The information left Ozra speechless at the revelation. While Vu Kib informed them that the control room was in the basement, the leader of Group 2 said he knew the way and prepared to go. Watching the scene, Payan Won-ho asked where those rookies had come from and ordered his men to kill them all. As soon as the security team aimed their weapons, Wang Soo-gu stepped in and grabbed one of the guard's hands. With a push, he corrected the man's stance, warning that he wouldn't be able to control the recoil that way. Moments later, he punched another guard in the face, shouting for them to hurry because the target was near. He then began correcting and taking down each of the guards, pointing out their posture and combat errors. Within moments, the entire security team lay defeated on the lobby floor. Massaging his neck, Wang Su remarked that he didn't know who their instructor was, but the work was a mess. Seeing this, Eric Kang declared that things had gotten serious and called his men to advance. At the same time, Payan Won-ho's weapon jammed as it ran out of ammo, leaving him frustrated. Without wasting time, Gwangsu-gu charged directly at one of the opposing team's men. With a quick move, he grabbed the guard by the arms while the Mad Tiger did the same from behind. Trapped between the two, the man pleaded desperately for them to save him. As soon as Payeon-won-ho pressed his weapon to the hostage's head, Gwangsu-gu used him as a shield to shoot another enemy. Right after, the vice president of security took advantage of the distraction to slash an opponent with his knife. With a reproachful look, Gwangsu-gu asked how he could use one of his own men as a shield. Smiling, Payeon-won-ho replied that it was only fair to take useless people off the payroll. The veteran then dodged a knife strike, and the two exchanged a flurry of blows. Even so, the Mad Tiger's blade managed to cut his opponent's arm during the fight. The scene then shifted to 2 days earlier, when Gwangsu sat at a table with Ozra. Without preamble, the leader of Group 2 recognized him as his former supervisor but questioned whether it was safe to meet so openly. The visitor replied that it was better this way, as he doubted he was being followed with Chianhu so busy. He then asked who the greatest threat was among the men he hadn't met the last council meeting. Curious, Ozra wanted to know why and asking if he was planning a direct confrontation. The former supervisor held his glass and replied that of course, that wasn't the intention. Despite the denial, he soon added that he wouldn't rule out the possibility. Unshaken, Ozra asked to be warned in advance if that were to happen. Right after, Gwangsu wanted to know if the other knew Payeon-won and was told only that he had taken over his former position at Chianhu. With that, he asked if he remembered the incident in the Middle East where 16 tourists had been taken hostage. The other confirmed that he did, since all the hostages died in the end. Without hesitation, Ozra revealed that Payeon-won was behind it all. The revelation left the veteran utterly shocked and speechless. The leader of Group 2 then explained that the Mad Tiger had killed everyone, hostages and terrorists alike, before disappearing with the ransom money. Back in the present, Gwangsu attacked, unable to believe Junsu had brought a man like that into the group. While dodging, Payeon-won confirmed that Junsu had brought him back from Omen, where he had been hiding. He went on to say that when questioned, the leader gave a justification for his decision. The answer was that what Chianhu needed at that moment was absolute power, as their weapons clashed. The force of the blow was so great that the Mad Tiger's knife shattered into pieces. With the broken blade in hand, he asked how his opponent had managed to do that. Sitting on the floor, Gwangsu admitted that his plan was to avoid unnecessary confrontations. He then stood up and declared that, unfortunately, Payeon-won would have to die. Thus, the story returns to the past in a Middle Eastern country where terrorists maintained a camp. Through a computer, the group's leader announced that the Korean government had failed to meet their demands. He then raised the ransom to $50 million for the release of the 16 hostages. As a threat, he declared that one hostage would be executed every hour if the new demand was refused. The proposal shocked the government negotiators, who recalled the previous demand of only $10 million. Suddenly, something was fired inside the negotiation room, startling the two men. After the shot, the leader's partner took control, demanding $50 million for the 15 remaining hostages. The entire situation began when Korean missionaries were kidnapped in a restricted zone, forcing the government to act. The negotiation team was accompanied by the Red Team's Special Forces unit, of which Payeon-won was a member. Not knowing what to do, one of the negotiators commented that his superiors would never approve an amount above $20 million. Even so, the partner insisted it was their duty to persuade the government to bring the civilians home. From the back of the room, the soldiers showed complete disdain for the conversation. The interruption made the negotiators turn and ask who was there. Without hiding, Payeon-won raised his weapon, saying he didn't believe they would waste the taxpayers' money. He then pointed the gun at the terrorist, stating that everyone there was a waste of oxygen. The news at the time reported that the high tension during the negotiation resulted in a fatal battle. All the hostages, terrorists, and negotiators were found dead, except for a single member of the Red Team. In addition, the account containing the $20 million prepared for the negotiation had vanished from the scene. 6 months later, in a luxurious house in Oman, the survivor enjoyed his new life. Then Payeon-won remarked that he was sure everything had been forgotten. Moments later, he came face to face with Junsu and Ozra, asking why Chianhu had come to visit and if they wanted the money back. Mockingly, he said that not even a hideout full of terrorists had defeated him, and he doubted Chianhu's men could handle him. The leader of Group 2 offered to take care of the situation, but Junsu stopped him, saying it was fine. As soon as the fight began, the two men clashed with such force that the windows shattered. Even with the Mad Tiger proving stronger than the rumors, Ozra noticed the real intention behind the fight. With a quick move, Junsu grabbed his opponent by the neck, clearly assessing his abilities. Surprised, the man asked what kind of person he was since his breathing hadn't changed even after the fight. Calmly, Junsu asked why he had deliberately ruined the negotiation. The question left Payeon-won confused in the middle of the destroyed room. To conclude, the leader stated that if the goal had been the $20 million, he could have simply taken the money before the negotiations even began. Not understanding, the Mad Tiger asked what Junsu was talking about, justifying that he couldn't stand the way those clowns negotiated. With a laugh, he called them fools who believed money solved everything, claiming he had only saved Korea from becoming a laughingstock. The justification was met with a slight smile. With a gesture, Junsu declared that in that case, he was there to recruit him. Then the scene returned to the present, where Taha and his companions were in the hallway with the bodies of the guards. Vice President Yang explained that when the late president Taha Jinn brought Junsu into Chianhu, no one could rival his loyalty. However, he continued, everything changed 18 years ago, about a year before the incident on the young master's yacht. Not understanding, Taha asked what exactly had happened, but the vice president admitted he didn't know the details. He revealed that the president often confided that he was torn about the prospect of joining the council. In a memory, President Guho commented that the council had approached him to join, but he questioned the decision due to its dubious members. At that time, the vice president advised him to refuse the offer, as there was little to gain from the corruption of that era. Back in the present, he explained that while the president traveled, rumors began circulating about his visits to Chianhu's security, which everyone assumed to be routine business. Soon after, a year later, the yacht incident occurred, at a time when Junsu, the president's personal bodyguard, was conveniently absent. Vu Kim concluded by quoting Junsu's words, claiming that only the few with true power could lead the rest. To finish, he revealed that Chianhu's security once had a brutal unit where each group competed to become Junsu's successor. Taha then realized that this was where the assassin Nameless came from, that Du Guyong had been chosen as the final successor. Vu Kim then revealed that he and other black team leaders were members of that unit who had been discarded overseas. The man assured that they knew the real Junsu, who outwardly may have seemed like a dedicated mentor. That mentor had trained them both physically and mentally. In doing so, he earned the loyalty of everyone in a security unit that not even the president could control. Because of this, the blind faith they placed in him ran very deep. However, Vu Kim revealed the truth, stating that Junsu had never seen them as human beings. According to him, Chianhu's security was nothing more than a ranch where Junsu bred his herd to find the best war horse. The scene then shifted to Japil Kim, who explained that the phrase Chianhu has Junsu was used to acknowledge the company's great power. He continued, clarifying that Chianhu's very presidency existed because of that man who had first risen to power through a coup. The revelation left Taha completely speechless. Then Vu Kim compared the former bodyguard to a wild beast, capable of sacrificing his own life for its offspring young master. However, he added that if the offspring failed or became sick, that same beast would break its neck without mercy. After hearing everything, Taha paused for a moment on the stairs and looked at the group. Turning to them, he apologized to Vu, but asked if they could buy him some time. Not understanding their request, the man asked what the young master meant by that. Vice President Yang quickly realized the young man's intention and tried to stop him. He then stepped in front of the door, insisting that he hide and wait for the right moment. To finish, he warned that if he faced Junsu at that moment, he would surely die. In response, Taha stated that he had not been raised that way, recalling that his grandfather had never taught him to retreat. The memory of his parents soon after reinforced that abandoning others had never been an option. With the image of his godfather in mind, he went on, explaining that the new life he had been given was not based on cowardice. In the end, he declared that no one had taught him to abandon those he considered his family. With determination, he stated that if Junsu defined Chianhu, then he himself would kill him, and again asked them to buy him time. Hey everyone, did you enjoy this story? I really liked it. If you want to follow the next part, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. See you in the next story, guys. In a memory, Taha announces he's home and his surprised mother calls out his name. She runs to him, asking if he was bullied at school again. Then his mother hugs him and suggests they switch schools, worried about his father's reaction. She then asks him why he insists on putting up with the bullying. Back in the present, one of the men asks if Taha is really going to take down Junsu. He then explains that with everyone on the first floor, this might be their only chance to neutralize their target. So he asks them to buy him some time, promising he'll return after stopping him. The man with bluish hair questions his confidence about returning, reminding him that the first floor is right there. Standing before the door, Taha states that 10 minutes is all he needs. The man then approaches him and asks if he knows why they became loyalists. He reveals it was because they believed it was the only way to stop Junsu. Seeing this, the older companion shouts Wui's name. He explains that the rejects from Chianhu's Special Operations Division joined Team Black to survive. Wui continues, saying they were sent abroad for dirty work and contact with their families became rare. And that's how they discovered most of their relatives had disappeared in tragic incidents to keep Chianhu's secrets. Wui states that their desire to see Junsu defeated rivals his own, but assures him now is not the time. Taha cuts him off, declaring it's now or never. Grabbing him, Bui questions how he could defeat someone who has reigned for decades, reminding him that he himself almost beat him at the annex. After a moment, Taha simply replies that he can do it. He explains that last time, he was caught off guard while hastily chasing a fleeing Chianhu, but he guarantees that with 10 minutes in a one-on-one fight, he will win. Taha then places his hands on Wui's shoulders and asks him to say he believes in him, and to buy him 10 minutes because then he'll ensure Junsu is neutralized. Wui stares at him, undecided. The older man wonders how he can ask for something like that, but then he himself tells the young master to go. He then states they'll be waiting and asks him to come back to them soon. Taha turns his face to the side and then runs up the stairs. Wui turns to the vice president and says he can't be serious about sending him back after everything. The vice president supposes he's getting old and his memory has grown hazy. and he regrets having forgotten so much about the kind of person the young master was as a child. Meanwhile, in the 11th floor executive lobby, the fight had already begun. One of the loyalists charges at the enemy, but his advance is stopped mid-attack as his opponent says that's strange. Then he's slammed hard onto the floor. An older man questions why they call themselves loyalists, as he doubts they ever met the late chairman. Ledger, the captain of Team Black's Group 5, gets back up. Junsu then asks if young Master Taha is really worth taking such a risk to keep him there. He continues, questioning if it's worth keeping him contained on the floor. Ledger replies that the alternative is to let him go down to the first floor and defeat everyone, so the answer is yes. The group of men then prepares to attack Junsu. Junsu remembers that as a child, the young master used to be bullied at school. Back on the staircase, the vice president explains that his parents didn't send him to a private school, insisting he be raised normally. He continues, saying that when the young master was in the 3rd grade, a 6th grader took his money. Realizing the young master had more money than the others, the aggressor started bullying him every day. And the more the young master fought back, the worse the bullying became. Until one day, he drew a large circle in the schoolyard where everyone could see it. He then started calling out the 6th grade bully for a one-on-one fight every day. Bui asks if the young master beat him, but the vice president explains the bully never even showed up. Instead, he would call him somewhere else and continue the intimidation. And the young master never fought back, just taking the attacks without complaining. The vice president then asks if they know what Taha said back then. Back to the fight in the lobby, one of Ledger's blades shatters on the floor. He then prepares to attack with the broken weapons. Junsu lunges at him. In a memory, his godfather says that's enough and begs them to change schools. His mother also questions why he insists on putting up with the bullying. Taha replies that the aggressor offended him and his friends with words he can't repeat, but he assures his mother he can handle it and asks her to let him try. He then just asks them to say they believe in him. In the present, Junsu glances back towards Ledger. Then, he backs away from the men who are still standing. Taha's voice echoes with a promise that if they did, he would deliver. And he swears he will always win, no matter who he's fighting. Junsu stands still, waiting in the middle of the hall. Taha then appears on the scene wielding a blade. Ledger turns, shouting that this wasn't part of the plan. He runs towards the young master, questioning what he's doing here since the mission was to keep him away. But as he tried to send him away, Taha lunges forward in the blink of an eye. Ledger watches him pass, surprised. Taha focuses his gaze on the opponent before him. Junsu stares back at him. Then Junsu intercepts Taha's attack, grabbing his face with his hand. Holding him, Junsu states that he was waiting for him, and calls him young Master Taha. Ledger can hardly believe it, saying he didn't even see him move. He then wonders how a human can be so fast. Taha attacks Junsu with several blows and tells them to go to the first floor as he'll take over from here. Ledger looks back one last time. Taha affirms that he will be the one to deal with that man. Junsu then attacks him with a powerful kick. He falls to the ground and looks up. Taha gets back up and prepares for the fight. Junsu asks if he's really going to face him, guessing he has a plan. Taha rushes towards him, but Junsu stops the attack, grabbing his face with one hand. He then throws him far away, and comments that, as far as he can see, his plan is nothing special. Then Taha is pushed back with force. Junsu reminds him that they say no one stands a chance against him. Revered in the era of chaos and conflict, he stands at the top of Chianhu's security forces. Those who know his name would never dare challenge Chianhu, as he was the only one who survived the head of Oziong. A flashback shows Taha sitting in a bar. In it, a man states that you should never say never, and that as long as he's human, he can be defeated. The man says that's the spirit, and explains that those who claim fighting Junsu is a lost cause speak out of self-preservation, not fact. He recalls that in the mansion fight, Taha mentioned Junsu shattered his knife with his bare hands. This technique, weapon break, borders on the impossible as it shatters the blade by striking the bevel angle, requiring monstrous strength and grip. He then reveals that this is also a technique of his own creation. In the present, Taha lunges forward and attacks with his weapon. Junsu's skills come from his physique and an innate talent for copying any move he sees. In other words, he will only use techniques familiar to him. Junsu then demonstrates this by breaking Taha's blade with his fingers, and moves in quickly to counterattack. Taha dodges the blow, ducking under it. Junsu looks back and questions him about the new blade. Taha crouches with another weapon, and his opponent asks if he really thinks that will be enough. In a flashback, a man asks a young Taha if he's okay. He pushes him on the swing and mentions that his mother seems very worried about the 6th grader who bullies him. Then he offers to step in and help if he wants. Taha refuses the help, saying it's fine, but he asks the man to stop by his school at noon when he's not busy. He then explains that he needs him to tell his mother how he wins. Back in the present, Taha faces Junsu with 2 blades in his hands. Junsu comments that he shatters any blade he can get his hands on. Taha charges, accusing him of daring to use the same technique on him twice. Junsu blocks his punch and asks if he was testing him. Then, he lands a direct hit on the young man. Junsu observes the result of the attack. Taha remembers something and wields a new weapon. Suddenly, Junsu is hit in the shoulder. He realizes that his opponent's movements seem reckless but have a strong, calculated purpose, and they are fueled by the unwavering conviction that he will win. With the dagger in hand, Taha calls him the sworn enemy of his grandparents and parents, and declares he is here today to claim his revenge. What do you do when you can't break someone's spirit? The bully confronts him physically, and threatens him, writing insults on his desk. But the boy remains defiant, taunting the aggressor in return. The bully then goes to meet Taha in the schoolyard inside the drawn circle. A third grader, 3 years younger, was challenging him, and just accepting the fight was already humiliating. Still, he clenches his fist with the sole plan of neutralizing him with one punch. The aggressor then steps inside the circle. He charges towards Taha. The younger boy waits for him, standing still. Then, Taha kicks the sand on the ground in front of him. The move makes the aggressor slip and fall backward. A wooden plank was hidden under the sand to set the trap, and taking advantage of the fall, Taha launches a sudden attack. He aims for a weak spot that could take anyone down, and that spot was the nose. That blow alone could have been the end of it, but instead Taha picked up a rock he had prepared, and began to decisively overpower the boy. He did this to ensure he would never be bullied again, and so that neither he nor his family would have to hear those insults again. Junsu watched the scene from a distance. Having seen what happened, he reported to Taha's parents that the boy defended himself remarkably well. Back in the present, Taha looks up from the floor. Junsu then attacks with a slash of his blade. The move cuts through a marble pillar. The blade sliced through the pillar as if it were paper, but what surprises him is something else. He notices the weapon doesn't seem to dull, no matter the wear. The young master's skills could give other knives a similar cut, but the sharpness of this one was remarkable. But Junsu grabs and twists him, saying he aimed too low. Taha looks up while on the ground. Then he supports himself and uses his leg to trip Junsu, who recognizes the technique as Aikido. Junsu advances towards him again, and says he still remembers when the young master was little, but Taha defends against the kick. He then recognizes the Korean martial art technique as Kong Sudo. Junsu comments that with meticulous planning, patience, and determination, he secured his victory, and states that day at school is etched in his mind and still makes him laugh. He then questions if, against him, his strategy is really to use a single blade. A second weapon appears on Taya's back. Junsu asks if, after 17 years of planning, this is all he has to show. He continues, questioning if Taya thought he could run things here after a taste of the underworld life. Next, he questions if he truly believed that this level of planning and strength would be enough. Then, he hits him with a punch that shatters a pillar, asking if that would be enough to defeat him. Taya is thrown forcefully against the wall. Junsu turns away after the impact, but suddenly spikes hit him from all sides. He's surprised by the unexpected attack. Then, he looks back and wonders when that happened. Lying on the floor, Taya says that's right, and that every now and then you meet someone like that. He continues, explaining that these people have strength, skill, and talent and are called God's favorites. In a flashback, a younger Taya includes himself in this group, claiming to be a prodigy. He then asks if he could win even against those who are in a league of their own. Regina Salerno, the underboss of the Salerno family, replies that he can because he is her pupil. Regina asks him what he's doing and tells him to get up. He struggles to get back on his feet. She then asks if he plans on staying on the ground during a real fight. Taya gets up and asks if he really has a chance against them by training like this. Regina just gives a slight smile. He asks her about people who are in a league of their own. Then she hits him with a large hammer. The impact throws him hard against a tree. She warns him that he can't expect to win if all he does is take a beating. Lying on the ground, he asks if her toy hammer is made of steel, and she confirms that it is. The night continues in the forest. Sitting together, Regina explains that from what she can tell, he has exceptional fast-twitch muscle fibers. Taya asks her what fast-twitch muscle fibers are. She explains that muscles are divided into red and white fibers, and the red, or slow twitch, fibers are for endurance. The white fibers, or fast twitch, are made for short bursts of energy, like in sprints. Regina concludes that with his fast twitch dominance and long legs, using speed as a weapon is his best bet. Taya replies that they already knew that, which is why they chose knives as their primary weapon. But he also knows that speed alone isn't enough to survive in that field. So he asks her if, even being faster than most, he wouldn't just be a joke to anyone at her level. He grabs his shirt, stating that he's still not good enough and can't go back to Korea like this. He continues, explaining that he has no information on Junsu, the president's bodyguard, or on his techniques or training. The only thing known about him is that he's undefeated, so Taya needs more information to face him. Regina scolds him for calling her master, reminding him they're family and he doesn't need to be so formal. She insists he call her Sis, and Taya, surprised, just asks her to stop, but she tells him to say the word as she advances with a knife in hand. He then runs away from her at high speed and jumps into the water to escape the attack. Getting out of the river, he asks if she really meant to attack him with a real knife. Regina just watches him from the riverbank. Then she puts the knife back in her belt. Sitting in the water, Regina says he really doesn't get it. She points out that he can never dodge her attacks with a toy hammer, but the moment it becomes a knife, he does it like it's nothing. She then states that he'll never improve unless he faces real danger. Since that day, he became someone who can only act when the situation is extremely dangerous. She advises him to fight with all his strength every time if he truly wants to improve. Her voice echoes, telling him to forget the small skirmishes, as only high-stakes battles will push him forward as long as he isn't defeated. Taha then remembers that this is his only path forward. On another floor, a bald man tells his opponent it's the end of the line. He's then hit by a powerful blow to the face. The bald man stumbles back from the force of the impact. His adversary prepares to attack again. He then hits him with a series of powerful blows. The attacker's face gets bruised during the clash. The bald man can barely react to the force of the blows. With one last hit, he yells that there's not a chance. The bald man is thrown against the wall. His opponent turns and shouts for the boss. The man approaches and asks if he's okay, and the boss replies that yes, he's fine. He comments that their opponent is a brute with simple techniques, but with unbelievable strength and endurance. The bald man retorts that he's also a brute who's all muscle. Then he shouts for the Yongmu division, questioning the delay. A voice replies that the containment barrier has them confined there. On the communicator, Wei calls for Guangsu. In the control room, a woman reports that they've just taken the location. She adds that they also lowered barriers to block armed forces coming down from the 8th floor. Gui says that's a relief, but the situation there is still tense, and asks where the young master is. The woman asks for a second to check and asks her colleague about Taya's location. Wei wonders why he would be fighting an old, white-haired man on the 11th floor. Ledger questions what it means that the young master is fighting Junsu alone. The woman in the control room asks who the captain is and tells them to calm down, as he went out to rescue the young master. The woman in the control room tries to describe the captain, mentioning his mustache. Then she looks at the security monitors in front of her. On one of the screens, a woman is restrained and suspended in the air. The operator can barely believe what she's seeing. She then calls her by name, Lady Heron. Over the communicator, a voice asks if Heron can hear her. In response, the woman in the control room hears the prisoner ask who she is. The operator introduces herself as Suri, explaining she saw her from the control room, but isn't sure if Heron remembers her. Heron then questions how she dares to pretend she's part of her house to pass as one of them, without even knowing who Suri is. Suri quickly denies it, explaining that they met a long time ago. She continues, revealing she was in training to be the successor to Chief Gaexian before she ran away. Suddenly, Wui interrupts the conversation. He remembers her as the girl who broke the persimmon tree and fled under difficult circumstances. He then assumes that's why she knows Taha, since he was previously in the Jiangxiu district. Heron thanks her for trying to help, but states that Suri isn't strong enough for this situation. She then reveals that the creature Junsu prepared as his special trump card is already on its way. The operator concludes that there's nothing they can do, but Heron asks for a favor, to take a message to the head of the main house as quickly as possible. In another hallway, Ledger and his men fire their weapons, wondering what's happening. Ledger complains to Gui, outraged that the young master is fighting Junsu alone, which was the whole point of their efforts. Gui just stares down the hallway in front of him. Gui states this isn't about victory or defeat, but a long-awaited settling of scores, and he hadn't expected the young master to actually face Junsu alone. Suddenly, one of his men is hit. Another warns of an attack from behind. Then, Wui moves forward and neutralizes the attackers with his blade. He walks through the hall, filled with defeated adversaries, holding one of the fallen men. Ledger and Gui gather around their wounded captain on the floor. He asks about the situation, but the man replies they are outnumbered and won't last much longer. An older man approaches Guangsu, thanking him for his service so far. Gui turns to the newcomer and says their patience has finally paid off. Ledger then asks him what happened and if the young master is really with Junsu. He confirms it, saying he would handle it in 10 minutes. But Wui interferes, ordering a retreat if he doesn't return in 5 minutes. The order leaves Ledger speechless. More men are taken down by gunfire. Gui and Ledger watch the scene. Guangsu appears and questions why they took so long to arrive. One of the newcomers approaches, explaining they were delayed by barrier walls that suddenly appeared. Then, the Yongmu Corps, the unofficial armed unit of the Chianhu Group, advances with orders to stop all targets. Ledger recognizes them and questions if using full tactical gear isn't a direct violation of the committee's protocols. Wui orders Azra to escort the vice president to the main entrance, but Ledger asks about the young master upstairs. Wei reassures him, stating that he is the new master to whom they have sworn loyalty, and he adds that, of course, the young master will return victorious. Meanwhile, in his simple office upstairs, there's a map and a calendar on the wall. Taha observes the place, mentioning this is the president's office on the 36th floor, where only he and Junsu were allowed. He looks around, disappointed by the room's simplicity. The space contains only a small kitchenette and old furniture. A dispatch schedule is pinned to the wall. He wonders if it has to do with never forgetting his humble beginnings in construction. Sitting at the desk, he reflects that his grandfather was one thing, but knowing his father also used this place makes him conclude that eliminating them was the right decision. His companion suggests that now that he's seen the place, it's best for them to evacuate. Taha states the situation is too dangerous, as the black team has joined the loyalists. His companion warns him that he won't be able to protect him alone if he manages to get up there. Elsewhere, Junsu questions how Taha could possibly get up to him. One of his men reports that Heron has already been subdued and is being brought to him, doubting Taha can do anything. Back in the office, Taha asks if the implication is that he will defeat Junsu. The companion doubts that will happen, but suggests the young master could ignore the fight and go straight to the location. Taha says that's impossible because as long as Junsu controls the 11th floor lobby, not even his grandfather could get through. He then picks up a red phone, remembering his grandfather is no longer around and that it doesn't matter. Taha sits at the desk with the phone in his hand. He asks his companion if he's ever seen a phone like that, and the man says he hasn't. Taha explains that it's a rotary phone that old-timers used back in the day, and he reveals that this specific one puts him in direct contact with the 4 remaining emperors on the council. The companion watches him. Then he asks what Taha's intentions are now that he has become president. Taha tells him to think about it, explaining that his father eliminated his grandfather, and then he eliminated his own father. Taha places the phone on the desk and asks what has changed now that he's the president. He answers his own question, saying nothing has. At best, they will just continue to divide the country with the other 4 council members. The companion then questions if this means he won't join the council, but will do something else instead. He explains that to rule a country, you need wealth, knowledge, and power, and for the initial negotiations, he needs 2 key pieces. The 2 pieces are Huimin, the son of Ozong's former second-in-command, and Junsu, the man who won the faction's trust by facing their chief directly. Taha states that once he secures the loyalty of Ozong, which is pure power, the rest of the council will become irrelevant. His plan is to merge with Ozong, dismantle the council, and take full control of the country as its sole emperor. In a past scene, a young Taha appears wounded with a knife in his hand. Junsu then declares that this is the pact between him and the boy. His companion asks if the plan is to join the Ozong faction and abolish the council. She doubts they would agree, since they were the ones who removed the president from power to start the new era. On the phone, Taha states that they're a group that follows whoever shows the most strength. He then dials, suggesting that to lead them, one would have to overcome the group's chief. His companion stares at him, beginning to realize his true intention. Taha explains that Junsu never left the shadows and questions why he would use special operations to create a successor. In a past fight, damage to a pillar causes the structure around them to collapse. The young Taha advances on Junsu, both armed. They face off, ready for combat. Junsu unleashes a sequence of moves, overpowering the young man. Taha falls as his opponent watches him standing. In the present, Junsu recalls the confrontation. He acknowledges that in technique, strength, and stamina, the young master falls short, but he states that in one specific aspect, the boy consistently surpasses him. The young Taha then shoots forward in an instantaneous advance, or as Junsu prefers to call it, an extraordinary speed. He admits it's an innate talent, the one thing he can neither see nor block. Taha's weapon closes in on his opponent, but Junsu intercepts him, stating that even if his eyes can't follow the movement, he throws him over his shoulder. He then adds that he can definitely anticipate the action. The young man is slammed to the ground. Standing, Junsu declares that the legacy of martial arts is as old as human history itself. He continues, explaining that countless combat techniques were created and refined for survival and conquest, and he claims to have trained in and mastered every existing discipline, devouring the history of mankind. Taha attacks again with a kick. Junsu admits that despite everything, he still hasn't managed to gain a clear advantage over the boy. Taha ducks to the ground to dodge a swift attack. He glares at Junsu after dodging. Taha then reacts to a swift movement that passes very close to him. Taha states that luckily his hands can still move. He then prepares to attack again. Junsu stops him with a direct move. Even after all the attacks, the young master continues to advance relentlessly against him. Junsu alternates between his techniques, making sure to never use the same one twice to surprise him, and he overpowers him with another move. The young man turns on the ground after the fall. Junsu reveals he has been fighting with all his strength. He then wonders why. The young man's eyes still stare at him with such intensity. The image of an ancient spear appears. Taha lists the martial arts his opponent has mastered, like Aikido, Kung Fu, Judo, and Muay Thai. He continues the list, praising Junsu's mastery of the arts, but Taha says that he also possesses something. The scene shifts to a man leaping across a city at night. Taha reveals that to get here, he faced every master of those disciplines. His dagger falls from the air, and he questions the years Junsu dedicated to the arts. Then the young man reaches for the falling weapon, and he catches it firmly. The young man claims that this is nothing compared to what he endured, as he trained with only determination in mind and nothing to lose. Junsu realizes the dagger simply fell into his hand. He wonders if the move was calculated, realizing Taha threw it into the air on purpose. In a memory, Junsu tells the young man to remember his teachings. He advises him to never show emotion against a strong enemy and to wait until danger feels close. In the past, Junsu explains that this is the moment to strike, needing only 0.1 seconds. To show them what he's really got. In a swift move, Taha lunges upward from below and manages to break through Junsu's defense. The older man is caught off guard by the attack. Taha then declares that after a long and arduous journey, he has finally won. He remembers the Seoul Olympics, a global festival broadcast on television. On screen, white balloons filled the sky to signal the start of the festivities. But in Junsu's hometown, the sound of bulldozers drowned out the Olympic anthem. The shovel of a machine demolished the neighborhood's rubble. Under the pretext of an urban renewal project, real estate owners appeared in the neighborhood, and the neighbors who once shared food were now pitted against each other, divided between tenants and landlords. Junsu's father, who raised them alone, was found dead, the victim of an attack by thugs hired for the demolition project. His older sister comforts him, telling him not to cry. She continues, saying it's no time for tears. He explains that from an early age, his sister Soo-hyun was stronger than anyone he knew and never ranked below third in her class. He describes her as his father's pride and his own idol, who remained unyielding even in the face of poverty. When she said she would drop out of school to work, he begged her not to, as his body was the only thing he had to offer. So he started delivering newspapers at dawn and making food deliveries at night, and every night upon returning home, he would watch his sister study by candlelight until dawn. She'd comment on how people use computers to send messages far away, asking if it wasn't cool. His sister revealed that the chairman of Chianhu claimed semiconductors were the future, and so she would become an engineer to change the world. Every night she wrote about her dreams in her diary, promising to repay him one day. And for Junsu, watching her was the only thing that made his struggle worthwhile. Months later, after his sister finished her entrance exams, he used his savings to buy a cake to celebrate. But when he got home, he found the entire neighborhood in flames. He stood frozen, holding the cake, facing the destruction. A neighbor ran towards him, desperate, not knowing what to do. She explained that the thugs had set fire to everything and fled. The woman then pointed out that the fire had started at his house. Junsu let the cake box fall to the ground. Then he ran towards his home, but by the time he arrived, he found her already outside. In front of the burning house, a group of people was gathered around his fallen sister. A young Taha was on his knees beside her, apologizing over and over. He explains that a passerby had jumped into the flames to save her, pulling her out with a burned back. And he explains that, unfortunately, the young woman did not survive the fire. Then Junsu held his sister in his arms. The truth is, he knew what had been happening. He knew that while he was away, thugs and landlords had harassed his sister after school. And he also knew that she cried alone, holding on only by her sheer determination. His sister had scored high enough on the college entrance exam to get into Seoul National University. The next day, when the thugs returned with riot police, a single man charged at them. The clash was intense, resulting in many casualties and injuries. That same night, 3 real estate offices and 1 landlord were found dead amidst fires. To avoid tainting the Olympic glory, the government covered up the incident, erasing the perpetrator's identity and records, and so the young man prepared to accept his fate. In an interrogation room, he sits across from a woman. She then asks if he's awake. The woman comments that he neutralized all those men without formal training and without a single scratch. In response, he simply asks who she is. The woman introduces herself as his savior, the person who just saved his life. Junsu asks if she's a relative of a victim seeking retaliation and tells her to do as she pleases. He claims to have nothing left and tells her to just get it over with. The woman lifts his chin, questioning his certainty, and reminds him that he still hasn't found those responsible for the fire. Junsu reacts to her words. She then states that was exactly the reaction she was hoping for. The woman regrets that he isn't a girl, but explains the Olympics have her working globally. She reveals herself as a scout and offers him a new start, working abroad for 10 years. It's revealed that he was sent abroad, joining an organization of elite operatives. The organization was called Ordo Nox, a syndicate of master operatives considered one of the most dangerous in the world. There, he worked his way up to an executive position before giving up everything he owned and retiring. He returned to Korea on the condition that he would never leave again and erased his alias and all other records. 10 years had passed, and he had only one reason to come back, and that reason was to seek answers. He found out who had partnered with the government to evict them and build those new apartments. The building's facade displays the name Chianhu. Junsu stares at the building, recognizing the company name. He remembers his sister telling him that the chairman of Chianhu saw semiconductors as the future. That same night, the moon hung in the sky. He then entered the chairman's office, which was just an old, rusty container. The place was Chianhu's old construction office from its early days. Inside, he surprises a young man and calls him Taha. He tells the young man it's time to settle the score for what happened 10 years ago. But the moment the young man saw his reflection in the glass, he just expressed his relief that Junsu was alive. The young man recognizes him and begins to cry. As he turns to apologize, Junsu grabs the back of his shirt. He then discovers the burned scar on the young man's back. The memory of the boy apologizing at the fire returns. Young Taha confesses he hasn't slept peacefully since that day. He apologizes for not returning the fountain pen sooner, hoping that confronting him might bring some peace to Junsu's sister. Junsu stares at the pen. He explains that Taha told him Chianhu was negotiating the remodeling terms with the government at the time. And he continues, saying that when he visited the area, he saw the fire and was the one who pulled Junsu's sister from the flames. Taha knows that nothing he says can change what happened. He apologizes, admitting his ambition to change the world is what caused it all. The memory of his sister's words about becoming an engineer who changes the world comes to mind. Junsu grips the pen tightly. He then tells Taha to prove with that pen that he still intends to change the world. And it ends with Junsu in the past, stating that it's no time for tears. Taha accepts the pen as a sign of trust and promises he will build a company for the people. Junsu watches the scene in silence. With Taya's promise hanging in the air, he simply leaves the place. The pen was the only remaining memento of his sister, but he couldn't bring himself to take it back. The weight of his actions over the last 10 years was too deep to ignore. He knew that the moment he wrapped his fingers around that pen, his sister would reach out in his dreams and question him. In a restaurant, Junsu confirms with two men if they are Chilman and Hansik from the Insang Group. Before one of them can finish asking who he is, Junsu quickly neutralizes him. The man falls to the floor as others around wonder what's happening. Other members of the group stand up and face him, demanding to know who he is. After 10 years of training fueled by anger, he feels surprisingly empty. He then challenges them all to face him, stating that when he's done, it'll be as if they were never there. Junsu stands amidst the chaos, all his opponents down on the floor. One of the men lies defeated beside an overturned table. He then turns his face to the side. A man enters the room, explaining he stopped by because of all the commotion. He turns to Junsu and remarks that it's a surprise to find someone who can fight. The newcomer turns completely to face him. Junsu watches him in silence. The head of the Ozong faction, Dukyeol Park, asks for his name. Junsu then asks if he is their boss. With a smile, Dukyeol replies with another question, wanting to know what he would do if the answer was yes. Then, Junsu lunges forward with a punch, but the boss simply catches his fist. It was the first time someone had blocked his attack, forcing him to take a good look at his opponent. There was an intensity in his eyes he had never seen before, like a tiger in a man's body. Their fight stretched for over 40 minutes, with the subordinates just watching in silence. And for the first time, he met a man who possessed such power with his fists alone. Dukyeol Park comments that it wasn't bad at all and that it got him fired up again. Defeated on the floor, Junsu admits he lost and tells him to end it. Before anything else, Dukyeol Park says he'd love to hear his reason. The man insisted on knowing the story, and exhausted, Junsu eventually gave in and told him everything. The Insang Group, his sworn enemy, no longer existed, as most groups had been absorbed by the Ozong faction. When he told Dukyeol they were all part of the same problem, regardless of their name, the boss burst out laughing. Dukyeol then declares that it doesn't matter what they're called. What matters is that they have the power to make a real change. He continues, questioning what politicians did while people were left helpless or disappeared, while the president tried to restore a military regime. With their strength, they stopped him and dared anyone who had a problem with it. Dukyeol's voice was so loud Junsu thought his eardrums would burst, but he couldn't look away. That day, the man let him go, even though his subordinates questioned the decision and said it was a mistake. Dukyeol just states that he got his answers, and since the decision was his, everyone should shut up. Junsu looks at his own hand. After carrying out his plan, he contemplated for days before returning to Seoko and offering to be his bodyguard. Seoko is surprised and admits he's quite curious. Junsu then says he wants to see how he will build Chianhu by his side. Thus, it ends by stating that Seoko was a man of character. He was also a stubborn man with an unyielding will, but he returned the loyalty of those devoted to him. And as the company grew, a faction calling themselves the Loyalists formed by his side. Meanwhile, his own sons began to turn on each other out of jealousy. Years passed and Chianhu became a leading tech company, just as Junsu's sister had predicted. However, something in Seoko had changed and he had lost his determination. He not only ignored the corruption occurring among his men, but also completely stopped looking to the future. And the moment he faltered, those who held grudges seized the opportunity. One of his sons then announces with a smile that the board has contacted them and invited them to join. Soko, however, reacts with fury and confronts his son. He then exclaims that the moment corporations meddle in national affairs, they collapse. The memory of his sister lost in the tragic reconstruction incident of the Insang district possibly still haunted him. In secret, Junsu visited the hospital Seoko frequented, and it was there he discovered that Seoko was dealing with a terminal illness. Only then did he understand why Seoko had ignored the ongoing corruption. He didn't want to create trouble or enemies within his own ranks, all for the sake of the next successor. Sitting under a tree, Seoko laments about a financial crisis, saying they'll need to sell half the company. Junsu approaches and, when called by the chairman, responds formally. With a smile, Seiko asks if he's disappointed, saying it's a shame this is all he managed to make of Chianhu. Junsu then questions why he would say things that aren't true, stating that if this were all, he would have left him to his own devices years ago. Seiko replies that he's right, because if he gave up over a few politicians, he would never be able to face his sister. He declares he has lost money, but not faith in his people, and promises he will rebuild Chianhu from scratch. True to his word, Seiko survived the crisis and turned Chianhu into the nation's largest conglomerate, but even he was powerless against time. Soko's third son, Suhyak, was then chosen to be the next chairman. Or more precisely, the chosen one was his grandson, Taha. Seoko believed Chianhu wouldn't survive the third generation, so Suhyak was chosen as the second-generation chairman to train the third. Suhyak was the only son who resembled him in spirit and skill, and his own son also showed signs of brilliance. Their philosophy was simple: They stopped the president with their strength and dared anyone who had a problem with it. Unfortunately, Seiko's decision was hasty, as Suiyak had no way of controlling Chianhu as it deteriorated from within. The other son then approaches Junsu and invites him to join the board. He claims his father is too stuck in the past and that once on the board, Chianhu could rule the country for the next century. Junsu reassures him, saying he'll take care of everything and questions if he doesn't also want to leave his mark on the company. He then adds that the invitation came from the Ozhong faction and that their boss seemed to know him. The scene shifts to a sunny garden. Sudiak approaches Junsu and asks if there's a problem. Junsu informs him that he won't be able to accompany him on the trip, and Sudiak reminds him it was an important trip. He explains that the date coincides with the anniversary of his sister's loss. Sudiak stares at him in silence for a moment. He then understands and with a pat on the shoulder wishes Junsu a safe trip. If a place of torment truly existed, he knew he would have a special place just for him. He had already made peace with that, but even if he had condemned himself to eternal suffering, he would protect the Chianhu that his sister and Sioko dreamed of, no matter the cost. He explains that it wasn't Sioko's fault. He simply grew weak from an incurable disease. But without him, Chianhu would have crumbled. As everyone knows, there was no one else who could lead the company like Sioko did. His sons and subordinates followed him loyally, but none of them ever tried to step out of his shadow. And that becomes a problem when someone like Dukyul Park decides to take over all of Chianhu with no one to stop him. The only way to protect the company was to join the board. It had to be protected until the day it could finally stand on its own. Taya watches the scene. Junsu then attacks him with a kick. The impact throws the young man against the wall. The blow hits him hard. Taya feels the powerful impact. Junsu takes a fighting stance. The young man gets up, wondering what just happened, as he thought he blocked the attack. He then realizes that Junsu has gotten even faster. Taya dodges his opponent's next kick. Speed was the only thing Taya had on his side, but Junsu has caught up to him. With a swift blow, Junsu strikes him in the face. He then grabs him firmly. Taya retaliates with a clean counterattack. His opponent feels the force of the blow. The young man then faces him with determination, but Junsu hits him with his weapon. He then backs away as Taya reacts to the hit. Junsu states that people who fear the end are easy to control. The reason he appointed Guo as chairman wasn't because he was worthy, but because he needed to buy time until Chianhu's true successor was found, and until someone with power greater than his own finally appeared. Taya's injuries hinder his movements, and he feels the weight of the confrontation, but he ignores the pain, as this is the moment he's been waiting for. It's time to defeat his family's sworn enemy with his own hands. Taya lunges forward to attack. Junsu watches him and a laugh escapes his lips. In a memory, Guo's eldest son, Chong, questions Junsu about why he betrayed his grandfather, since it didn't seem to be for power. He then asks if just joining the board is enough and suggests they could overcome all their enemies together. Chiang was cunning, a man who had betrayed his own brother. The reason Junsu found him intriguing was that he saw an ambition in him that wouldn't be satisfied by just joining the board. Chiang's bold proposal made him wonder if he might be the necessary force that Chianhu needed. He then turns a laptop towards Junsu, saying he found something interesting. Thanks to the yacht incident where his father sent him into a trap, he managed to obtain valuable information. A helicopter recording shows that Taya appears to be alive. Chiang reveals that according to rumors, the Salerno family, an Italian organization, rescued him. He then suggests that Junsu might want to take care of the boy since him being alive also means trouble. Junsu just gives a slight smile. He replies to leave him alone, stating that the Salerno family doesn't treat outsiders well and will stop him first. Back in the present, he concludes that he will be defeated soon. Junsu attacks with a well-aimed kick. Taya responds with an unexpected attack, and then strikes him from behind. The blow is decisive, and his opponent falls. In a memory, Chiang informs Junsu that Taya is alive and is now a dangerous agent. He then proposes using him to take down his father and pin the blame on him. And after the job was done, Junsu was to neutralize Taya himself. On the plane, Chiang asks an associate if everything is ready, and he confirms the devices will be activated mid-air. He explains that Junsu didn't defeat him but left him in a dangerous situation, as it was the most he could do. He knew that if the boy was the true successor, he would escape the danger. Back in the present, Junsu reacts to the decisive blow. He looks at his opponent. Taya's face shows the signs of battle. He soon explains that he doesn't fear the end as his life has not been in vain. He finishes by saying that it seems Sioko's relative has inherited all of his brilliance. With a determination for justice far greater than his own, he endured great hardship in a distant land before finding his way back. Now no force in this world can stop him as he moves forward without fear. Junsu then tells Sioko that he has won. He created something his old master never could. In a memory, he stands among the trees. He then looks up and smiles faintly. A child carrying Sioko's brilliance has walked a path similar to his own, and with the end for them both, Chianhu is finally complete. The confrontation comes to its end on the ground, concluding that his time has come to finally face his destiny and seek redemption. It's revealed that Junsu finally understood Sioko in his final moment. The day his sister was lost in a fire marked a turning point for them both. but the silent promises they made to themselves couldn't have been more different. The memory of Junsu saying it was the anniversary of his sister's death comes to mind. He then questions whether Subiak knew about the lie back then, or if he was truly deceived. If he knew, his weakness is to blame, but if he was caught off guard, the fault is his alone for becoming complacent. At a meeting, Taha holds up a fountain pen and asks if anyone recognizes it. The one who inherited the chairman's pen would become the next in charge. There was no way Suyo could have been caught by surprise. Even if he didn't foresee the betrayal, he must have already been disappointed in Junsu. Just as he judged Suyak, it seems he was also judged and deemed unworthy of receiving that pen back. Suhyok simply says that's how business works, with rigorous personnel evaluations every day. He then challenges him to show the future he has left for the company. Junsu is defeated and his body falls to the floor. His lifeless eyes remain open in the middle of the grand hall. Taha says they are probably waiting for him downstairs, but he's severely injured. In the lobby, heavily armed soldiers clash with Guangsu's men. He complains that his opponents being so well equipped is just unfair. Bui looks at his watch. Then, Bui orders his men to retreat. A subordinate warns that the young master hasn't returned yet, but he insists it's too late. Bui states that 11 minutes have passed since the agreed upon time, and they need to save the men they have left. Seeing the retreat, Guangsu orders his own men to advance. An elevator door opens. Ledger steps out from inside. Wounded, Taha senses someone approaching and tries to force his body to move. A shadow falls over him. He looks up at the figure and begins to say who he is. One of Gui's men grabs Wui, insisting they hold their position, but he shouts that it's enough. Wui yells that the mission has failed, that he was defeated, and that the moment Junsu walks through those doors, a red-haired man carries Ledger, complaining about the chaotic situation. Wui is surprised to see Wui, asking when he got there. Ledger calls for help, claiming he saw everything from start to finish. He then announces to everyone that Junsu has been defeated, and that it was Taha who beat him. Gui and Wui react to the news. Guangsu also shows his disbelief. Gui's men cry out in despair over their master's defeat. Taha remains standing in the confrontation hall near Junsu. Ledger watches him from a distance. Junsu lies on the floor, his eyes still open. Ledger looks confused for a moment. With his face obscured, he straightens his tie and wonders if he's free. He continues the gesture, questioning if he's finally free. Junsu's eyes finally close. Ledger then approaches Junsu and looks down at him with contempt. He then bites his thumb and smiles. In the lobby, Suri gathers with the others near a van and tells them to go. She asks if the man being carried was defeated, and her companion confirms he's still breathing, but that they need to get out of there. Wui then tells them to go on ahead, stating he will stay behind to hold off the enemies. He explains that since he doubted the young master, he will do this himself to buy them some time. But Gui pulls him back, telling him to stop with the heroics and just go. He then slams the van door, stating that Wui needs to stay and serve the young master. Gui turns to face the danger and yells for them to leave, entrusting Chianhu to them all. Suri and the red-haired man call out his name. The man carries Ledger and shouts for them to run. A memory shows Bui being welcomed by a man who mentions Junsu's recommendation. Gui recalls that they both had a difficult journey from the slums of the Insang district to Chianhu. As they escape, one of the men questions if they'll be okay, as they'll be caught in no time. A white car screeches to a halt beside them. From inside the vehicle, a man says the situation looks dire and tells them to put the injured man in the car as they will help. Suri and the red-haired man wonder if he's an enemy. The man in the car states that the damage is done, and if he is defeated now, Chianhu will deceive the council with lies. Japal Kim, the vice chief of the Ozong faction, assures them with a smile that he never makes losing bets. In an office, Ozra is on a call and says she understands. She then turns and confirms to her boss that it's true, Taha really did beat him. Her boss's hand smashes the phone on the desk. He then reacts with fury, screaming Taha's name. Elsewhere, the facade of a restaurant called Bowman Gukbap is shown. Inside, a voice states that for now they've done what they could. Taha is lying on a bed, recovering from a serious injury, but his life is not in danger. A man in a suit expresses his relief, while the doctor remarks that it hasn't been long since their last visit. He then suggests they take the patient to a real hospital, instead of leaving him with a doctor at an unofficial location. But Japal Kim explains they can't, as the Ozong faction could be accused of involvement in the Chianhu incident. The doctor scoffs at the situation, asking since when do thugs care about politics. Japal replies that if they don't use their brains, they'll suffer great losses, which is why he came to the Beast's Den. He then offers him the position of chief professor of surgery at Gashian University, which will soon be vacant. The doctor tells him to leave, stating he prefers to save lives as a hobby. Japal Kim simply adjusts his glasses and tells him to take care. Then, he turns and walks out the door. Outside, Suyak and his men ask how the patient is doing. He informs them that, fortunately, the condition isn't critical and Taha just needs some rest. Japal says his goodbyes, telling them to go inside as he's already leaving. Before he leaves, Japal Kim asks them to tell Taha to meet with him for another talk when he wakes up. Sahyak and his men watch his car drive away down the street. One of them asks if Taha really woke up, but Suyak doesn't answer. Inside the car, Japal Kim gathers his thoughts on the recent events. He recalls Taha mentioning the upcoming Chianhu board meeting. After all, Taha is the rightful heir of Chianhu and the grandson of the late chairman Taha Jinn. Jaipal knew he was an extraordinary fighter from overseas, but not that he was Chianhu royalty. His remarkable eloquence and negotiation skills are clearly in his bloodline. Now, Taha not only has the loyalists on his side, but also the man who defeated Pitcher and Guanghu. And on top of all that, there's one more crucial factor. He defeated Junsu in the heart of Chianhu's territory. Taha is not only excellent at martial arts, but he's also intelligent. If he decides to challenge Chiang for the presidency, he'll take everything. With that in mind, he wonders if they should just eliminate him. He then picks up his phone, identifies himself as the chief, and demands an immediate meeting with the executives. Back at the restaurant, Soo-hyuk tells his men they need to get out of there as soon as possible. One of the men asks what Soo-hyuk is talking about, pointing to the young master's condition. He explains that Ozong runs 30 hospitals in Seoul and asks why they brought him to a traditional restaurant. Suddenly, one of his companions punches him in the face. Soo-hyuk then states they are in a gray area and will be discarded the moment they're deemed useless. The assaulted man asks what his point is and if the plan is to just carry an unconscious Taha around. But Soo-hyuk says Vice President Yang will contact them soon and suggests they wait until then. He then holds up a flash drive and asks if they know what it is. He reveals that it's security footage from the control room on Chiansu's first basement level. The device contains all recordings from the last month, from the 38th floor down to the 6th basement level. His companion still asks him what he can do with that. Soo-hyuk reveals he's a data broker who sells raw information, which can be traded for anything. Elsewhere, a train moves along the tracks. Inside a crowded car, a young man is standing. Guanghu Yang, the vice president of Chianhu, tells a man to straighten up as they are in public. The man just laughs and asks if Guanghu's legs are already giving him trouble. Min Chang-hyo, vice president of the Dobang Association, taunts Guanghu, asking if it's his first time on the subway since he always sees him in luxury cars. Guanghu tells him to just say what he wants and leave, as the next stop is Sindorim. He then begs for help, insisting that the young master needs to take over as chairman. Min Chang scoffs, asking if he's really the Guanghu he knows or if he's just gotten too old to think straight. He adds that if he came to beg for favors, the least he can do is compensate pitcher and batter first. Guanghu offers 300 million won for each of them, plus $1 billion to cover the commission fee. But Min Chang simply tells him to get lost, saying he's going to take a nap. Guanghu then offers to help remove his chairman, reminding him that Min Chang still covets the position. Suddenly, Guanghu's men and other passengers in the car reveal themselves, ready for a confrontation. He then asks Min Chang not to say such scary things. Min Chang lowers his glasses and questions what's making them so brave. The scene shifts to a rural area in North Gyeongsang province at night. A young woman in glasses prepares for action. Suspended by wires, a board member of the Yeon clan wonders who would have the audacity to seek her out. On the roof, Bakcheong Yeon, the clan's chief, says that her dear former disciple has returned to pay for her past mistakes. The suspended woman tells the other to stop stalling and open the door. The scene is set in Wonwado, the foundational training ground of the Yeon clan. A voice offers a tea made from tukujeon leaves, harvested in early spring in Hadong, claiming it has the finest flavor. Baekjeong Yeon assures her that after one sip, Suri will never go back to the cheap coffee found on the streets. But Suri Yoon, the former head of Yaburi Sang, says there's no time. She needs to speak with the clan leader, as Ms. Heron specifically instructed her. The Yeon clan chief, Bakcheong Yeon, finds it hard to believe that a third-rank officer like Heron was defeated and imprisoned by Chiansu. She then speculates that perhaps Heron didn't bring her sword because of the board meeting, since the young woman can barely live without it. Suri replies that she wouldn't know, as she only saw her through the control room's camera feed. Baekjeong sets down her cup and dismisses the mission to help a man named Taha as foolish. A young officer then says he will hear the message and judge whether to deliver it to the clan leader, and tells her to speak. Suri interrupts him, stating she was clear that she must speak personally with the chief. He warns her that he's not in the mood for games and tells her to speak before he forces her to. The officer explains that if she were truly under Heron's orders, she would know that protocol requires her to speak with him first. He accuses her of lying and demands she stop stalling and speak at once. Suri Yoon stares at him in silence. In a flashback, she asks if she should really speak to the clan leader, and the answer she receives is a simple yes. Heron instructed her that the matter was of utmost importance and not to speak with anyone below the third rank on the main estate. She also told her to ask for Baekjeong, assuring her that the clan leader would come if it was her calling. But her attempt to pressure him wasn't working as expected, so Suri gives in and decides to deliver the message. The status of Seobil have fallen. The officer questions her if Heron really said those words. Suri confirms, asking how she could possibly mistake something so short and direct. He then understands that the message means there has been a coup. The officer says he will inform the clan leader and dismisses her so she can rest. Suri remains silent, watching him. She then realizes he never intended to let her leave. He confirms this, asking if she really believed she had left that house forever. For over 1,000 years, only Yeon clan members could enter this place. He reveals that he just waited, tolerating her youthful rebellion as it was the only reason to keep a defector alive. The officer tells her to come inside and reminds her that the formal address begins the next day. Suri then agrees but states she has some conditions in return. The officer questions if she is kidding. She demands permission to visit her father twice a week and that when the time comes, he helped Taha at least once. And she clarifies that the request is not for a Yeon clan member, but for her master. He decides to ignore the absurdity of the situation for now, but asks why she is so insistent on helping him. She replies that Taha saved her father in her hometown and she's not shameless enough to not repay a debt. He calls her unbearably smug and asks why he would help with her personal matters, since she's not even a 5th-rank officer. Suri just smiles and tells him not to be so difficult, as she knows he'll help her anyway. He then questions why he would do that. She states that it's because he needs her, and then she looks him in the eye and asks if that isn't true. After a moment of silence, he stands up and tells her to come with him. The full moon shines in the night sky. As they walk through the courtyard, he comments that it's been a while. In the training yard, 2 clan members are sparring with staves. 2 young clan members greet the chief enthusiastically. Baekjeong approaches and remarks that it's quite late, asking if they are all right. She then dismisses them to get back to what they were doing, and they promptly obey. Suri watches the interaction in silence. Baekjeong explains that scouts find children with exceptional potential and bring them to the Yeon clan. They are raised in Wanwado, and if their combat skills stand out, they join the Western Division. But if their intellect prevails, they start as 5th-rank officers in the Eastern Division and serve in administration or diplomacy. Only those who possess the trinity of beauty, strength, and intellect can join the clan, which is why they are trained from a young age. She reveals that, however, she joined that house at 17, and that the clan leader herself came to get her personally, something that hadn't happened in 50 years, and someone like her chose to bring Suri there when she was 19. Back in the courtyard, one of the young trainees is struck by a blow. The impact sends him flying backward. The other clan members are startled by the scene, calling out for the chief. Suri yells Baekjeong's name, questioning what she thinks she's doing. The clan chief simply states that talent is a gift from the heavens, and that one blessed soul is capable of leading millions. Baekjeong reminds her that she questioned whether she was wanted, and reveals that to have her, she would give up all those children without a second thought. She then tells Suri to get her gear as she remembers this exercise. Suri understands the task. There are 8 knots in total. If a knot comes undone or if she hesitates, the children will be in grave danger. Baekjeong states that if her talent hasn't faded, she might consider her conditions. Suri defies her, calling her an evil woman. A few days later, the scene returns to the Bowman Gukbap restaurant. Soo-hyuk presents a new menu item made with Panama geisha beans, featuring a strong jasmine aroma and subtle acidity. He and the doctor then reveal that it's an iced Americano served in a hot bowl, topped with ice cubes. Taha reacts with wide eyes. Lying in bed, he wakes up wondering what that was. On television, a news report announces that the newly appointed chairman of Chianhu, Taha Jinn, is about to give his inaugural address. Now at the table with the others, Soo-hyuk asks Taha how he's feeling. He replies that he's not well at all, and just like that, Taha is back. Taha Jinn begins his speech to the 110,000 members of the Chianhu family. He declares that today they stand on the brink of a major transformation within the organization. Following in the footsteps of the great founder, he states that carrying the weight of his predecessors is not a task he takes lightly. And just as they stood firm against adversity to build Chianhu, so will he. With his youthful vigor, he promises to lead the company into a new era. Until Chianhu becomes a leading company on the global stage, he and his family will never falter in the face of threats and acts of terrorism. For no matter how deep the darkness becomes, the light of Chianhu will never be extinguished. Back at the restaurant, one of the men comments that it sounds more like a war speech than a corporate address. Wui explains that Chiang is trying to unite them, since the top executives are gone and Junsu is dead. Taha then asks about Guangsu. He wants to know if there are any updates on him. Soo-hyuk reports they are still searching, but his whereabouts are unknown. Taha requests that at the very least, they find his body. Soo-hyuk then reveals that while he was recovering, Vice Chairman Yang issued a directive. The order was clear. To make the young master chairman, they need the board's support. Without the backing of those who control the country, taking the chairmanship means nothing. The vice chairman went personally to ask for help from the Dobang Association, with whom he had personal ties. And Suri went to the Yeon clan of Changju to seek support. Taha asks if Suri really went to the Yeon clan, and Soo-hyuk confirms that's where she learned her string techniques. He explains she's on a dual mission, informing them that Chianhu has one of their own captive and asking for help. Wei then adds that Japil from the Ozong faction asked them to pass on a message. He would like to share a cigar with Taha again. Taha ponders the Dobang Association, the Yeon family of Changju, and the Ozong faction, hoping everything goes smoothly. But he knows it won't be easy, especially with the Ozong faction, considering how Chiang tried to frame them. He then stands up and decides he will meet the Ozong faction personally, leaving Soo-hyuk surprised by his urgency. The doctor appears and asks if he's ever going to rest, warning that even a small fall could be fatal in his condition. Wei also warns him, saying there's a good chance it's a trap, as the Ozong faction gains nothing by helping them. Taha simply turns and starts to walk away, saying that during his time in that organization, he learned that having confidence and courage is half the battle when facing an opponent, and more importantly, you must always believe in yourself. Already dressed to leave, Taha says that if they've decided to support him, then they must have faith in him. At night, the facade of the Solvier Cigar Lounge is shown. Taha and Vui arrive in an alley where two men are already waiting for them. One of them approaches and confirms Taya's identity. Mansu Kang, number 12 of the Ozong faction, introduces himself and asks them to follow him, but Taha states he was supposed to meet someone there. Suddenly, several men surround them and Mansu informs them there's been a change of location. He then suggests Taha listen while they're still being nice, as he'd hate to force him to cooperate in his condition. Jinggu Yang, the faction's number 19, warns that if they resist, the order is to take them down permanently. Taha just observes that the two are strong opponents. Through the lounge door, cigar smoke is visible. He then comments that someone is already inside, and he asks Vui to wait a moment, as he'd like to have a brief discussion with them. He flexes his gloved hand and says he seriously hates people who don't respect others. Mansu stretches and asks if he heard what was said. Mansu reacts in surprise as someone rushes past him. Suddenly, one of Taya's men quickly restrains him and warns him not to move. He warns him that any resistance will bring serious consequences. Mansu wonders when he got there. Meanwhile, Vui drags his feet on the ground, getting ready. Jinggu Yang says if that's his choice, so be it, and charges forward to attack. But one of Wui's bodyguards intercepts the blow. He then hurls Jinggu Yang away with the impact. The bodyguard shouts that he warned the young master it was a trap. Vui remembers Taya's words. If they decided to support him, they should have faith in him. He then recognizes that this man is his true master. His men take care of the remaining faction members while Vui says his goodbyes, saying he'll see them after their meetings. Taha then turns and opens the lounge door. He enters the establishment. Inside, he faces the one waiting for him. Taha blinks and asks if he hadn't warned him. He says there was no reason to test him, as he couldn't have defeated Junsu if he weren't the real deal. Inside, Duckheel Park invites him to sit down. He then introduces himself as the head of the Ozong faction. The attendant greets him and says he has prepared the same cigar as last time. But Taha points to another and says he'll have that one today. He then walks toward the sofa. Jaepil Kim apologizes, explaining the little commotion was necessary to make the meeting look like a coincidence. Taha simply tells him to cut the crap. He then lights his cigar and suggests Jaepil go for a walk. Duckeel Park lets out a laugh. Now seated, Taha, the official heir of Chianhu, says the adults would like to talk for a bit.